Meet Li Ye, a veteran interdimensional miner forced to gamble with his life. Every single day, he seals himself inside a heavy radiation suit, descending into the abyss just to harvest energy stones. A coworker clapped his shoulder, bragging that this month's quota looked good. At this rate, Ye might finally clear his parents' crushing blood debt in just a year or so. The coworker laughed, adding that if Ye threw his life away for another 3 to 5 years, he might even scrape together enough cash for a tiny, run-down apartment. Ye forced a dead smile, simply nodding and promising to keep working hard. But internally, his blood boiled. He cursed these heartless capitalist leeches. The very second that debt hit zero, he was gone forever. Slave away for another half-decade? Not a chance in hell. In his mind, those greedy executives could rot in the mines themselves. Prolonged exposure to interdimensional radiation gave ordinary humans a pathetic 1 in 1,000 chance to awaken. But for the rest, it was a guaranteed, agonizing death sentence. Let us be real. If they were not choked by absolute despair, not a single soul would willingly wear these hazmat suits and step into this hellish dimension. As the transport vehicle rumbled forward, the 2 men sitting in front of Ye started running their mouths. They whispered about the tragic kid whose parents were killed in a catastrophic accident 3 years ago. Not only did the corporation deny him a single cent of compensation, but they also twisted the knife, forcing a massive debt onto an orphaned teenager. One worker shook his head in pity. He recalled how the ruthless NG Corporation pinned a $1 million disaster entirely on Ye's dead parents. But the other man scoffed. He spat that pity was useless in a world where weakness is a sin. If it were him, he claimed, he would have fought tooth and nail until the corporation bled cash. His buddy chuckled darkly, joking that he expected the guy to demand blood for blood, not just paper money. The man sneered, stating that dead people cannot spend vengeance. You might as well squeeze the tragedy for all the cash it is worth. Ye heard every single venomous word. They called him weak. But as his eyes darkened, he knew the truth. Sometimes, a man is not powerless because he lacks strength, but because the entire world has gone absolutely insane. The transport finally screeched to a halt. It was time to descend into the nightmare and get to work. Suddenly, the cavern violently convulsed. The ground roared, making everyone think the ceiling was about to collapse in a massive cave-in. One miner mocked the others for screaming over a tiny tremor. But a terrified worker shot back, shivering as he yelled that earthquakes literally do not exist in other dimensions. Panic spread like wildfire. A veteran miner backed away, swearing he had never felt a quake in all his years of zone dives. A horrifying thought set in. Was this caused by a monster? Voices trembled in the dark. Someone begged to abandon the dig, terrified by ancient rumors that interdimensional humanoids used to hunt in these very tunnels. Those humanoid horrors were absolute nightmares, far more devastating than the mindless beast or insectoid swarms. The crew unanimously agreed to drop their gear and run, but the arrogant supervisor barked at them to shut their mouths. He aggressively reminded the terrified crew that an elite awakened hunter had completely wiped this zone 3 years ago. Humanoids returning was impossible. His eyes flared with malice, threatening to severely punish anyone who dared to speak another word of retreat. But before the threat even left his lips, a sickening crunch echoed through the cave. The crew watched in absolute horror as a razor-sharp claw erupted from the supervisor's chest. Our main character's blood ran cold. The supervisor hacked up a fountain of dark blood, collapsing to reveal the apex predator. The interdimensional humanoid had arrived. Absolute slaughter erupted. The miners scattered like frightened rats as the humanoid nightmare tore into them. Ye sprinted for his life, his mind racing. The portal exit was over 10 kilometers away. A sickening dread swallowed his heart. Escaping on foot was a fool's dream. This monster was completely beyond the realm of ordinary humans. Suddenly, a massive impact. A dying colleague was violently hurled through the air, smashing directly into Ye's back. They both slammed into a jagged boulder. Ye hacked up violently from the blinding pain. As his vision cleared, he saw the surviving crew already revving the escape truck. He screamed out, desperately begging them not to leave him behind. But the engine roared, and the truck sped away into the dark. A fatal mistake. The interdimensional horror leaped into the air, crashing onto the truck's roof with earth-shattering force. Its monstrous claws shredded the steel cabin, ripping the driver and passenger into the dark as the massive vehicle flipped over. Yi pressed himself into the shadows, his breath hitching. He realized the monster was completely fixated on the loud, fleeing vehicle. Suddenly, a blinding flash, the overturned truck violently exploded into a massive fireball. Yi watched in pure shock as the humanoid was engulfed in the blast, shrieking in absolute agony. A revelation struck him like lightning. The ultimate apex predator had a fatal weakness. It was terrified of fire. Ye locked eyes on a blazing chunk of wood nearby. It was a massive gamble, but it was his only shot at survival. From the corner of his eye, another humanoid lunged from the shadows. Yi did not hesitate. He threw his body forward, diving straight for the burning debris. Gripping the scorching wood, he swung the makeshift torch wildly in front of the lunging beast, praying to the heavens that the flames would drive it back. It worked! The terrifying creature shrieked, violently flinching away from the searing heat. Ye screamed to the remaining survivors, revealing the monster's only vulnerability. Fire! 10 years ago, the sky shattered. Mysterious dimensional gates violently tore open across the entire globe. Nightmarish swarms of insectoids, bloodthirsty beasts, and humanoid horrors poured out, turning Earth into a slaughterhouse. Humanity's only hope was the awakened. Elite individuals whose DNA had violently mutated from radiation, granting them godlike combat powers. These awakened saviors did not just fight back the apocalypse and seal the gates. They forged a brand new era, turning these deadly dimensions into infinite energy mines for human consumption. But let us face the harsh reality. These desperate miners digging in the dark were not godlike awakened beings. They were the absolute bottom feeders, ordinary humans who had to sacrifice blood, sweat, and tears just to buy another day of miserable survival in this broken world. And against the true horrors lurking inside the gates, they were nothing but fragile prey, lacking even the basic strength to run away. Desperation took over. The surviving miners frantically scavenged anything that could burn, desperately wielding makeshift torches to keep the encroaching horrors at bay. Sweat poured down one man's terrified face as he stared at his flickering torch. He panicked, realizing the flames would completely die out in a matter of minutes. Ye's eyes darted through the gloom. He commanded the crew to head for the storage room, revealing there was a stockpile of gasoline inside. If they could ignite a massive wall of fire at the entrance, they might just survive long enough for a rescue team. Back to back, torches raised, the desperate circle of humans began their agonizing retreat into the dark. Adrenaline pumped through their veins as they closed in on the gasoline drums. Every second felt like a lifetime. Pour it at the entrance. Now! Yi roared over the chaos. Without hesitation, they kicked the barrels over, tossing their blazing torches to ignite a wall of salvation. The flames erupted instantly, swallowing the foot of an approaching interdimensional beast. The nightmarish creature shrieked as the roaring fire pushed it back into the abyss. An elderly miner collapsed beside Ye, his voice trembling with profound gratitude. If not for your quick thinking, we would all be monster food by now. The survivors swore an oath of absolute loyalty, promising to repay this life debt whenever he called upon them. But right then, a chilling presence lurking in the shadows caught Ye's attention. Looming in the darkness was an ancient, massive statue. One of the trembling miners whispered that this colossal relic had been unearthed from the deepest, darkest pits of the mine. Supervisor Wong was clearly plotting to smuggle this treasure, hoping to make an absolute fortune on the underground black market. That completely explained why this mysterious artifact was hidden down here. This thing radiates centuries of dark history, Yi muttered. Suddenly, the sharp crackle of a radio shattered the heavy silence. A massive wave of relief washed over the desperate crew. They frantically screamed their coordinates into the mic. Sector 7 had been completely overrun by interdimensional horrors, and they needed immediate life-saving extraction. The cold, mechanical voice of headquarters echoed back through the static. Their distress signal was received, but heavy rescue teams were at least 2 agonizing hours away. They pleaded for a miracle. They begged for a faster response. But the lifeline abruptly died, leaving only the chilling sound of dead static in the dark. Absolute terror gripped their hearts in a vice. Their fragile protective suits only held 90 minutes of life-saving power. Grown men began to weep, utterly desperate to return to the wives and children waiting for them back home. The toxic poison of regret filled the air. One miner cursed his own cowardice for not making a suicidal dash for the exit in the truck, even if only a single soul survived the run. Anything was better than sitting in the dark, waiting for the grim reaper. Yi anxiously glanced at his own depleting energy gauge. He silently prayed to the heavens that a miracle would arrive before his suit failed. But the atmosphere suddenly turned incredibly venomous. A desperate coworker stepped forward with a ruthless, cold-blooded declaration. Since their power was failing, human blood had to be shed for the greater good. His twisted, selfish logic demanded a brutal sacrifice. The weak, the elderly, and the absolute nobodies needed to surrender their lives so the strong could survive. The traitor's malicious gaze locked dead onto Ye. He cruelly pointed out that Ye was a worthless orphan, chained down by a mountain of crushing, inescapable debt. Your existence is nothing but pure suffering anyway, the coward spat. He demanded Ye hand over his life-saving battery. Without warning, a heavy wooden plank slammed into Ye's body, violently daring the helpless young man to strike back. Agony flared through his nerves as Ye crashed heavily to his knees. The towering bullies completely surrounded him, mocking his weakness and challenging him to fight destiny. A brutal hand wrapped tight around Ye's throat, choking the very life from him. The attacker laughed, claiming that deadly radiation exposure might force a legendary awakening. I am doing you a massive favor, trash, he sneered. Another thug laughed along with the madness, joking that Ye would magically transform into the supreme savior they needed. Gasping for breath, Ye desperately crawled across the dirt to reach his fallen safety mask. If I survive this, Yi choked out, his eyes burning with absolute murder. You will be the very first ones I butcher. But his venomous threats were met with cruel laughter as they ruthlessly ripped the power battery from his suit. Having completely stripped Ye of his lifeline, the hyenas immediately turned their greedy eyes to hunt the next victim. Absolute panic erupted. A terrified miner violently shoved two others forward as sacrificial lambs. The cornered man bolted, with the enraged bullies hot on his heels. He scrambled onto the massive transport truck like a madman. If I am going down, I am dragging all of you to hell with me, he roared into the dark. The powerful engine roared to life with a deafening screech. The sudden, violent jolt sent the massive, ancient statue tipping over the edge, crashing down onto the cavern floor with terrifying force. Absolute chaos was unleashed. The remaining miners sprinted after the rogue truck, screaming in pure, unadulterated panic. If that metal beast shattered their protective wall of fire, it was game over for everyone. But their absolute worst nightmare became reality. The truck smashed right through their blazing barricade. A relentless flood of nightmarish horrors instantly poured into the cavern, leaving the helpless Yi completely abandoned in the dirt. The colossal stone relic slammed into the earth right before his fading eyes. As our boy stared into its ancient face, a chilling thought struck his mind. Was this lifeless stone actually laughing at his miserable fate? In the flickering firelight, the chilling truth was revealed. This relic wore a twisted, sinister grin on its stone face. The terrifying aura it radiated gave off absolute solo-leveling boss vibes, sending shivers straight down the spine. But there was zero time to process the horror. A grotesque interdimensional beast violently leaped over the cursed relic, extending its razor-sharp claws to claim Ye's vulnerable soul. Why? Ye's shattered mind screamed against the sheer injustice of the universe. Why must I always suffer? In a sickening shower of crimson, the monster's brutal claws plunged straight through his fragile torso. As his precious life force rapidly drained away, his tragic, heartbreaking past flashed vividly before his eyes. Dark memories of endless humiliation and mockery flooded his fading consciousness. The disgusting faces of his cold-hearted relatives abandoning him at his parents' funeral, the crushing despair of being violently evicted onto the freezing streets, the soul-crushing weight of inherited debts that chained him to this living hell. He vividly remembered seeking justice for his mysteriously murdered parents, only to be cornered in dark alleyways by ruthless corporate enforcers. Their violent, bone-breaking threats still echoed clearly in his ears. Every desperate plea for truth he mailed out had been instantly intercepted, ending up right in the greedy pockets of the very megacorporation that destroyed his family. He never wanted a single penny of their filthy blood money. All he craved was the absolute, unfiltered truth. And the corporate hounds delivered a devastating, soul-crushing lie in return. They sneered, maliciously branding his parents as reckless trash who triggered the fatal accident. Instead of offering even a shred of human justice, those corporate monsters filed a ruthless, bankrupting lawsuit against him. They forced millions in fictional damages onto the fragile shoulders of a grieving orphan. The painful memory made his shattered body tremble. Even on the absolute brink of death, his blood-stained fist clenched with unyielding, explosive rage. He remembered the brutal, humiliating kick to his face from the elite debt collector. You should have taken our pocket change and stayed quiet like a good dog. The suit had spat, blaming Ye's stubborn obsession with the truth for his own brutal beating. The merciless enforcer was completely sick of dealing with him, relishing in the sickening fact that Ye's forced debt was compounding with a soul-crushing $30,000 in monthly interest. To make it an absolute, inescapable nightmare, the impossible principal balance had to be entirely cleared in just 3 short years. It was a literal, undeniable death sentence. My boys will pay you a violent visit on the 15th of every month, the tyrant warned with a wicked smile. If your pockets are empty, expect us to break every single bone in your pathetic body. Looking down at Ye's bruised and broken form, the arrogant collector offered a devil's bargain, a one-way ticket straight to hell, cleverly disguised as corporate mercy. He violently forced Ye into the darkest pits of the world, practically enslaving him as an interdimensional miner. It was the only brutal trade on Earth that paid enough to clear his impossible, suffocating chains. The dark flashback shattered as cold reality violently rushed back in. Blood poured from his chest, but a terrifying, legendary aura ignited within Ye's soul. If heaven wants me dead, I will drag hell down with me, he roared internally. He didn't care that he was weak. He absolutely unconditionally refused to fade away in the silence. Sinking his teeth into the beast, he fought with everything he had left. But the interdimensional monstrosity simply swatted him away like a bothersome fly. As his vision faded to black, the putrid stench of the creature filled his final breaths. Suddenly, a mysterious shadowy figure manifested, mocking him for failing to unlock his hidden potential. It seemed this pathetic struggle was how his story would end. But Ye spat back with his dying breath, declaring that at least he fought, unlike the coward hiding in the dark. In the blink of an eye, The terrifying beast shattered a nearby stone statue into absolute dust. Yet, a sinister voice echoed from the rubble. The ancient entity whispered a dark pact, claiming it could save his life, but only if Ye surrendered his physical vessel completely. Yi coldly rejected the offer. He would rather embrace death than become a puppet for some hideous freak of nature. The demonic entity erupted into maniacal laughter. It ruthlessly mocked his stubborn pride, calling him an arrogant fool for thinking he even had a choice in the matter. Suddenly, the shadow system roared to life. The interdimensional horror froze in absolute shock. An overwhelming aura of darkness descended, forcing the monster to its knees. The ancient shadow had temporarily hijacked his dying body. Now, it was time to unleash divine retribution against the very beast that dared to trample him. A colossal phantom materialized and crushed the beast underfoot. Meanwhile, pitch-black energy coiled around our protagonist, forging an impenetrable suit of shadow armor. Another grotesque humanoid shrieked from the blind spot. But the shadowy overlord simply clicked his tongue, annoyed by the pathetic noise. The very earth turned into a dark abyss, instantly swallowing the shrieking monster whole. Without missing a beat, the shadowy blade cleaved through the next victim. Regaining his senses, Ye gagged at the lingering stench of mutant blood. Turning his deadly gaze to the treacherous humans who betrayed him, he bound them in chains of darkness, leaving them shivering in absolute terror. The ancient entity chuckled, curious to see how Ye would judge these sinners once he regained control. The pathetic traitors dropped to their knees, pleading desperately for their useless lives. They shamelessly played the victim card. They claimed their betrayal was just survival instincts, even daring to argue that their harsh treatment was the true trigger for his glorious awakening. Yi let out a dark, mocking laugh. He sneered, asking if he was supposed to bow down and thank them now. The shameless cowards nervously waved their hands. They proposed sweeping their attempted murder under the rug, begging him to just walk away and let them live. With a terrifying smile, Ye agreed to let them go. He promised to help them find the exit, right before violently ripping away their life-saving masks. Blood spewed from their lungs as they choked on the toxic air. Leaving them to their gruesome fate, he turned his terrifying aura toward the remaining survivors. One trembling man immediately backed away, crying out his innocence in sheer panic. But to everyone's shock, Ye tossed them the survival batteries looted from the dead traitors. The ancient shadow scoffed in his mind, warning that this pathetic mercy would inevitably lead to his demise. He fiercely snapped back at the entity within his mind. He ordered the shadow to keep its mouth shut, refusing to listen to an ancient ghost's lectures. The entity merely laughed, eager to see if his arrogant host would survive the coming storm. Stepping out of the blood-soaked cavern, an endless sea of mutant humanoids blocked his path. A cold sweat ran down his spine. He never imagined an entire army of monsters would be waiting to ambush him. The shadow's sinister voice echoed once more. It offered an ultimatum: surrender his vessel completely, or be torn to shreds by this trash on his own. It ruthlessly mocked his trembling legs, laughing at how easily a mere horde scared him. The ancient being reminded him of cruel reality. Without borrowed power, Yi was utterly helpless. Gritting his teeth, Ye launched himself into the air. He roared that he did not need any more preaching, narrowly dodging a lethal strike before delivering a devastating kick to a mutant's claw. He landed flawlessly. A sudden realization hit him. His body felt lighter than a feather. As one monster slashed from the front, another treacherous beast lunged at his blind spot. But his newfound senses flared to life. He evaded the fatal pincer attack with supernatural grace. His speed and combat reflexes had evolved beyond human limits. Yet the shadow entity remained unimpressed. It sneered at his clumsy movements, insulting him for being so incredibly weak despite possessing the legendary shadow system. Blazing aura concentrated into his tightly clenched fist. Screaming at the voice to shut up, Yi unleashed a monstrous punch that sent the humanoid creature flying like a broken doll. He stared at his trembling hands in absolute awe. How did he gain such explosive power? But reality hit quickly. Brute force alone would not pierce their reinforced hides. He desperately needed a weapon. Answering his intense desire, pitch-black darkness swirled within his palm. To his absolute shock, the swirling void condensed into a razor-sharp shadow dagger. It was time to test this dark blade. He dashed forward and sliced through the air. The blade cut through mutant flesh like butter, proving he finally had the tools to slaughter these hybrids. The pieces finally clicked into place. He had officially awakened. Suddenly, a bone-crushing strike nailed his back. Ignoring the pain, he spun around with a deadly counterattack, instantly severing the beast's head from its shoulders. A savage grin crossed his face. He finally held the power to carve his own destiny. Mutant blood rained down, soaking the battlefield. Exhausted, Ye collapsed to the earth, gasping for air. The relentless horde of monstrosities had been completely annihilated. Right on cue, a glowing blue panel materialized. The system announced that his physical evolution was a complete success. He had officially achieved E-rank status. The scene abruptly shifts. We find our hero unconscious on a pristine hospital bed, surrounded by medical staff running frantic diagnostics. Flipping through the charts, the nurse gasped in disbelief. Despite the nightmare he faced, there was not a single scratch on him, and his vitals were perfectly stable. It was a total medical mystery why he remained in this deep coma. The head doctor calmly explained the phenomenon. For a newly awakened ascender, especially one who burned through every drop of their stamina, this hibernation was completely normal. His physical vessel was undergoing a microscopic rebirth, forcefully adapting to contain this terrifying new level of power. The word ascender made the nurse's eyes sparkle with sudden fascination. Leaning in closer, she eagerly asked what rank this mysterious patient held. Catching her extremely obvious fangirl moment, the doctor let out a knowing sigh. He gently reminded her that they could only confirm his rank once the young man opened his eyes. As the doctor signaled to move on to the next ward, the blushing nurse hesitated. She desperately wanted just a few more minutes to admire our protagonist's dangerously handsome features. Deep within the boundless void of his subconscious, the ancient shadow was throwing an absolute tantrum. It was deeply humiliated to be bound to a fragile human, and a pathetic E rank at that. With the entity's legendary status and terrifying aura, it expected its host to awaken as a god-tier S rank. At the very worst, a high-tier B rank. Yet here he was, trapped inside the laughable shell of an E rank weakling. Yet, the entity couldn't deny his sheer fascination. For a pathetic E rank to instantly awaken the shadow system and manifest a shadow on his very first attempt, that was absolutely unheard of. What a tragic waste that this fragile mortal vessel couldn't endure even 1/10,000th of his glorious true power. Yi jolted awake, immediately demanding why this dark mass was glued to his body. With overwhelming arrogance, the shadow proclaimed its title, the ancient supreme entropy extinguisher, absolute ruler of the otherworldly realms. It demanded total surrender of Ye's physical form. The grand promise? A royal bounty of treasures, but only after he slaughtered the traitors of his clan and took back his throne. Yi scoffed, convinced this spectral parasite was just spinning wildly delusional fairy tales. He mercilessly shot back, declaring there was zero chance he would hand his body over to something that looked like a mutated, oversized cockroach. The ancient ruler's pride took a massive hit. Furious, it barked that offering his mortal flesh was the sole and pathetic reason for Ye's continued existence. But Ye couldn't shake the question. Out of billions of humans, why choose him? Was this some sort of classic demonic possession? Or maybe this supernatural being had simply fallen victim to his devastatingly good looks. Still, dealing with a clearly unhinged entity meant treading carefully. For a fleeting second, his mind wandered to the bizarre fear of a non-consensual spiritual assault, though he confidently figured he could fight his way out of that too. But the real nightmare fuel? He had absolutely no idea what gender this shadowy blob even was. These chaotic, intrusive thoughts practically screamed in the mental link, pushing the shadow to the brink of insanity. It finally snapped, demanding to know what kind of sheer brain rot the human was processing. Deep regret washed over the ancient being. If it hadn't been backed into a corner, it would have gladly possessed a crippled street dog over this absolute E-rank trash. Issuing a bone-chilling ultimatum, the shadow granted him exactly 3 days. Break through to D-rank in 72 hours, or be entirely erased from existence. Confusion swirled in Ye's eyes. His last memory was a sterile hospital room, yet this demonic squatter had casually tossed him straight into a dimensional rift. The entity coldly revealed their current coordinates. The insect nest, a brutal E-rank proving ground of the skyborn race, hidden deep within an otherworldly gate. It explained the sacred laws of its people. Every member of the mighty skyborn clan gets only one single attempt at this trial upon coming of age. But by hijacking Ye's mortal body, the system glitched and reset the trial count. Suddenly, the earth trembled as a massive shielded armor beetle roared into view. Ye blinked in shock, instantly recognizing the monstrous species. The shadow scoffed, explaining that the newly bound system was directly scanning the human's own mental database. It advised the mortal to adapt, and quickly, Ye's mind raced, processing the limitless potential of this mysterious new power. In a flash, he drew his dagger and carved through the air. His own explosive speed left him breathless. The wounded beast shrieked, toxic fury dripping from its mandibles. Relying on his hunter instincts, Yi locked onto its critical blind spot. He launched himself into the sky, aiming a lethal strike directly at its armored spine before sticking a flawless landing right behind the monster. But the beast retaliated with terrifying speed. The brutal shockwave forced Ye to slam his blade deep into the earth just to anchor himself against the impact. He gritted his teeth, stunned by the impenetrable density of its exoskeleton. The shadow sneered, mocking his pathetic display. Was mindless brute force truly his only strategy? Yi spat back, telling the backseat driver to stay out of his combat flow. The shadow merely chuckled darkly, warning the human not to cry for salvation when death came knocking. Frustration boiled in Ye's veins. Did this walking tank of a bug even have a fatal flaw? Before he could strategize, a brutal deflection sent his body crashing through the air like a rag doll. He slammed brutally into the cavern wall. Wincing in pain, he noticed a viscous, glowing fluid smeared across his shoulder. "Get on your feet," the shadow commanded relentlessly. Yi traced the bizarre slime. It was monster blood oozing from his previous strike. A predator's smirk crept onto his face. He had finally cracked its defensive code. The beast charged with apocalyptic fury. But Ye's eyes blazed with unwavering resolve, ready to show this oversized bug who was the real prey. Deep within, the entity watched in absolute shock as the human instinctively activated the Shadow Eye technique. A blur of motion and razor-sharp strikes severed the monster's front limbs. The shadow just scoffed again. What was the grand master plan in snapping a single twig? Yi coolly fired back. Without its frontline defense, exposing its vulnerable core was going to be a walk in the park. But to pierce that core, he needed an instrument of absolute destruction. Shadow energy surged, transmuting his pathetic dagger into a devastating, pitch-black lance. He drove the brutal weapon beneath the beast, forcing the massive creature to rear up on its hind legs. Yi had perfectly deduced its cowardice. It had stayed low to the ground to protect its hyper-vulnerable underbelly. Lungs burning and muscles screaming, the hunter stood victorious over the massive corpse. Amidst the dissolving flesh, a radiant crystal materialized in the dirt. The ancient ruler jeered, mocking him for panting like a dog after squashing a lowly E-rank bug. But before Ye could reply, an intoxicating torrent of pure energy flooded his veins. The crystal shattered into light, absorbing straight into his soul. It was an experience booster. A crisp blue system window pinged. Plus 0.2% progress toward D-rank advancement. The shadow clarified that this was an energy stone, a rare treasure capable of forcefully evolving his stats. Suddenly, the hair on Ye's neck stood up. Murderous intent was closing in, yet the shadows remained dead empty. "Stop staring blindly," the entity hissed in his mind. "Channel the Shadow Eye if you want to live." Yi desperately asked how to command the technique. The ancient being sighed, instructing the mortal to pool his newfound shadow essence directly into his retinas. Focusing his breath, dark energy swirled into his pupils, officially unlocking Shadow Eye Level 1. In that exact millisecond, a barrage of lethal projectiles ripped through the darkness toward him. He dodged by a hair's breadth. The demonic spine slammed into solid stone, instantly dissolving the rock with a bubbling neon green acid. Yi gulped, demanding to know what kind of hellish darts those were. His sensory perception flared once more. Pushing his mortal limits, he contorted his body with breathtaking agility to evade the second deadly volley. Cursing under his breath, Ye complained that this so-called divine ocular skill was terribly blurry. The entity mercilessly shattered his pride. "The skill is absolute perfection. You're just too pathetically weak to use it properly." Refusing to accept defeat, Ye grit his teeth and violently dragged more aura into his optical nerves. Deep inside, the ancient sovereign smirked. For a trash-tier human, his mastery over the shadow element was terrifyingly natural. As his vision finally pierced the veil of darkness, the true nightmare was revealed. A dual threat. The head harvester, a bladed mantis built for decapitation, alongside a stinger launcher engineered for raining toxic death from afar. These foul creatures. They are both E-rank beasts. The shadow watched in amusement. The boy had flawlessly assimilated the knowledge base. But Ye's eyes narrowed. The swarm was multiplying. Monsters crawled from every crevice. An old saying echoed in his mind. If you spot one cockroach in the light, 1,000 more are waiting in the dark. Impressive. The shadow praised his tactical retreat, securing a choke point so the swarm could not flank him. Murderous intent blazed in his eyes as twin daggers materialized in his firm grip. A suffocating aura erupted from his core. "Get out of my sight!" he roared, his voice trembling with raw power. The shadow gasped in disbelief. To awaken the second form of the Shadow Eye already? Unheard of for a mere E-rank host. With Shadow Eye Tier 2 active, the abyss swallowed his pupils. Now, every heartbeat of his prey sounded like a death knell. A glowing system window flickered to life. Status updated. He was an E-rank host of the Shadow system. His arsenal included the Shadow Knowledge Base, Shadow Eye Tier 2, and Shadow Transformation. The world around him shifted. The frenzied scuttling of the terrifying bugs. It was suddenly reduced to half speed. Glowing purple nodes pulsed on their underbellies. Were these their fatal blind spots? Ding! The system chimed, confirming the weakness was locked in. The shadow chuckled darkly. Behold the true power of a Tier 2 Shadow Eye kid. No armor could stop him now. Once the fatal flaw was exposed, his strikes would shatter their defenses completely. Their soft underbellies were wide open. He slammed his hands down. Shadowthorn, Great Burial. Pitch-black spikes erupted from the earth, ruthlessly skewering the monstrous vermin. It was a devastating area of effect technique. By injecting pure shadow into the soil, he turned the very ground into a lethal trap. Ding, ding. System notifications rained down, tracking his rapid breakthrough progress. But he clicked his tongue in annoyance. Each kill only granted 0.7% breakthrough value. Knowing their fatal flaws, it was time to end this slaughterfest. He would annihilate them all in a single breath. He became a whirlwind of blades, carving through the swarm as the system dinged frantically. Even he was shocked by his own lethality. Shadow Eye Tier 2 had sharpened his precision to a monstrous degree. But from the blind spot, a slender, venomous green monstrosity lunged at his throat. Your reflexes are sharp, the Shadow mused, but your processing speed is still lacking. As the dust settled, the horrific form of a warped sword bug was revealed. The Shadow's metaphysical eyes widened. The boy fluidly shifted his shadow dagger, reshaping it into a deadly, crackling whip. The insect shrieked as the shadow whip coiled around its thorax. Try leaping now, you pest. With a vicious yank, he sliced its head clean off. Ding! Warped sword bug weakness successfully recorded. In retaliation, the surviving horde unleashed a lethal rain of toxic stingers. Shadow transformation activate. Ye dissolved into the darkness and blitzed forward, mercilessly piercing their exposed vitals. Breakthrough progress surging to 12.1%. Tendrils of pure darkness lashed out like vipers, entangling the airborne warped sword bugs and dragging them crashing to the dirt. Not bad, kid. The Shadow sneered approvingly. You finally look worthy of this divine power, even if your form is ridiculously clumsy. This was the true gift of the Shadow Eye, an absolute enhancement of senses, reflexes, and raw strength, granting him supreme dominion over the darkness. Ding! D-rank breakthrough progress surges to 34.2%. However, such godlike power came with a steep toll. It devoured his mental fortitude by the second. The Eye of Shadow always demands its tribute. The Shadow sensed the boy's flickering consciousness. He was running on fumes. The world spun violently as his vision faded to black. Slash! A cowardly bug ripped through his back. But Ye planted his feet. He absolutely refused to die here, not when he finally held the power of vengeance in his grasp. A countdown timer materialized, reading 15:28:42. His blood boiled at the thought of the NG Group elites, those corporate vultures who covered up his parents' murder and chained him in the mines to rot for a fabricated debt. With every ticking second, his breakthrough bar surged higher through the bloody carnage. Agony tore through his muscles, but he pushed past the breaking point. Driven by this newfound, fate-defying power, his unbreakable will roared against the heavens. He would drag those arrogant bastards down to the deepest pits of hell. He swore on his life. He would shatter their pride and force them to grovel at his parents' graves. The clock was bleeding out. Only 2 minutes and 15 seconds remained. But his D-rank breakthrough was already at a staggering 95.4%. The Shadow watched this glorious display of wrath, such pure, unadulterated hatred. It resonated perfectly with the system, acting as a limitless feast for the Shadow energy. The fated moment is upon us, the Shadow urged, its voice echoing in his mind. Finish this, now. Tick, tock. The countdown plummeted to a mere 7 seconds. The Shadow felt the mana pooling and panicked. Was this crazy kid going to detonate all his energy at once? Are you trying to blow your own vessel to pieces? The entity screamed. 3 seconds left on the clock. He was just a hair's breadth away from evolution. To grasp ultimate strength, he would gladly risk being torn apart. 1 second remaining. The seal shattered, and an apocalyptic aura exploded outward. 0. Time was up. Yi launched himself into the heavens, his blade screaming with devastating, concentrated dark matter. With one heaven-splitting strike, the entire monstrous horde was instantly vaporized. Ding! D-rank breakthrough rate reached 100%. The mortal shell was shed, and an official D-rank awakened was born. Yi collapsed, his lungs burning with sheer exhaustion. You barely survived that, the Shadow snickered with a sadistic grin. I guess from now on, I will just call you Little D. His gaze shifted past the fallen monsters, locking onto a mysterious weapon. The Shadow entity whispered an ancient truth, revealing that this very insect nest was once nothing more than a beginner's training ground for his majestic race. By human standards, this divine weapon would easily be classed as an A-rank treasure. But Ye stood completely baffled. The Shadow dared to call it a mere dagger when he was clearly holding a massive greatsword. A ridiculous thought crossed his mind. Looking at the massive blade, he couldn't help but ask, were the Shadow's ancestors actually towering giants? The shadowy figure scoffed, boasting that compared to his supreme power, such mortal weapons were mere scrap metal. But Ye wasn't about to let good loot go to waste. Without a second thought, he greedily stored the legendary items into his inventory. Tilting its formless head, the ancient Shadow genuinely wondered, what possible use could a weak human have for such rudimentary tools? A sly smirk crossed our hero's face. He was going to sell it for a mountain of cash. However, the system's strict rules stated that only D-rank Awakeners could legally trade gear. So, his first stop had to be the official Awakeners registration hall. But reality hit him like a ton of bricks. Staring at the glowing evaluation screen, Yi was utterly speechless. The system had slapped him with a pathetic E-rank rating. The cold-eyed receptionist delivered the crushing blow. Sure, his physical stats were surprisingly robust, but without a single drop of detectable mana fluctuation, he was locked at the absolute bottom of the barrel. To add insult to injury, the guild records officially labeled him as a lowly miner. His only reward? A measly 15% wage boost. Storming out of the grand hall, Ye couldn't hide his bitter sarcasm, praising his so-called unmatched shadow system. The shadow immediately clapped back, its voice echoing with ancient pride. It wasn't the system's flaw. It was humanity's primitive technology that was completely blind to the majestic flow of supreme shadow energy. A sudden realization hit him like lightning. Flying under the radar was actually the ultimate trump card. However, this hidden power came with a massive drawback. To pawn off high-tier loot, he'd have to dive deep into the dangerous, blood-soaked underworld of the black market. A sinister chuckle rumbled from the dark entity. Navigating the criminal underworld? That was absolutely the perfect playground for an inheritor of the shadow system. Stepping into the dimly lit tavern, Ye moved with the stealth of a phantom. The rowdy thugs and greedy merchants were completely oblivious, until one sharp-eyed scumbag finally spotted the newcomer in their midst. Observing the shady deals around them, the shadow couldn't help but mock mortal foolishness. Slapping a few shiny rocks onto ordinary chunks of iron, and daring to call it divine weaponry? What an absolute joke! For a brief moment, the ancient being actually pitied its master. A snobby merchant aggressively waved Ye away like a stray dog. Taking one look at his dusty miner's clothes, the arrogant clerk assumed this poor beggar couldn't afford a single drop of water. Ye's eyes narrowed dangerously. Was this how the black market treated its paying guests? The merchant spat on the floor, openly mocking the idea that a filthy tunnel rat like him had any real coin in his pockets. Our main character didn't even flinch. With an icy glare, he made it crystal clear. Even if they begged him, he wouldn't touch their overpriced garbage. In a swift, dramatic motion, the heavy cloth fell away, revealing the breathtaking, massive greatsword. Yi slammed the divine blade onto the counter, demanding their best appraiser to put a price on a true masterpiece. Suddenly, the tavern doors swung open. A vain woman clung desperately to her partner's arm, whining about the filthy stench of the underground. Enter Zhou Ting, an arrogant D-rank awakener, towing his ordinary yet heavily pampered girlfriend, Su Qing. Sensing the smell of new money, the greedy shopkeeper instantly abandoned our hero. Bowing like an obedient servant, he rushed over to shower the wealthy young Master Zhou with sickening flattery. Rubbing his hands together greedily, the merchant eagerly asked if the noble awakener had brought any rare treasures from the deadly dungeon raids. With a smug grin, Ting boasted about a sword he'd looted straight from the chaotic rifts of the otherworld. His noble goal? Selling it to buy his sweet trophy girlfriend a luxury ride. The shopkeeper gasped in shock, recognizing the blade as the infamous Wind Howl sword. This wasn't just any blade. Woven with a fierce elemental attack boost, it was the ultimate, highly sought-after prize that had every D-rank awakener drooling in envy. But Ye's gaze locked onto the girl. It was Su Qing. Her face turned pale with utter dread the second she recognized him. This was the very same heartless woman who had brutally abandoned Ye right after his parents' tragic death left him penniless. Memories of her cruel, venomous insults still echoed in the air. Catching her terrified stare, the arrogant Ting raised an eyebrow, asking if she actually knew this pathetic dirtbag. Without skipping a beat, the venomous snake lied through her teeth. She claimed he was just some crazed, obsessive fan stalking her famous influencer profile. Disgusted, Ting sneered at our main character, violently degrading him as absolute street trash. The cocky awakener pointed toward the door. He mocked Ye, telling him the city dump was just down the road, and he better drag his useless piece of scrap iron there before the garbage trucks leave. Barking like a mad dog, Ting ordered Ye to get out of his sight. To prove his dominance, he viciously swung his prized magical sword straight at our hero, but with a deafening crash. It collided violently against Ye's colossal blade. Time seemed to freeze. The arrogant young master's smug expression completely vanished, replaced by absolute horror as his precious, expensive weapon shattered into a million useless fragments. A cold smirk danced on Ye's lips. It seemed the real garbage in the room was Ting's fragile toy. Panic struck the gold digger, Su Qing. She hysterically screamed, asking how a blade that supposedly sliced through solid rock could break so easily. Humiliated in front of his girl, Ting's face burned with boiling rage. He threw a ferocious mana-infused punch directly at Ye's face. But to our awakened hero, the D-Rank's movements were laughably sluggish. With the grace of a phantom, Ye simply tilted his head, letting the heavy fist strike empty air. Snarling, Ting admitted the miner had some decent reflexes, before unleashing a terrifying flurry of blows. Yet, like dancing in the rain without getting wet, Ye effortlessly dodged every single strike. Inside Ye's mind, this supposed life-or-death brawl was an absolute joke, compared to the lightning-fast, monstrous horrors of the insectoid nest. This guy was basically moving in slow motion. Frustration gnawed at Ting's very soul. How was this possible? He was a mighty D-rank warrior, yet he couldn't land a single scratch on a lowly, dirt-digging miner. Channeling all his remaining power, Ting readied a devastating final blow. But our main character was done playing games. A tendril of pure abyssal darkness erupted from Ye's shadow, instantly coiling tightly around the attacker's wrist like an unbreakable serpent. Spitting pure venom, the trapped awakener roared that tunnel rats belonged in the dark. But Ye's eyes flashed with icy dominance. He calmly replied, "Shouldn't a rabid dog be the one forced onto its knees?" With a merciless flick of his wrist, the shadow whip violently yanked downward. Ting was slammed brutally into the tavern floor, eating the cold, hard dirt. Seeing her sugar daddy crushed, Su Qing shrieked in absolute terror. Looking down at the defeated noble, Ye coldly mocked how naturally he embraced the posture of a beaten mutt. Driven to absolute madness by the humiliation, Ting scrambled up, lunging at Yi with murder in his eyes. But before blood could be spilled, a booming voice shattered the chaos. Flanked by two towering bodyguards, a formidable figure stepped from the shadows. Ting froze in sheer shock. It was Boss Wang, a powerful D-rank veteran and the absolute ruler of this underground market. The imposing boss glared down at the young master. He coldly reminded Ting that while his money was always welcome here, tearing up his establishment was a grave disrespect to the underworld's laws. Desperate to save face, the gold digger pointed an accusing finger at Ye. She screeched that the filthy miner had maliciously destroyed their priceless artifact. Hearing this, the terrifying boss finally shifted his heavy gaze onto our hero. Narrowing his eyes, Wang demanded to know if this ragged boy had truly shattered a magical weapon barehanded. Yi stood completely unfazed. He coldly stated the facts. The fool attacked first, so his fragile toy breaking was entirely his own fault. A dangerous silence fell over the room. The black market boss stroked his chin, questioning if that was truly how the events unfolded. But a greedy glint flashed in Wang's eyes. He leaned in, whispering to Ting that the colossal blade in the miner's grip radiated an unimaginable, terrifying aura. A sinister deal was quickly struck in the shadows. Ting eagerly agreed, knowing he'd walk away with cold, hard cash, while the boss claimed the legendary prize. Putting on a fake, friendly mask, Boss Wang turned back to our main character. Offering to play the fair peacemaker, he smoothly requested to personally inspect the mysterious greatsword. But a trap had just been set. The moment his fingers wrapped around the hilt, shock washed over Wang. The massive blade weighed well over 100 pounds, yet Ye wielded it like a mere toy. Cold sweat dripped down the appraiser's neck. Was this kid secretly an awakened advanced? Hoping to probe the boy's true depths, he casually interrogated him about the weapon's origins. But Ye wasn't born yesterday. He narrowed his eyes and scoffed, demanding to know since when the underground black market cared about seller identification or item history. Backpedaling quickly, Wang claimed it was merely professional curiosity. With a deadpan expression, Yi simply stated he unearthed the colossal blade during a routine mining shift. A greedy smirk crept onto Wang's face. So, the kid really was just bottom-tier mining trash. Examining the steel, he arrogantly declared it was durable, but completely devoid of magical attributes. With a dismissive wave, he priced the legendary-looking weapon at a pitiful few hundred credits at absolute best. Meanwhile, he shamelessly claimed Ting's shattered blade would have fetched over 2 million. Dripping with fake pity, Wang sighed, telling the impoverished miner how incredibly difficult his life must be. Then came the trap. He offered to generously purchase the sword, demanding Ye cough up a staggering 2 million in compensation for Ting, while Wang hypocritically promised to cover the remaining balance. He spun the outrageous scam as if he were bestowing a heavenly blessing upon a peasant. He even had the audacity to call it his daily act of absolute charity. Turning to the arrogant young master, he asked for Ting's approval. Ting smugly accepted the rigged deal, but the gold-digging Qing sneered, mocking that a filthy miner could never scrape together 2 million. Pouting, she whined about the luxury car he had promised her. With a wicked grin, Ting whispered that harvesting the miner's organs would easily cover their 2 million payout. Hearing those twisted words, Qing eagerly nodded along to the sinister scheme. Watching their pathetic display, Ye instantly realized he had walked straight into a coordinated trap. Wang stepped forward, aggressively demanding if the boy had a problem with the arrangement. A chilling smirk tugged at Ye's lips. Wasn't him. Suddenly, an oppressive, suffocating shadow aura erupted from his body. Sensing the immense danger, Wang's elite thugs lunged forward to execute the insolent brat. Scoffing at the one-sided slaughter, Wang declared this pathetic scuffle was beneath his notice. He arrogantly invited Ting to the VIP lounge to casually wait for the bloody aftermath. Ting happily agreed, but before they could even take a single step, boom! A battered thug was sent rocketing past their faces like a human cannonball. Oblivious to the terror, Wang yelled at his henchman, Bo-o, warning the fool that breaking the shop's merchandise would cost him his life. Meanwhile, Ye was already delivering bone-crushing kicks to the remaining guards. Another unconscious body hurled directly toward Ting. With a swift kick, Ting deflected his own ruined meat shield. He smugly remarked that swinging a pickaxe all day must have given the miner some brute strength. Stepping over the groaning bodies, Ye locked eyes with the arrogant noble, declaring his turn was up. Ching stood paralyzed, terrified that a lowly rock smasher possessed such monstrous combat skills. Ting clapped mockingly, admitting the boy had decent moves against absolute nobodies. But his aura flared violently as he boasted that facing a D rank advanced, Yi was still nothing more than recycled garbage. Without a single word of warning, Ye simply raised his hand. Smack! A devastating, soul-crushing slap sent the arrogant young master spinning. Absolute fury ignited in Ting's eyes. Not even his own father had ever dared to strike his precious face. Screaming bloody murder, he unleashed a blazing energy beam, only for Ye to casually swat it away with his bare palm. The absolute flawless deflection left Ting completely utterly bewildered. It defied all logic. He felt as though his ultimate attack had collided with an impenetrable, invisible fortress wall. Ye's eyes glowed with chilling authority. He coldly announced that since Ting's father failed to discipline him, he would personally do the honors of beating some manners into this ungrateful brat. Raw, unfiltered terror gripped Ting's heart. He scrambled backward like a frightened dog, hysterically screaming at the looming demon to stay away. Ching's mind was completely shattered. How could her glorious D-rank boyfriend be humiliated by a dirt-covered miner? Suddenly, Ye's shadow aura twisted and mutated, forming a nightmare-inducing spiderweb that violently ensnared them both. Hanging helplessly, the horrifying truth finally pierced Ting's arrogant skull. This monster was no miner. Trembling, he begged to know if the boy was secretly a C-rank or even a legendary B-rank powerhouse. Looking down like a god judging a mortal, Ye calmly replied that he was just a certified E-rank miner. Ting's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. Such a catastrophic lie was impossible to swallow. The moment Ye slowly raised his hand again, absolute panic seized Ting's soul. Desperate to survive, he shrieked his affiliation with the vicious Black Panther gang, warning that touching him meant declaring war on the entire underworld. Ye's eyes darkened with lethal intent. He recognized that wretched name, the notorious Loan Shark Syndicate. Trembling like a leaf, Ting stuttered a pathetic confirmation. That was the wrong answer. Without a shred of mercy, Yi unleashed a torrential storm of bone-shattering punches, drowning out Ching's blood-curdling screams. The final, devastating impact launched Ting through the air, cratering him into the solid concrete wall. A violent cough sent a spray of crimson blood across the floor. Staring at the broken mess, Ye icily declared that loan sharks were the scum he despised most in this world. Suddenly, Wang launched a cowardly sneak attack from the shadows. Without even turning his head, Yi effortlessly blasted the corrupt appraiser away, barking at the trash to get lost. Coughing up teeth, Ting pathetically begged to settle this little misunderstanding for a measly 100,000 yen. Yi crouched down, an absolute devilish grin on his face. He mocked the young master, asking if his precious face was only worth 2,000 per slap. Weeping openly, Ting desperately multiplied his offer to a staggering 1 million just to stop the relentless physical trauma. A dark, vengeful light sparked in the main character's eyes. Since these underworld scumbags love charging predatory interest rates, he decided it was time they experienced their own ruthless financial medicine. He coldly informed the bleeding gangster that the 50 brutal slaps earlier were merely the interest fees. Now, it was time to collect the principal. Terrified of losing his life, Ting frantically shoved a premium black card forward, howling an offer of 5 million. Sobbing unconditionally, he begged the monster to take every last penny to his name. But as the main character glanced at the sleek card, he instantly recognized the cursed insignia. It was an exclusive VIP pass for the dreaded NG group. The puzzle pieces violently snapped into place. The ruthless enforcers who had hounded him for NG group's debts and condemned him to the grueling mines were the exact same syndicate scum whimpering at his feet. A brilliant, terrifying master plan formed in his mind. Instead of ending the pathetic rat here, he would release him back into the wild. It was time to bait the venomous snake completely out of its hidden hole. Snatching the black card, Ye coldly stated that the Black Panther gang had bled his family of millions over the bitter years. Taking this fortune wasn't theft. It was simply destiny returning stolen wealth to its absolute rightful owner. As the Grim Reaper finally walked away, a trembling Ching rushed over to scrape her boyfriend off the floor, weeping as she asked if he was still alive. Ting's eyes burned with humiliated rage. He viciously blamed her, screaming that she was the one who swore the boy was just a harmless miner. Stuttering in defense, she cried that she had absolutely no way of predicting this monstrous power awakening. Smack! Transferring his rage, he slapped her across the face. He roared that her idiotic intelligence report had caused him to completely lower his guard, but as he clutched his broken ribs, a sinister vow echoed in his mind. His money wouldn't be claimed that easily. Pulling out his cracked terminal, he made an emergency call. Somewhere in the dark city, a hulking figure stood over a pile of groaning victims, lazily answering the ringing device. Tears of spite streamed down Ting's bruised face as he cried out to his terrifying brother, "The Panther Boss!" He spun a web of malicious lies, claiming a madman had stolen the supreme sword meant as tribute, and had arrogantly threatened to slaughter the entire Black Panther gang into extinction. Panther's voice dripped with pure malice as he demanded the target's personal files. His terrified subordinates bowed deeply, trembling as they reported their success in securing the mysterious artifact. When questioned about the fate of the captive survivors, a cruel smirk twisted across Panther's face. To a ruthless monster like him, those lives were nothing more than worthless livestock. Without a shred of hesitation, the victims were mercilessly slaughtered and carved to pieces. Amidst the horrific bloodbath, Panther laid a dark claim on the boy Ting had discovered. Meanwhile, a terrifying revelation surfaced deep within the shadowy underground network. The absolute truth pointed directly to the infamous NG Group. This colossal megacorporation was the very mastermind that orchestrated the tragic murder of his parents. By the time the sun rose the next day, Yi stood amidst the bustling adventurer guild, seeking his next move. When a staff member approached, Ye calmly stated his purpose. He simply needed a quest suitable for a lowly E-rank adventurer. The words barely left his mouth before the surrounding veterans erupted. They relentlessly mocked him, declaring this elite zone was strictly for D-rank warriors and above. Cruel laughter echoed through the massive hall. "Is this fragile rookie actively begging for death?" they sneered. It heavily amused them that mere trash dared to act so boldly. One burly mercenary stepped forward with venom in his eyes. He aggressively claimed that E-ranks were nothing but pathetic parasites who survived by feeding off their hard work. They roughly shoved him aside, barking orders for him to wait in the dirt outside until a desperate party needed a disposable shield. The ruthless crowd chimed in, stating his true place was beside the garbage dump because trash truly belonged with trash. Yi clenched his fists, his blood boiling at the memory of losing a staggering 5 million credits to those blood-sucking loan sharks. Survival meant securing a quest immediately. But suddenly, the guild doors blasted open, and an absolutely suffocating pressure washed over the entire room. The heavy aura instantly slammed the arrogant mercenaries to their knees. This terrifying spiritual weight could only belong to a legendary B-rank powerhouse. Breathing became a luxury under that crushing dominance. Stepping from the shadows was a breathtaking woman with flowing silver hair, delicate feline ears, and an intense crimson aura blazing around her body. While the paralyzed crowd whispered in absolute terror, Ye stood perfectly still, analyzing her every move. Beneath the overwhelming display of power, she possessed the pristine elegance of a pampered noble, completely devoid of actual killing intent. He narrowed his eyes in deep suspicion. Was she deliberately masking her true, monstrous nature? Her presence was an absolute paradox of flashy dominance and bizarre restraint. Breaking the unbearable tension, her masked subordinate loudly announced a D-rank expedition to the treacherous beast abyss, desperately seeking a disposable miner. His authoritative voice echoed through the terrified hall. "Who among you dares to accept this fate?" It was then that the trembling veterans noticed the impossible. While their legs shook uncontrollably, Ye stood perfectly tall, completely unfazed by the soul-crushing pressure. By all logic, a fragile E-rank should have been coughing blood on the floor. Instead, Ye casually stepped forward, quickly realizing he was the absolute only one left standing. The silver-haired powerhouse immediately locked her piercing gaze onto this complete anomaly. A panicked guild official quickly recognized her as Lady Chin, the terrifying tyrant of Longmen 3rd Street. He frantically offered her a premium selection of veteran D ranks instead, but her crimson eyes never left Ye. "No," she commanded coldly. "I will take him." The official broke out in a cold sweat. He desperately stammered that it completely violated guild protocols, as the boy had not even registered for the drafting queue. Her gaze sharpened into invisible lethal blades. "Protocols?" she sneered with absolute authority. "I am the law here. He is coming with me." Utterly defeated by her overwhelming presence, the terrified clerk bowed in pure submission. Seeing no other option, Ye silently followed in her wake. The guild staff watched in absolute disbelief. Never before had the Icy Queen personally handpicked a lowly worker. It left them wondering what dark secret this mysterious miner was actually hiding. Hours later, deep within the suffocating darkness of the abyss, a towering, muscle-bound beast with wicked horns blocked their path. A bard immediately played buffing melodies on his flute, supporting a perfectly structured vanguard of elite tanks and lethal damage dealers. Their battle formation was an impenetrable fortress. Watching from the rear, Ye scoffed internally. These basic minotaurs were barely a warm-up exercise. He analyzed their flawless combat coordination, noting how easily they rode the momentum of their B-rank leader's absolute command. On the surface, it was a total and complete slaughter. But as Ye activated his mystical shadow eye, a chill ran down his spine. Lurking far beneath the floorboards were monstrous signatures that completely shattered the D-rank ceiling. He gritted his teeth. How could these so-called elites remain completely blind to this impending doom? His inner shadow whispered a sinister truth. His ocular powers had evolved to the second tier, granting him godlike perception that completely outclassed these oblivious fools. Yet, a B-rank noble should have definitely sensed the danger. A dark suspicion bloomed in his mind. Was this rich girl intentionally masking the threat to lead them into a death trap? The bard suddenly shouted that the legendary starlight crystal vein was just ahead. Without missing a beat, Qin commanded the lowly miner to stick dangerously close to her side. Yi stared at her in sheer disbelief. She was perfectly aware of the lurking bloodlust, yet she brazenly dragged a defenseless worker straight into the jaws of death. With every step deeper into the cavern, the suffocating aura of pure evil grew exponentially. Did she view her own comrades as nothing more than disposable meat shields? Or was her sheer arrogance so blindingly absolute that she believed her B-rank supremacy could easily obliterate any nightmare that awaited? Suddenly, the very earth violently shattered beneath their feet. Yi and Qin plummeted into the suffocating darkness of a hidden chasm. Landing gracefully in the dust, Ye immediately sensed a terrifying presence locking onto them. From the shadows emerged a grotesquely mutated beastman, dripping with lethal intent. He watched Qin instinctively draw her shimmering blade, bracing himself to witness her legendary martial arts in action. Her blazing crimson aura flared into the terrifying shape of demonic eyes. But instead of charging, she completely froze. In a pathetic display, she scrambled behind Ye's back. "I will cover your rear," she squeaked. "Go get him." Yi stared at her, utterly dumbfounded, dryly reminding her that he was literally just a guy with a pickaxe. Her face flushed a deep shade of red as her legs visibly trembled, desperately shoving him toward the roaring monster. His mind completely short-circuited. The supposed B-rank apex predator was utterly paralyzed by fear, expecting a fragile E-rank rookie to slay a boss-level threat. Yi had zero intention of throwing away his life for minimum-wage mining scraps. He turned to leave, until a desperate scream promised him a staggering 1 million credits to secure its head. A dangerous, chilling grin slowly spread across his face. "For that kind of fortune," he muttered, drawing his weapon as his shadow violently flared. "I suppose I can bend the rules a little." Drawing his dagger, Ye stepped into the fray. 3 massive minotaurs charged in perfect sync. One locked weapons with him, while the other 2 bulldozed straight past his defense. Their target was Qin. Yi's heart dropped, instantly terrified for his $1 million payday. But suddenly, a blazing red aura erupted around her, blasting the beasts away with overwhelming force. Yi was completely caught off guard. Had he actually misjudged her strength? But before he could process it, another towering minotaur launched itself right at her. Moving like a blur, Ye dashed to her rescue, his blade singing as it knocked the monster off course. He smirked, teasing that her face must have some natural aggro-drawing abilities. But when he turned to check on her, she was already sprinting for the hills. Yi danced through the horde of minotaurs, sighing loudly at how absolutely hopeless she was. Lungs burning and gasping for air, she stopped, thinking she had finally reached safety. But looming like a nightmare right behind her was a massive shadow. She spun around, eyes widening in absolute horror. Panic set in as she realized her previous overwhelming display of power had not scared it off at all. With a terrifying growl, the beast raised its massive wooden club high into the air. Yi narrowed his eyes, confused why someone with her firepower was just standing there. Suddenly, her bracelet flared with blinding light. A magical barrier materialized, violently repelling the monstrous attacker. Crack! The glowing bracelet shattered into countless pieces. The truth hit Yi like a truck. That incredible red aura was not her own strength. It was just a disposable protective artifact. He stared at her in disbelief. Was she seriously a non-combat awakened? Face burning bright red, she meekly nodded her head in shame. She frantically begged him to keep her secret safe. Ye just smirked, warning her that silence would cost extra. Suddenly, the ground rumbled as more minotaurs swarmed the area. Why were they so obsessed with her? Shadow Eye, Level 2. Activated! The world shifted, and through the magical spectrum, he spotted a dark silhouette lurking in the shadows, perfectly concealing its presence. No wonder his heightened senses missed the bastard. Bizarre energy fluctuations rippled from the hidden figure, puppeteering the furious minotaurs like mindless chess pieces. A blood-curdling scream escaped Qin as a beast lunged for her throat. Yi instantly decapitated it with a swift strike, but the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. The monstrous horde was closing in tight. He could not unleash his devastating area of effect skills because the fragile non-combatant right beside him would be instantly caught in the crossfire. Time was ticking. If he did not obliterate these monsters fast, his stamina would bleed dry while desperately playing bodyguard. He hatched a dangerous, insane plan. He was going to use her as bait. Voice loud and clear, he announced that since her artifacts were shattered and she could not fight, she had better watch her back against an ambush. Chin gasped, her face flushing with total humiliation. She could not believe this maniac just broadcasted her ultimate weakness to the entire dungeon. Hook, line, and sinker. A shadowy figure materialized right behind her, the cold steel of a wicked dagger slipping from its sheath. The assassin grinned maliciously. A lowly miner had almost ruined his grand scheme, but his target was finally unguarded. This was his golden chance to exact a bloody revenge against her father. The lethal blade sliced through the air. But before it could even graze her skin, a silver flash erupted, completely severing the assassin's arm. Meanwhile, completely oblivious, Chin just stood there. The bleeding man stumbled back in absolute shock. He was a bard class. He casually explained the deadly trap to Chin. This guy had been using low-frequency sound waves to command the beastly horde. Chin stared at the attacker, her eyes trembling with disbelief. It was Luden, someone she actually knew. Clutching his bleeding stump, Luden burst into maniacal laughter. Oh, the irony of being outsmarted by a pathetic miner. But his eyes glowed with madness, as he declared the battle was far from over. A sinister crimson aura erupted from his body. He began absorbing the twisted energy of the fallen beasts, manifesting an absolute nightmare, a gigantic, blood-red phantom minotaur. Luden sneered, ready to show them the true, terrifying power of a control type awakened. The sheer pressure of his spiritual energy suffocated the air. Ye's instinct screamed the truth. This guy was a class threat. Chin watched in pure horror as Luden devoured the beastmen's life force to forcibly evolve. The temperature skyrocketed, and the very ground beneath their feet began melting into boiling lava. It was a catastrophic evolution. He was transforming into a devastating class, Lava Minotaur. Ye gritted his teeth, shocked that this lunatic could instantly jump from D class to class through dark magic. The power gap was an insurmountable cliff. For the first time, a heavy sense of inferiority weighed on Ye's shoulders. Standing before two mere D-class awakened was a fully manifested, apocalyptic class monster. With an earth-shattering roar, the blazing titan brought its fury crashing down. Yi instantly channeled his energy, throwing up a desperate defensive barrier just in time. But the beast's follow-up attack was a devastating volcanic explosion. Boom! Yi was violently introduced to the absolute, soul-crushing destructive might of a class entity. The scorching heat instantly melted through his magical shield like butter. Chin gasped as brutal burns blistered across his skin. Unrelenting, the monstrous minotaur hoisted its massive, flaming axe for the killing blow. Moving on pure survival instinct, Yi grabbed Chin's hand and yanked her back. The molten axe cleaved the air mere inches from her terrified face. But then, it completely froze in midair. Thick, writhing ropes of shadow had entangled the beast's limbs. Eyes wide with awe, she looked at Ye and asked if he was secretly a control type too. Sweat poured down his face as he yelled that the bindings would not hold a class monster for long. He ordered her to sprint into the depths of the labyrinth and not look back until she was miles away. Her heart skipped a beat, confusion clouding her eyes. Was he seriously going to stay behind and face this nightmare alone? With a fierce grin, he declared he was the only one who could buy her time to survive. Anxiety gripping her chest, she hesitated. But he commanded her to hide well, promising he would survive and hunt her down later. Let us be clear, it was not some noble knight complex driving him to protect her. To a ruthless pragmatist like him, keeping her breathing meant securing his $1 million paycheck. Luden, now a towering inferno of rage, furiously scanned the cavern. Suddenly, Yi manifested from the shadows right behind his back. The beast bellowed, demanding to know where the girl was, before swinging his molten axe with devastating force. Yi just smirked, his eyes flashing with defiance. He told the monster to take a wild guess. Luden was stunned by the stealthy flank. Yi drove his blade straight for the monster's leg, but a nasty shock awaited the young miner. The magma-infused rock skin was completely impenetrable, leaving not even a scratch. A booming, demonic laugh echoed from the beast. He mocked Ye's pathetic attempt to shatter solid bedrock with a simple dagger. With a terrifying pivot, Luden unleashed a bone-crushing counterattack. The environment was turning against him. The expanding pools of lava made every step a lethal gamble. Realizing he needed breathing room, Ye sprinted for the open cavern, baiting the raging titan into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Rumbling like a freight train, Luden charged after him, taunting the boy for running away like a coward. But deep in the darkness, Ye's shadow eye blazed to life once more, ready to turn the tides. Ye knew the golden rule of battle. No matter how monstrous the opponent, an absolute weak point always existed. Luden, on the other hand, arrogantly planned to slaughter this annoyance first before hunting down Qian. "Die, you insect!" the brute roared. But Ye's predatory gaze had already locked onto the target. The fatal blind spot. He tunneled all his focus into that single opening, only for Luden to bark out a mocking laugh. He already knew exactly what Ye was plotting. Those petty parlor tricks meant absolutely nothing against overwhelming brute force. A suffocating pressure crashed down, threatening to crush Ye under the sheer weight of his aura. How could a mere C rank hold this much devastating power? Backed against the cold stone wall, Ye watched the juggernaut charge like a runaway freight train. Yet, he did not flinch. He just stood there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A twisted, sinister grin crept across Luden's face. Had the little rat finally given up on running? The sight of Ye raising those pathetic daggers was absolutely hilarious to him. "You think those rusty toothpicks can pierce my armor?" he bellowed. "They will not even leave a scratch." Patience is a hunter's greatest weapon. The moment Luden recklessly swung his massive frame forward, the opening presented itself. Ye moved like a phantom, striking directly at the vulnerability. The target was dead center on his spine. But just as the blade approached the mark, a blinding, hellish light erupted from the spot. Ye was completely caught off guard. Boiling magma pulsed beneath the enemy's skin. The blistering heat radiating from his back was so absolute, even the abyssal chill of the shadow energy began to melt away. Ye clicked his tongue. The meathead actually had half a brain. He had intentionally wrapped his fatal flaw in a searing fortress of fire. Luden scoffed, confused as to how a lowly miner sniffed out his secret, but he proudly admitted the truth. It was indeed his one and only weak point. And yet, he held zero fear in revealing it. Why? Because that very spot burned at a staggering 2,000 degrees Celsius. To touch it was to invite instant incineration. The fiery tyrant offered a devil's bargain, hand over Cheon, and he would graciously let Ye walk away with his life. Ye's response was a venomous glare. "I do not make deals with backstabbing trash," he spat. That struck a massive nerve. "Then die, you arrogant brat." Luden roared with volcanic fury, bringing his blazing axe down in a devastating arc. He taunted the shadow wielder to stand his ground, instead of scuttling away like a coward. In a flash, Ye willed his darkness to shift, morphing the fluid shadow into a wicked chain blade. As Luden instinctively recoiled, Ye threw his own taunt right back. Look who is dodging now. Seizing the momentum, the shadow reshaped once more, striking out like a deadly viper aimed right at the blazing spine. The dark tendril nearly connected, but was instantly reduced to ash by the superheated aura. Frustration began to gnaw at Ye. The blazing brute threw his head back in roaring laughter, mocking the pathetic display. "Give it up! Your struggles are absolutely meaningless." Sweat dripped down Ye's chin. His mana reserves were depleting at an alarming rate, burning away like dry wood in a furnace. The situation was turning dire. The thought of begging Cheon for power crossed his mind, but he crushed it instantly. He would rather die standing than surrender control of his own body ever again. Beyond his pride, there was a hunter's greed. Slaying a C-rank monster meant a massive explosion of experience points. This was a golden ticket to absolute power, and he refused to let it slip through his fingers. Gritting his teeth, he launched himself straight back at the fiery blind spot. Conviction blazed brighter than the flames. Ignoring the searing agony peeling at his skin, he poured every ounce of his soul into one final thrust. A sharp metallic clink rang out. The dagger had finally kissed the burning core. An earth-shattering howl erupted from Luden's throat. System warnings blared as his health bar plummeted into the red, forcefully triggering a primal berserker rage. Bloodlust saturated the air as his attack power, critical hit rate, and agility skyrocketed by 200%. Ye's eyes narrowed in confusion as the tyrant's aura violently mutated. Before he could even blink, a shockwave of pure force slammed into his chest. Ye was launched like a ragdoll, cratering into the dungeon wall with a bone-shattering impact. To think a filthy, bottom-feeding miner had pushed him to the absolute brink. Bloodied and covered in third-degree burns, Ye slowly raised his head. It was time to pull the curtain on this nightmare. But right in the jaws of defeat, a strange sensation rippled through his core. Instead of fading, the shadow energy was roaring to life, pulsing with a terrifying, unfathomable density. Cheon's ancient voice echoed in his mind. That hidden dormant power had belonged to Ye all along. His fragile mortal vessel simply lacked the capacity to draw it out, not until it had been forged in the fires of extreme, agonizing heat. "You just struck the mother lode, kid," the entity chuckled. "Welcome to the next evolution of the shadows." Dark mists swirled around Ye's battered frame. To his absolute shock, the abyssal energy was actively stitching his burnt flesh back together. But Cheon smirked, declaring it was vastly more than mere regeneration. Across the battlefield, Luden felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The boy's aura had mutated into something deeply sinister. Panic flared in the giant's eyes. He could not let this monster fully awaken. He swung with murderous intent, but Ye simply glided backward, flowing out of reach like water. Impossible! Even with his speed boosted threefold, his strike hit nothing but empty air. A terrifying realization struck Luden. Was this untouchable phantom truly just a miserable E rank? Desperation took over. Roaring like a cornered beast, Ludin summoned a tidal wave of scorching magma to drown the entire cavern. There would be nowhere to run. Yet, as the molten rock washed over the battlefield, Ye did not take a single step. The fiery tyrant grinned, expecting to hear the satisfying sizzle of turning flesh into ash, but his jaw dropped in sheer horror. The boy was standing amidst the bubbling lava, completely untouched. The ultimate cheat skill, shadow enhancement. If just the basic tier granted this level of absurd invincibility, Ye could not help but smirk at the thought of unlocking its maximum potential. Is that all you have got, Boiler Boy? Ye mocked, his voice dripping with icy superiority. The temperature in here is a little too chilly for my taste. Ludin was paralyzed by disbelief. Ye's eyes gleamed with a predatory light. You had your fun swinging that oversized toy around, he whispered. But now, the hunt begins. The ground shattered beneath Ye's feet. He vanished in a blur of pitch-black lightning, fueled by the monstrous shadow enhancement that multiplied his defense, strength, and speed by a staggering 200%. A clean slice echoed through the cavern. Ludin stared blankly at his wrist, unable to comprehend that his massive hand was completely gone. Spewing venomous curses, the beast lunged forward to crush the boy's skull. But with a casual flick of the dark daggers, his remaining arm dissolved into a spray of blood and ash. Refusing to fall, molten rock spiraled around his stumps, forging brand new limbs out of bubbling lava. He barked a triumphant laugh, boasting that his endless regeneration made him an immortal god of the battlefield. Hearing this grandiose claim, Ye slightly furrowed his brows, a dark, mocking amusement dancing in his eyes. Immortal? I highly doubt that, Ye smirked. Your mana signature is bleeding out like a stuck pig. Enraged by the absolute disrespect, Ludin screamed at him to attack again and prove it. Challenge accepted. In a relentless symphony of destruction, Ye carved through the regenerated limbs like butter. Slash after slash, he trapped the flaming tyrant in an endless, agonizing cycle of dismemberment. He would not stop until nothing was left. Shock painted Ludin's face. No matter how hard he tried, his body refused to heal. Panic setting in, he demanded to know what dark magic this was. Ye simply stared him down, his voice ice cold. Your life force has completely reached its absolute limit. Desperation dripping from his voice, Ludin begged him to stop. Sweating bullets, he tried to negotiate. Listen to me. We hold no grudges against each other. There is absolutely no reason for us to fight to the bitter end. A knowing smirk tugged at the corner of Ye's mouth. True enough, he admitted calmly. But do not forget the contract. Qin paid handsomely for my protection, and I always deliver on a deal. Seeing an opening, Ludin frantically played his final card. If money is what you want, name your price. Just hand the girl over, let me get back to the city, and I will double whatever she is paying you. I will give you 5 million right here, right now. But Ye was no fool. A venomous snake like Ludin would only bite the hand that spared it. Let him go, and he would just come crawling back with an army of goons to claim Ye's life. Sweating under Ye's piercing gaze, Ludin swore up and down that he would never dream of seeking revenge. But Ye's eyes were filled with absolute disgust. Save your breath, he scoffed. To me, you are nothing but a treacherous, backstabbing rat. Suddenly, a brilliant scheme sparked in Ye's mind. Why take dirty money when he could hand this traitor over on a silver platter to Qin Xiaowang? The boss of Dragon Gate 3 Streets would gladly empty his vault to torture the man who attacked his precious daughter. By saving her and capturing this rat, Ye would not just get paid. He would secure a monumental personal favor from the underworld's biggest kingpin. That favor alone was worth infinitely more than 5 measly million. Reading his mind, Ludin's blood ran cold. He knew Xiaowang would flay him alive, and the organization would hunt his family to the ends of the earth. Pushed to the brink of madness, a deranged look flashed across Ludin's face. If you force my hand, I am taking us all to hell. He reached for a glowing crystal. Qing Tian's ancient voice rang out in pure shock. By the heavens, the boy holds a prison gate fragment. He frantically warned Ye. If that crystal shatters, the beast realm will lose its only anchor to the outside world. The portal will be erased from existence, and we will be entombed in this nightmare dimension for all of eternity. You brought this upon yourself. Ludin roared like a cornered beast. A blinding trail of destructive light surged into his palm, ready to crush the relic. But Ye was faster than a lightning strike. In a blinding flash, he snatched the fragment right out of the air. With a ruthless thrust, he pierced Ludin's fatal blind spot, sending an agonizing scream echoing through the cavern. A flurry of devastating slashes tore through the traitor's body, sending him crashing into the dirt, utterly defeated. Instantly, the glowing energy core was forcefully extracted, flowing directly into Ye's body. A system notification dinged. A massive skill evolution had begun. The power surged beyond limits. Shadow Sense. Two miraculously evolved into the legendary Ultimate Shadow Sense, but there was no time to celebrate as a catastrophic rumbling shook the very earth beneath them. Qing Tian sounded the alarm. Without the lava and the Minotaur's blazing energy anchoring it, this dimension is tearing itself apart. Sprinting for their lives, they burst through the abyssal exit just as the realm collapsed behind them. Outside the rift, surviving awakened players collapsed to their knees, gasping for air. Voices trembled with pure terror as they recounted their miraculous escape from the jaws of death. Chin turned to her savior, her eyes wide with absolute awe. I had no idea you were hiding such monstrous power. There is no way you are just an E-rank awakened. With her heart pounding, she extended a formal invitation. Join Dragon Gate 3 Streets. With your godlike skills, my father would treat a fighter like you like absolute royalty. But the lone wolf simply shook his head. Thanks, but guild life is not for me. He locked eyes with her. Just do me one favor, and keep my true strength completely off the radar. Respecting his boundaries, she did not press the issue, graciously handing over his hard-earned reward. Before walking away into the shadows, Ye paused. Does your guild purchase high-tier weapons like my blade? Her professional instincts kicked in as she carefully inspected the steel. I will need our master appraisers to take a look, but I give you my word. Whatever its true value, you will see every single penny. A satisfied grin crossed Ye's face. That works for me. He could tell just by how she handled the blade that she possessed a deep knowledge of weapons. If her eyes were truly that sharp, he had just scored a very important person merchant for all his future monster drops. And hey, even if she turned out to be a cheapskate like that swindler boss Wang, he was still walking away as a massive winner today. After all, he had a cool 1 million resting comfortably in his pocket. The moment he stepped through his front door, Ye pulled out the glowing prison gate fragment. The mysterious aura radiating from it filled him with burning curiosity. Just what kind of artifact is this? Qing Tian's voice echoed in his mind, dripping with temptation. Gather enough of those fragments, boy, and your power will skyrocket straight to S rank or even beyond. The mere thought of that untouchable tier made his blood boil with excitement. But in the dark corners of his mind, the ancient spirit felt a shiver of dread. The reappearance of the prison gate fragments. Could it mean those ancient monsters are still lurking in the shadows? Qing Tian knew he had to accelerate his own soul recovery, and this extraordinary kid was the absolute key. He envisioned a terrifying future, a day when Ye would have to clash with cosmic horrors beyond human comprehension. Heavy with this burden, the spirit debated with himself. Is it time to reveal the cruel truth of this world to him? He quickly dismissed the thought with a heavy sigh. Too soon. It would only crush the boy's spirit with paralyzing fear. Let him forge his strength in ignorance for just a little while longer. The scene shifted to a heavily guarded sector. The NG Group's E-Class Wraith Zone was locked down tight, supposedly due to a tragic mining accident. Standing on the jagged cliff's edge, Ye glared down at the forbidden territory. His enhanced vision quickly scanned the perimeter. 1 B-Class powerhouse and 3 C-Class elites patrolling the gates. He clenched his fists in frustration. Why deploy such top-tier awakened to guard a supposedly worthless rift? Reality hit him like a punch to the gut. With his current power level, kicking down the front door to uncover the truth was nothing but a suicide mission. Confused by his fixation, Qing Tian spoke up. Why waste your time staring at a lowly E-Class dimensional rift? What could possibly be hidden down there? The answer carried the weight of a shattered world. The absolute truth behind my parents' murder. A dark memory flashed in Ye's mind. The day the NG Group handed him a pathetic 200,000 as blood money. The cold corporate suits had pushed the cash into his shaking hands. Sign this non-disclosure form, they demanded. Just acknowledge their deaths as an unfortunate, unavoidable accident. But the young Ye had stood frozen in defiance. Annoyed by his silence, a smug corporate elite had sneered, "Is this mountain of cash not enough to buy your silence?" Ye's voice trembled with righteous fury. "Keep your dirty money. I want the truth." The suit's eyes turned dead and cold. It was a cavern collapse. Your parents and the other dirt diggers were simply crushed, but Ye fiercely rejected their lies. Both his mother and father were battle-hardened, C-Class awakened. A simple rockfall could never kill them. Desperate and grieving, he had lunged toward the restricted zone. I have to go in there. I have to find them. Deep down, he clung to the agonizing hope that they were still fighting to survive. But a massive mountain of a guard intercepted him, hoisting the boy up by his collar. Listen here, brat. The Wraith Zone is a realm of death. Even C-Class heroes can get ripped to shreds in the blink of an eye. Yi thrashed against the iron grip, his voice cracking with tears. Liar. It is only an E-Class zone. The monsters in there are trash. They cannot kill a C-Class. The brute just tightened his chokehold, barking at him to behave. But the fire in Ye's eyes refused to die. Even if they were ambushed by an entire horde of monsters, my parents would have fought their way out alive. The truth was buried in that rift, and he swore upon his soul that he would unearth it. Fury flared in the eyes of the suited man. He was convinced this was nothing but a cheap shakedown for extra cash. His fist pulled back for a devastating strike. But a booming voice suddenly shattered the tension, roaring at them to stop. The imposing figure stepping forward was none other than Ning Donghao, the mighty chairman of NG Group and a legendary A-class awakened. A heavy aura washed over the room as the chairman harshly reprimanded his subordinates. He had explicitly ordered them to treat the grieving family with the utmost respect. Offering a thick envelope of cash, he hoped to ease the young man's immediate burdens. But Ye firmly pushed the money away, his eyes burning with unyielding resolve. He did not want a payoff, he demanded the absolute truth. Meeting his intense gaze, the chairman swore a solemn oath. He promised to launch a full-scale investigation, vowing to bring every dark secret to the light. At that moment, the naive young man actually believed him. He foolishly clung to the hope that justice would swiftly prevail. However, the cruel reality hit him like a physical blow. The corrupt corporation completely twisted the narrative, branding his dead parents as mere thieves and slapping him with an astronomical debt of millions in damages. From within his consciousness, Qingtian let out a dark chuckle. He scoffed that across all realms and races, the tragic rule remains the same. The weak are forever crushed beneath the boots of the strong. The ancient entity urged him to harvest more Riftgate fragments. Once his power reached divine heights, shattering their web of lies would take nothing but a mere whisper. Yi remained outwardly stoic, but the phantom easily read the storm brewing in his mind. Internal frustration boiled over as he mentally cursed Qingtian and his chaotic shadow energy. It was exactly this volatile power that crippled his evaluation, unfairly branding him as a pathetic E-class weakling. The contradictions were driving him absolute insane. If this demonic entity truly intended to steal his body, why on earth was he actively helping him level up? Was this lingering spirit a guardian angel or a lurking parasite? He reasoned that if this ancient being was truly out of his mind, then his grand promise of reaching the legendary S-class was nothing but a madman's delusion. Reading his exact thoughts, Qingtian snapped back with sheer arrogance. He made it crystal clear that if the boy lacked hidden potential, he would not have wasted a single second on such trash. Yi shot back defensively. He had not even spoken a single word out loud, yet the ancient spirit was throwing a monumental tantrum. This bizarre outburst only cemented his suspicions. The spirit living inside his head was absolutely unhinged, but the argument was cut short by a sudden notification. A new mission invite had just dropped. Upon arriving at the perilous D-class Wraith Zone, known as the Chemical Sector, a sharply dressed handler immediately barked at Ye for his tardiness. He casually brushed it off by blaming the long distance. In truth, he had just sprinted out of a grueling E-class dungeon without taking a single breath. Amidst the gathering crowd, a familiar weathered face lit up with recognition. It was Uncle Hao! The older man beamed with genuine warmth at the sight of him. A bittersweet feeling hung in the air, as 5 long years had passed since the tragic incident that took his parents. However, the touching reunion was swiftly ruined by arrogant scoffs from the nearby crew. They crossed their arms in disgust, complaining that they had been forced to wait for some legendary big shot, only to discover that their final party member was nothing more than an absolute deadweight loser. Radiating intense hostility, this trio of thugs were known as the infamous Gu Brothers. Da, and San were ruthless battlefield mercenaries, and all fully fledged C-class awakened. The handler quickly tried to defuse the rising tension, explaining that since this was merely a mining extraction, wasting the stamina of advanced combatants was unnecessary. But Gu viciously cut him off, roaring at the suit to stop yapping and drop the mission details. Flustered, the suited man laid out the parameters. They were entering a volatile D-class spatial rift, and their sole objective was to secure a bounty of ice crystal ore, successfully extracting exactly 60 kilograms for research samples. Standing quietly in the back, the sharp instincts of the main character went on high alert. Why on earth would a simple D-class dungeon require the heavy muscle of C-class mercenaries? The combat power was completely overkill for a basic gathering quest. His gaze then shifted to a shadowy figure cloaked in heavy robes, a sinister man going by the name of Hasey. He was yet another C-class gun for hire. The suffocating stench of bloodlust dripping from this entire squad made one thing perfectly clear. Not a single soul in this party was an honorable man. Worse still, his enhanced perception picked up a chilling anomaly. A faint, yet undeniable C-class aura was already lurking deep within the uncharted Wraith Zone. Miles away, a menacing figure monitored the rift gate through a live feed on his phone. A wicked grin stretched across his face as he whispered that all his little toys were finally in the box. The bloody hunt was officially underway. This lurking predator was none other than Blood Leopard, the dreaded second-in-command of the notorious Black Leopard Syndicate. The moment they crossed the spatial threshold, the dungeon's oppressive atmosphere hit them. Uncle Hao nervously asked the boy why he had not equipped a hazard suit. With a confident smirk, Ye assured him that as a newly awakened, his body could easily handle the toxic environment. Overhearing this, San let out a mocking laugh, joking that an ascended rock smasher was a truly rare breed of pathetic. Ear chimed in with a venomous sneer, warning his brother to show some respect to the undisputed king of the garbage dumps. The older man gently squeezed the boy's shoulder. silently begging him not to take the bait. But Ye remained completely unfazed, calmly reassuring his uncle that he had zero intentions of doing anything stupid. His eyes were too busy analyzing the treacherous terrain. The mutated flora seemed artificially arranged to create perfect ambush points, and shivering down his spine was the undeniable sensation of raw, unfiltered killing intent. A blur of motion suddenly flashed across his peripheral vision. His combat instincts flared up as he realized the hidden predator tracking them was clearly losing its patience. His mind raced with tactical possibilities. Would the assassin strike from the absolute dark, or was this part of a much deadlier trap? His thoughts were shattered as San barked at him to pick up the pace. Uncle Hao hurriedly apologized, promising they would march faster, but for Ye, this was the perfect opportunity. He could use the twisting dungeon layout to ditch the mercenaries and become the unseen observer. Without a single moment of hesitation, he firmly grabbed the older man's arm and whispered a sharp command to hold on for dear life. Da cursed out loud, absolutely bewildered by the incredible speed of a mere minor. He screamed at them to halt, but the group leader just scoffed. He ordered them to let the trash run away, stating that without their protection in a D-class zone, those two fools were as good as corpse meat anyway. High above the canopy, a mysterious crimson-haired figure lounged on a thick branch. His piercing gaze locked onto the remaining Gu brothers below. He tilted his head, genuinely curious if these so-called seasoned mercenaries had even noticed the suffocating aura of death closing in on them. Licking his lips with morbid anticipation, a twisted smile formed on his face. It actually thrilled him. If every prey was as brain-dead as this trio, this survival game would be completely devoid of entertainment. Down on the ground, Da finally broke the silence, muttering that this entire contract felt like a massive death trap. The paranoia was eating away at his nerves. From the very second they crossed the rift gate, the agonizing feeling of unseen eyes tracking their every move had not stopped. The eldest brother angrily told him to swallow his fear. He arrogantly reminded his siblings that this was nothing but a pitiful D-rank stroll. As Elite C rank awakened, they were untouchable gods in this low-level swamp, but San was already trembling, his face pale with dread. He confessed that a sickening chill was crawling up his spine, practically begging his brothers to abandon the mission and retreat. The eldest roared at him to stop acting like a coward, but the words barely left his mouth before absolute terror froze their faces. A lethal strike came from the blind spot. Razor-sharp crimson threads violently wrapped around the youngest brother's skull, sealing his fate in an instant. Fear flashed in his eyes as he recognized the infamous blood leopard. He begged for his life, pleading to talk things out before blood was spilled. But Blood Leopard just sneered. They had dared to provoke the Black Leopard gang one too many times. The time for talking was long gone. With a mere flick of his fingers, the deadly strings pulled taut, dicing San's body into pieces right before their horrified eyes. Consumed by blazing fury, Da blindly charged forward. Someone tried to hold him back, but crimson threads instantly ensnared his fist, wrapping around his entire body like a deadly spiderweb. The razor-sharp silk sliced effortlessly through flesh and bone, brutally dismantling him in a matter of seconds. Driven by pure, unadulterated terror, the last survivor ran for his life. This only sent Blood Leopard into a manic frenzy, relishing the sweet scent of his prey's despair. Meanwhile, Ye and Hao had stopped to catch their breath. Hao panted, asking why they had abandoned the other awakened fighters. Ye ignored the question, instead asking Hao if he had crossed paths with any dangerous factions recently. Hao scoffed in disbelief. He was just a kid. How could he possibly offend anyone important? He demanded to know why Ye was asking such a thing. Our main character's eyes darkened as he revealed the chilling truth. This mission was a complete death trap, and someone powerful wanted every single one of them buried in this cursed place. Hao trembled, confessing that he was terrified. Yi looked him dead in the eye, urging him to spill whatever secrets he was hiding before it was too late. Out of nowhere, Erluo burst onto the scene. He screamed at Ye, furiously blaming him for the slaughter of his brothers because he had kept the danger a secret. Ye simply coldly smirked. He mocked Erluo, noting that at least he would not die useless, since his loud mouth had perfectly drawn out the mastermind lurking in the shadows. That arrogant comment ignited Erluo's rage. He roared, asking him to repeat himself. He calmly looked up and stated a chilling fact. He was already a dead man. Before Erluo could react, glowing red threads ensnared him. Blood Leopard stepped out of the darkness, chuckling that he never expected a mere kid to be this entertaining. Ye instantly awakened his ultimate shadow eye. The demonic aura flared, while Hao completely froze in terror at the sight of the notorious Blood Leopard. Hao dropped to his knees, pleading for mercy. He cried out that they were just teenagers who had never done anything to provoke him. But the assassin's gaze was completely devoid of mercy. A few days ago, in a drunken slip of the tongue, Hao had accidentally revealed that he knew too much, marking himself as a prime target for elimination. Blood Leopard was a terrifying C rank awakened. His monstrous skill, the blood spider silk, used high-frequency vibrations to slice through human weak points within a devastating 10-meter radius. Desperation clawed at Hao's throat. He swore on his life that he would take the secret to his grave, promising never to breathe a word of it to anyone. But to an assassin, promises meant absolutely nothing. Ye screamed at Hao to dodge, but the warning came a second too late. A brutal strike pierced straight through Hao's shoulder. Blood Leopard smiled a twisted smile. In his dark world, only corpses could truly keep secrets. Spitting a vicious curse, Ye exploded into action. Steel clashed violently against steel, and though his dual blades were blocked, Blood Leopard was genuinely surprised by the boy's explosive combat prowess. The assassin smirked. Suddenly, it made perfect sense how this kid had managed to crush that low-life punk Jiao Ting. However, Blood Leopard arrogantly declared that this was where his luck ended. A deadly claw swiped at Ye's throat, forcing him to leap backward just in time to avoid a fatal gash. If the boy was so eager to meet the Grim Reaper, the assassin was more than happy to oblige. Feeling the overwhelming pressure, Ye surged his mana, fully activating his shadow enhancement. A storm of relentless strikes rained down upon him. Ye desperately parried the flurry of lethal blows, but the sheer power difference was pushing him to his absolute limit. Seizing a split-second opening, Blood Leopard delivered a devastating claw strike, sending Ye crashing violently against a massive tree. Hao tried to rush to his aid, but Ye fiercely ordered him to stay back. Engaging in close-quarters combat against this monster was pure suicide. If he wanted to survive, he desperately needed to flip the script and change his battle strategy. The assassin confidently declared that both of them would be buried here tonight. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Ye coldly shot back that the night was still young. His ultimate shadow eye blazed with an eerie, unstoppable light. Summoning his shadow morph dagger, he unleashed a phantom-like assault. But incredibly, every single strike was effortlessly deflected. Blood Leopard laughed, mocking the boy's pathetic struggles. He found it amusing that a kid possessed such rare techniques, but what a pity. An E-rank ant could never defeat a C-rank predator. But just then, the earth shattered. Gu-san erupted from the ground below, wrapping his serpentine body tightly around the arrogant assassin in a deadly bind. Blood Leopard merely scoffed. He had fully anticipated the snake waiting to strike when his guard was down. The fool had practically dug his own grave. Gu-san's binding technique was his fatal mistake, because close-quarters carnage was precisely where Blood Leopard reigned supreme. Invisible crimson threads instantly coiled around Gu's neck. In a flash of brutal vibration, the ambusher's entire body was shredded into a rain of blood and flesh. Yi's heart pounded against his ribs. A powerful C-rank fighter had been casually obliterated in seconds. Knowing he stood zero chance in a direct clash, he immediately shifted his focus to grabbing Hao and escaping this nightmare. But escaping a predator's domain was near impossible. As the suffocating darkness of night deepened, Yi managed to buy just enough time to patch up Hao's bleeding shoulder. He promised the trembling boy that he would carve a path out for them. But Hao shook his head with tearful eyes, begging Ye to leave him behind so he would not be dead weight. Ignoring the emotional plea, Ye demanded the truth. What massive secret was worth a high-tier assassin hunting a kid down so relentlessly? Tears streamed down Hao's face as he confessed the horrifying truth. He had uncovered the dark reality behind his parents' tragic deaths. Upon hearing this, the aura around Ye instantly turned icy and dead serious. The puzzle pieces were finally connecting. Gripping the boy's shoulders, Ye fiercely commanded Hao to spill every single detail he knew. Hao choked back his sobs. He had been uncertain before, but this ruthless assassination attempt basically confirmed his worst nightmare. The powerful executive, Qiu Shihao, was hiding something incredibly sinister. He revealed that right before the disastrous mining incident years ago, his father had stumbled upon a terrifying conspiracy. Qiu Shihao was secretly running highly illegal, dangerous experiments deep within the forbidden mining sector. As if orchestrated by fate, a catastrophic mining collapse occurred just days later. To silence them forever, his parents were brutally murdered and posthumously framed for stealing precious ores. Yi frowned, asking why he had carried this heavy burden in silence all these years. Hao lowered his head in shame, admitting the crushing truth. He was just a terrified child, living in a world controlled by monsters. After all, he was still just a kid. He couldn't risk losing his only lifeline, not when his family's survival rested heavily on his shoulders. But Ye's gaze remained cold and hollow. How could he forgive him for standing frozen while his parents were buried under such cruel injustice? The suffocating guilt had devoured Hao from the inside. A few reckless drinks had loosened his tongue, dragging down this fatal disaster upon his own head. Suddenly, a chilling killing intent filled the air. Blood Leopard descended from the shadows, unleashing a storm of crimson threads that instantly bound Hao's trembling body. Knowing the Reaper had finally come for him, Hao offered a desperate, tearful apology, begging Ye to let go of the hatred in his heart. In a flash of sickening crimson, Hao's life was mercilessly snuffed out. Blood Leopard licked his lips, realizing this boy standing before him was the orphaned son of those two rank C hunters. With a twisted grin, the assassin lunged forward, eager to reunite the boy with his dead parents. But Ye planted his feet, his aura blazing with defiance. A brutal slash tore through the air, catching the young hunter off guard. Blood Leopard chuckled darkly, mocking that watching his own flesh be shredded would be a thrilling spectacle. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Yi fiercely shot back that those pathetic crimson threads were far from invincible. Channeling his mana, he triggered Shadow Morph, forging a massive greatsword from the abyss. His combat instincts flared to life. Yi deduced a critical flaw in his enemy's technique. The exact moment Blood Leopard launched an attack, his defense was utterly exposed. With a devastating swing, he shattered the crimson threads. Blood Leopard's eyes widened in shock, swiftly retaliating with an overwhelming tsunami of razor-sharp silk. The assassin was stunned by the boy's absolute ruthlessness, willingly trading flesh for flesh in a suicidal clash, but the heavy toll finally forced Ye to his knees. His battered body was rapidly approaching its breaking point. Seeing the boy gasp for air, the sadistic killer sneered, realizing the kid's bravado was just a desperate bluff. Smirking that the little rat had actually managed to startle him, he summoned another deadly wave of threads. He coldly mocked that if he weren't merely a ranky weakling, the outcome might have been entirely different. He aggressively taunted the boy to stand up and fight. Seeing the unyielding, venomous glare in Ye's eyes only made the assassin burst into manic laughter. There was nothing he savored more than watching a helpless ant struggle against absolute despair. To push the boy over the edge, he leaned in to whisper a soul-crushing secret. He smugly confessed that the tragic mining accident was a complete fabrication. The bitter truth? Ye's parents were brutally butchered by his very own hands. The murderer delighted in the sheer hatred radiating from the boy's face. He twisted the knife deeper, whispering that when he slaughtered Ye's mother, his father wore that exact same pathetic expression. His father was forced to watch in agonizing despair as Blood Leopard slowly tore the woman he loved into ribbons. Suddenly, the deadly crimson threads began to disintegrate into ash. The assassin recoiled in total disbelief as an apocalyptic tide of pitch-black energy erupted from Ye's body. Like a ghost stepping out of the abyss, Ye materialized directly behind him. With fangs bared in pure, untamed fury, he vowed to tear the assassin limb from limb. It was exactly as the mysterious Qin Tian had calculated. Pure, unadulterated hatred had acted as a catalyst, forcibly awakening the dormant shadow magic in his veins. System alerts blared in his mind as overwhelming shadow energy surged. The brutal level correction was instantly finalized. Rank C shadow enhancement had officially broken through to Tier 2. And that wasn't all. He had unlocked a legendary evasion technique, Shadow Jaunt, a divine ability granting him the power to dissolve into darkness and instantly emerge from any connected shadow. Blood Leopard's jaw dropped in absolute horror. The fatal wounds covering the boy's body were knitting themselves back together in the blink of an eye. He had no idea this brat possessed self-healing arts. Yet, arrogance clouded his judgment. A twisted smile crept back onto his face, thrilled to hunt a prey that refused to die so easily. But Ye merely scoffed at the assassin's foolish confidence. His voice echoed with the chill of the underworld, declaring that within this domain of darkness, Blood Leopard was the only prey. The veteran killer's eyes widened in sheer panic. The boy's combat power had skyrocketed to an utterly monstrous level. Before he could even blink, a phantom-like blur bypassed his vision. Yi had already flanked him. Knowing a single strike wouldn't be enough, the Shadow Monarch unleashed a devastating flying dagger swarm. Even then, the assassin sneered, thinking mere projectiles were useless. But Ye's combo had just begun. Fusing his daggers with the abyss, he triggered the ultimate movement art, Shadow Jaunt Flying Thunderstep. The explosive teleportation completely shattered the killer's rhythm. Yet, he stubbornly clung to his pride, swearing those pathetic toy knives would never pierce his absolute defense. Moving faster than the speed of sound, Ye flickered back into view. With a cold smirk, he whispered into his enemy's ear that breaking his defense was never the plan. The young hunter had completely analyzed his opponent's fatal flaw. Blood Leopard's pathetic brain simply couldn't process high-speed offense and defense simultaneously. The heavy concentration required to manipulate those cursed crimson threads completely bottlenecked his physical reflexes. That was his Achilles' heel. A tempest of steel and shadow rained down without mercy. Brutal gashes erupted across Blood Leopard's body, making him vomit dark blood. The infamous assassin was reeling, unable to accept he was being dismantled by a mere high schooler. Pressing his blood-stained blade against the killer's throat, Yi's aura flared with a demonic intensity. He demanded the absolute truth behind the so-called mining incident. Just as the trembling assassin opened his mouth to speak about Ye's mother, a flash of black steel cleanly severed his right arm. A blood-curdling scream of agony echoed through the desolate streets. Ye's patience had completely evaporated. Gasping for life, the mutilated killer dared to ask what this boy could possibly do with the truth before finally spitting out the name of the true mastermind, Qi Shi. Years ago, Ye's father had accidentally uncovered a horrifying underground experiment. Terrified that his dark secrets would be exposed to the world, the mastermind orchestrated the fake mine collapse to silence them forever. A murderous tempest raged within the young hunter's soul. Blood Leopard wheezed, fully expecting the boy to cower in terror upon hearing the legendary NG group's name. With a mocking grin, he advised the kid to back off and let him live. But his arrogant words were cut short. In a seamless arc of shadow and steel, Yi mercilessly severed his head from his shoulders. Staring down at the lifeless corpse, Ye made a chilling vow to the heavens. Every single corrupt soul involved in his parents' slaughter would drown in a river of their own blood. A torrential rain began to pour, washing away the stench of death. Standing like a grim reaper outside the towering NG Group headquarters, Ye locked his predatory gaze onto Shi Hao, who was just stepping into a luxury car. Watching from the shadows, the seasoned Qin Tian quickly intervened. He sternly warned the grief-stricken boy not to throw his life away on a suicidal frontal assault. Because in the brutal world of corporate powerhouses, breaking through to rank C was only the beginning of a much deadlier game. He could clearly sense the oppressive aura of a rank A awakener nearby. He knew exactly who was inside that vehicle. It was the chairman of the NG Group, sitting right beside the advanced rank A powerhouse, Ning Donghao. Trailing them through the shadows, he promised Qing Tian he wouldn't do anything reckless like attacking Shi Hao right then and there. Besides, taking the words of a scum like Blood Leopard at face value was a fool's game. He needed absolute proof. He had to dig out the truth about his parents' tragedy. Was Shi Hao the sole mastermind behind it all, or were the blood-stained hands of the entire NG Group involved? Even if an advanced powerhouse like Ning Donghao was part of the conspiracy, it made zero difference. In his eyes, a debt of blood could only be washed away with blood. The convoy finally rolled to a stop at the Black Panther gang's hidden warehouse. Yi narrowed his eyes from the darkness. What kind of shady business was Shi Hao conducting in the dead of night? Inside, a menacing figure draped in a pitch-black trench coat was barking orders. He aggressively commanded his lackeys to handle the mysterious experimental equipment with extreme caution. Stepping into the dimly lit room, Shi Hao coldly demanded to know if the old miner, Hao Wu, had been eliminated. The man in black delivered grim news. Blood Leopard had vanished without a trace, and the otherworldly gate used for the infiltration had completely collapsed. However, the trenchcoat-wearing boss brushed it off. Whether that old miner's death could be confirmed or not meant absolutely nothing to their grand scheme. Shi Hao clicked his tongue in disbelief. Blood Leopard was a solid rank C. How could someone like him just disappear? The man in black scoffed, suspecting the fool had simply underestimated his prey. After all, this was a man who had slaughtered 4 advanced rank C awakeners in the past. Brushing off the failure, Shi Hao ordered the equipment to be loaded immediately to prevent any unforeseen disasters. Their twisted experiment was entering its most critical phase. One single mistake could ruin everything, so absolutely no slip-ups would be tolerated. The trenchcoat boss smirked and demanded to know if the cash was secured. Shi Hao flashed a wicked grin, promising that the funds were more than ready. Hiding in the rafters, Ye heard every single word. The final puzzle piece clicked into place. Shi Hao was indeed the culprit. But in that split second of realization, the man in black sharply turned his head. A burst of scorching flames incinerated the wooden crate as the boss roared, demanding to know who was hiding in the shadows, but Ye had already vanished like a ghost. Startled, Shi Hao asked what was going on. The man frowned deeply. He wondered if his mind was playing tricks on him, but the sheer, bone-chilling killing intent he just felt was undeniable. It was a dangerously close call for Ye. Crouching breathlessly behind another pile of cargo, Ye clenched his fists. A bitter realization washed over him. Being a rank C was still far too weak to take them down. The very next morning, Ye stood before the towering headquarters of the Qin Group. This massive enterprise was controlled by Qin Xiaoxiang, the absolute ruler of Longmen 3rd Street. Qing Tian floated beside him, highly doubtful that Ye was hunting for guild missions at the crack of dawn. He casually asked what their real objective was for the day. Ye's goal was twofold: track down the elusive third fragment and get a solid appraisal for his weapon's true value. Stepping inside, a polished receptionist warmly offered her assistance. He kept it simple. He told her he was here to see Qian. Blinking in surprise, the receptionist politely asked if he had scheduled a prior appointment with the eldest miss. Suddenly, a harsh scoff echoed through the lobby. A heavily perfumed woman, clinging desperately to a green-haired man's arm, stared at Ye with absolute disgust. She practically spat her words at him. How dare a filthy, low-class miner step foot into such a prestigious building, and to recklessly utter the eldest young miss's name without an ounce of respect? Ye instantly recognized the green-haired punk. It was Su Qing. As the vicious woman continued her barrage of insults, Su arrogantly demanded to know why the security hadn't tossed this trash onto the streets yet. Unfazed, Ye took a steady step forward. His voice was ice-cold as he asked if this pathetic display was the so-called grand hospitality of Longmen 3rd Street. Su threw his head back and laughed mockingly. To him, a poverty-stricken beggar didn't even qualify as a human being, let alone a guest. He sneered that Ye wasn't even worthy of being a watchdog for the Qin family. Yi let out a disappointed sigh. Were all the descendants of this mighty family just a bunch of arrogant, brainless young masters who loved courting death? Losing whatever patience he had left for finding Qian, he turned on his heel to leave. But of course, a spoiled brat like Su wasn't about to let his bruised ego go unpunished. He furiously commanded his bodyguards to cripple the boy. But the moment they lunged, Ye activated his shadow jaunt. In a terrifying blink of an eye, the guards were laid out cold, and Ye's iron grip was securely clamped around Su's trembling jaw. The gold-digging woman shrieked in absolute terror. She hysterically screamed at him to unhand young Master Qin immediately, threatening that the family's wrath would crush him into dust. With a disgusted click of his tongue, Ye tossed the young master aside like a bag of garbage, sending both him and the screaming woman crashing to the floor. He spared them solely out of respect for Qian. But mercy is wasted on fools. Humiliated and boiling with unprecedented rage, Su roared, vowing to slaughter him on the spot. Yi slowly turned back around, his eyes flashing with lethal intent. The explosive clash was mere seconds away. But before either could make a move, a powerful figure instantly materialized between them, effortlessly forcing them apart with a sharp command to stand down. It was a breathtaking woman with flowing silver hair. Her piercing gaze locked onto Ye, noting that he possessed an absurd amount of nerve to waltz in and cause absolute chaos within the Qin group's domain. Thinking his savior had arrived, Su barked like a rabid dog, screaming that Ye was a dead man walking. He smugly bragged that his powerful cousin would rip him to shreds for this disrespect. The silver-haired beauty raised her hand and coldly ordered the trash to be thrown out immediately. Hearing this, Su indignantly whined that tossing him out was far too merciful. He viciously demanded that they shatter the boy's limbs first, but suddenly, Iron Grip seized Su's arms instead. Panic washed over the green-haired punk's face as he desperately asked his cousin what in the world she was doing. His clingy girlfriend frantically tried to play the victim card. She stammered that the lowly miner had dared to utter the eldest Miss's sacred name and that young Master Qin was merely venting anger to defend her honor. Qian's expression turned absolutely glacial. She loudly declared to the entire lobby that this man was her esteemed friend. Therefore, he had every right in the world to call her by her first name. Without a shred of hesitation, she ordered her personal guards to drag the arrogant security team and that shrieking junior employee out of the building. They were officially blacklisted from the company forever. Dragged away in tears, the woman desperately wailed at young Master Qin to save her. She sobbed that she had given him everything, practically begging him to use his authority. But Qian ignored the noise. Turning her fury toward her pathetic cousin, she issued a bone-chilling warning. If he ever dared to drag the prestigious Qin family name through the mud to bully others again, she would absolutely never forgive him. With the trash finally disposed of, the terrifying aura around Qian instantly vanished. She turned to Ye with a soft, welcoming smile. Gesturing gracefully toward the VIP lounge, she invited him to stay for a while. She then bowed her head slightly, offering a sincere apology for the disgusting behavior displayed by a useless side-branch relative. He simply waved it off with a calm smirk. It was no big deal. After all, every massive family tree is bound to have a few rotten branches hanging from it. She guided him into a private VIP room, but their meeting was cut short. A staff member rushed in with an urgent message. The guild president demanded her presence. Apologizing, she asked him to wait right there, promising she would return in a flash. With a calm nod, he told her to take her time. She pressed the staff for details, wondering what could be so urgent. But the messenger knew nothing, only that Xiying was ordered to appear immediately. The moment the door clicked shut, a heavy spiritual pressure filled the room. The exit was suddenly blocked, as an imposing older gentleman stepped from the shadows, demanding to know exactly who Ye was. Yi immediately activated his ultimate shadow eye. The system interface glowed, revealing terrifying stats. This man was an A-rank powerhouse. He possessed the Eye of Deterrence, a terrifying skill designed to crush an opponent's spirit and completely paralyze their body. But that wasn't all. He also wielded Furious Thunder, a devastating combat art that supercharged his lightning attributes and multiplied his base stats. Facing an elite A rank with dual abilities, Ye naturally kept his guard up. Playing the fool, he innocently asked if there was a misunderstanding, claiming he was just a weak, ordinary miner. But deep down, he scoffed at the invisible mental pressure trying to force him to his knees. Even his shadow enhancement passive couldn't block it. Meanwhile, the old man smirked, genuinely amused that his legendary intimidation failed to make this supposed kid break a sweat. The old man chuckled darkly, declaring that things weren't nearly that simple. Without warning, he unleashed a crackling bolt of lightning straight at Ye. Sparks flew as the smoke cleared, leaving the old man utterly amazed that the boy took the hit head-on. To survive that strike, the kid had to possess at least B-rank physical strength. Yet this brat still dared to play the innocent victim card? His aura flared as he demanded the truth. Why was he faking his identity to get close to sighing? But before he could finish his deadly threat, a familiar voice angrily screamed his full name. Qin Xiaoshang. It was Seeing, and she was furious. Marching over, she grabbed her father by the ear, scolding him for pulling a fake emergency just to secretly interrogate her guest. Complaining that he had way too much free time, she dragged the terrifying A-rank powerhouse away like a misbehaving child. The intimidating guildmaster whined, begging his daughter to be gentle and at least let him save some face. She kicked him out without hesitation, warning him to never harass her friend again. Watching this comedic scene, Yi finally connected the dots. This overprotective dad was none other than Qin Xiaoshang, the absolute ruler of Longmen 3rd Street. Turning back to Ye, Seeing bowed her head, deeply embarrassed as she apologized for her father's outrageous behavior. She sighed, explaining that her dad always assumed everyone had hidden agendas. Yi just laughed it off. It was perfectly natural for a father to protect his daughter from potential scumbags. Seeing blinked in surprise, amazed by how well he seemed to understand her father's heart. But honestly, it wasn't exactly a wild guess. The old man was literally pressed against the frosted glass door outside, grumbling his protective inner thoughts entirely out loud. Veins popped on Seeing's forehead as she completely lost her patience, screaming at her dad to get lost. Once the chaos finally died down, she handed Ye a premium black card preloaded with a staggering 5 million credits. She explained the situation. The mysterious greatsword he provided was crafted from incredibly rare materials. The appraiser needed more time to determine its astronomical value, so this was just the down payment. Yi waved it off, perfectly fine with the arrangement, but then his expression turned serious. He admitted he came today for a completely different purpose. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a glowing, mysterious fragment, asking if she knew where he could hunt down more of these. Her eyes narrowed as she recognized the dimensional relic. She revealed that these unknown shards used to be cheap and abundant, but recently, a shadow buyer had been sweeping the entire market, making them practically extinct. If he really needed them, his only hope was the underground auction, happening right here on Longmen 3rd Street. Hearing about this massive monopolization, Ye's instincts flared. He had a gut feeling that this shadowy collector was directly connected to Shihao. Meanwhile, in the executive office, the elite guard Si Ying brought earlier was delivering a full background check on Ye directly to President Qin. On paper, the kid was a nobody, just an ordinary 20-year-old who awakened as a trash-tier E-rank ascendant barely a few days ago. Scanners couldn't detect a single drop of mana or aura inside him. To the rest of the world, he was just a powerless civilian. But Qin Xiaoshang wasn't a fool. Jumping from E-rank to C-rank in mere days was impossible. This brat had to be masking his true cultivation. Just as his suspicions peaked, his private phone began to buzz. Answering the encrypted line, he teased his old war buddy, General Huo, about the sudden call. But the military man ignored the joke, frantically demanding to know if Qin had any more of those mysterious greatswords his daughter had forwarded. Taken aback by the sheer panic in his old friend's voice, Qin admitted he wasn't sure. He narrowed his eyes, asking what exactly was going on. Old Huo was practically shouting through the speaker. He ordered Qin to secure every single blade available, declaring that the military would buy their entire stock at any price. Qin's blood ran cold. For a cunning old fox like Huo to lose his composure, just what kind of heaven-defying properties did that sword possess? Sworn to military secrecy, Huo couldn't spill everything. But he dropped one terrifying hint. The alloy within that blade had the potential to elevate the entire army's combat power to a whole new tier. Hanging up the phone, Qin Xiaoshang stared blankly at the wall. A kid with unreadable stats, mysterious origins, and now casually dealing in world-class military-shifting weaponry, Yi was an absolute anomaly. Following Seeing's advice, Ye stepped onto the dazzling auction floor. Taking in the sea of priceless artifacts and high-level gear, a spark of hope ignited in his chest. The dimensional fragments had to be here, but as he navigated the extravagant crowd, he brushed past a sickeningly familiar face. It was the gold-digging woman, now desperately clinging to the arm of the arrogant, young Master Zhuo. She was currently playing the victim, spinning a web of lies about how her previous sponsor wouldn't leave her alone. She even claimed she quit her corporate job just to escape his harassment. Eating up her pathetic act, young Master Zhuo proudly puffed out his chest, vowing to protect her. She immediately buried her face in his expensive suit, praising his heroic generosity. But while she was busy acting, she completely missed the sheer terror flashing across Zhuo's face. His eyes were locked dead onto Ye. How was this kid still breathing? Had the lethal assassin, Blood Leopard, failed the mission? Finally noticing where Zhuo was looking, the woman sneered at Ye in disgust. She loudly demanded to know how a trashy miner snuck into such an elite venue. Yi just tilted his head, mocking her dangerously short memory. With a dark smirk, he asked if her cheek was missing the stinging slap he gave her just a few days ago. Panicking at Ye's murderous aura, young Master Zhuo stumbled backward, shouting at him to stay away. But in his blind retreat, Zhuo crashed hard into a massive figure. A towering shadow loomed over them. It was the terrifying enforcer in the black trench coat. Glaring down with deadly intent, he spat that Zhuo Ting was an absolute disgrace to the legendary Black Panther gang. Ting bowed in reverence, addressing the imposing man as Brother Bao. Brother Bao marched past Ye with a deadly aura. He sneered, declaring that striking his subordinate was a direct slap to the face of the entire Black Panther gang. He slammed his heavy hand onto Ye's shoulder, channeling overwhelming pressure to force him to his knees for an apology. But Ye stood his ground like a mountain. The immense clash of strength completely shattered the floor beneath his feet. Ye would rather die than submit. Brother Bao widened his eyes in sheer disbelief. He never expected a mere brat to possess such monstrous strength. Ting barked that the kid was courting death for offending Brother Bao. Suddenly, Xian made her grand entrance. Her cold voice cut through the tension, reminding the Black Panther thugs that they were standing on Dragon Gate 3rd Street. Paying customers are always treated like kings, she declared, but her eyes flashed with pure danger. If they dared to spill blood here, her forces would gladly oblige them in a merciless war. Swallowing his pride, Brother Bao offered a stiff apology before retreating to the auction hall. Xian's cold facade melted away as she turned to Ye, softly asking if he was hurt. Yi brushed off the encounter with a calm smile. Meanwhile, safely out of earshot, a dark scowl returned to Brother Bao's face. He demanded to know the brat's true origins, and exactly how Ting had provoked him. Trembling, Ting revealed that this was the exact thief who snatched the precious sword meant as a tribute. He even added that the arrogant kid had publicly vowed to annihilate the entire Black Panther gang. Brother Bao was absolutely stunned by this revelation. Burning with rage, he seized Ting by the collar, roaring to confirm if this absurd claim was true. At that exact moment, Shihao stepped from the shadows. With a calculating gaze, he smoothly asked Brother Bao what was causing such a scene. Shifting their deadly gaze toward Ye, they revealed that the boy was a primary target of Blood Leopard. Shihao narrowed his eyes, utterly bewildered as to how the kid was still breathing. A chilling thought crossed Shihao's mind. Could this boy have actually slaughtered Blood Leopard? But Ting scoffed at the very idea, convinced that a mere piece of trash lacked the power. There was no way a nobody could defeat their terrifying second-in-command. Across the room, Ye's sharp gaze locked onto Shihao. Recognition sparked instantly between the two enemies. Shihao remembered Ye as nothing more than a pathetic, cowering child. How on earth did a loser like him gain the protection of Xian? Breaking the tense silence, Ye turned to Xian and asked what brought her here. She softly confessed that her powerful father had urgently requested a private audience with him. Ye's guard instantly went up, anxious that the formidable president might test his strength once more. Sensing his tension, she offered a reassuring smile. She promised that with her by his side, her father would not dare touch him. Just then, Shihao boldly closed the distance, wearing a fake smile as he commented on their unexpected reunion. Ye's voice dripped with cold sarcasm. He replied that he was merely a lowly extra, forced to slave away in the dark mines just to pay off his debts. Brushing past the traitor, Ye threw a verbal dagger. He declared he had absolutely no desire to associate with a corrupt, high-ranking dog of the NG group like him. Shihao's face twisted in mock sympathy. He claimed the tragic fate of Ye's parents was purely the decision of the higher-ups, insisting that he desperately wanted to help. He played the victim, whining that a mere pawn like him lacked the authority to change their fate. Yi saw right through the pathetic facade, thoroughly disgusted by how smoothly the snake shed his own guilt. With eyes as sharp as blades, Ye stated that Shihao's own blackened heart knew the bloody truth. Pausing his steps, the young warrior announced that he had a profound warning for all of them. The heavens see everything. The truth will inevitably erupt from the shadows, and their endless wicked deeds will bring forth divine retribution. Hearing this disrespect, Brother Bao exploded with fury, screaming that this insolent brat needed a brutal lesson. But Shihao swiftly held him back. He issued a harsh reminder that this ground belonged to the fearsome Xiaoshang. Starting a bloodbath in his territory would be absolute suicide. Still, a murderous glint flashed in Shihao's eyes. Since the brat possessed dangerous knowledge, they would simply have to dispatch an assassin to quietly erase him from existence. Brother Bao gave a wicked grin, promising to make the lethal arrangements immediately. Meanwhile, Xian escorted Ye into the opulent VIP chambers to meet her father. Just as they stepped inside, the booming voice of the host signaled the grand commencement of the auction. With the event underway, Xian gracefully excused herself. She allowed the two men to parley in private, promising to alert him the moment his desired item appeared. Yi offered her a sincere nod of gratitude. His mind raced, trying to deduce the true motive behind the powerful president's sudden invitation. But Xiaoshang wasted no time on pleasantries, cutting straight to the chase. His piercing gaze locked onto the young man. He demanded to know if Ye possessed any more of those legendary weapons, the exact same terrifying artifacts he had entrusted Xian to sell previously. Realizing the great leader had personally hunted him down, Ye's eyes narrowed in understanding. It was glaringly obvious that the man harbored a burning obsession for the divine armaments of the Entropic clan. However, Ye was no fool. He knew better than to reveal his entire arsenal at once. Flooding the market would not only paint a massive target on his back, but it would also drastically crash their priceless value. Playing his cards close to his chest, Ye smoothly lied that he had merely stumbled upon the artifacts by pure luck. He casually admitted that he only had 2 more pieces in his possession. Without blinking, Xiao Shang threw out an astronomical offer of 40 million. Added to his previous earnings, Ye was instantly staring at a staggering fortune of 45 million. Yi calmly acknowledged that 15 million per blade was an undeniably generous sum. However, a sly smirk touched his lips. He boldly reminded the president that for powerful martial artists, a supreme weapon was the ultimate line between life and absolute death. Xiao Shang's aura darkened, dangerously asking what the brat was getting at. Unfazed, Yi demanded a staggering 25 million for each weapon. The sheer audacity caught the president completely off guard, sparking a surge of blazing irritation within him. To extort a kingpin like him, the kid definitely had balls of steel. Just as the tension reached a boiling point, Xian burst into the room. She urgently announced that Ye's highly anticipated treasure had finally taken the stage. She then shot her father a fierce glare, sharply calling out Xiao Shang's name as a final warning. Cornered by his own daughter, the mighty president could only grind his teeth, instantly transferring the total sum of 70 million into Yi's account. Through the glass window, Xian pointed toward the glorious artifact Ye had been hunting for. Meanwhile, Xiao Shang sat in the background, furiously cursing the cunning little demon in his mind. Down below, the host enthusiastically opened the bidding at 7 million. In mere seconds, the battlefield of wealth violently surged to 10 million. The bloodbath truly began when participant number 6 raised their paddle, ruthlessly pushing the stakes to 15 million. Staring intensely at the stage, Ye's heart pounded. It was true. The auction house genuinely possessed the mythical fragment. With a massive war chest of over 70 million, he felt absolute confidence that victory was within his grasp. With a dominant aura, he completely shattered the incremental bids, declaring a massive 30 million. It was a psychological strike meant to crush the competition, even though parting with such a mountain of gold made his soul bleed. The stunned host swept his gaze across the silent crowd, asking if anyone dared to challenge the 30 million mark. From a distance, Brother Bao locked onto Ye's figure. Confusion twisted his face. Why in the world was this impoverished trash throwing fortunes at a relic? The gavel was seconds away from sealing the deal, until a cold voice echoed through the hall. Shihao had just dropped a devastating 50 million. He threw a mocking glance at the boy, openly challenging the brat to a battle of absolute wealth. Without blinking, Ye instantly retaliated with a jaw-dropping 60 million. Beside him, Xiao Shang frowned deeply. He urgently warned the boy that the artifact was nowhere near that astronomical value. The veteran president firmly advised him to drop out of the bidding war. He told the young man to hold back, completely trying to stop him from burning through his freshly acquired fortune like a total fool. Xian nodded in absolute agreement. That arrogant jerk was clearly jacking up the price out of pure spite. Back in the day, 10 million was already an astronomical sum for such an artifact. But Ye's eyes burned with resolve, fully prepared to go to war against Shihao to claim it. A sly smile crossed his face as he threw out a provocative question. Between the mighty Qin group and the ruthless NG group, whose financial empire truly ruled from the shadows, Xiao Shang let out a confident scoff, stating the Qin group reigned supreme without a doubt. But he crossed his arms, coldly adding that he had absolutely no reason to act as his personal bank. Shihao ruthlessly raised the bid to 70 million. In response, Ye calmly revealed his trump card, summoning a legendary blade and presenting it directly to the patriarch. Xiao Shang had already claimed the previous 2 weapons at a fixed rate, and with Xian's limited pocket change, they were still worlds away from matching that massive bid. Unfazed, Ye told the president not to worry about the petty details. He spoke with absolute certainty, guaranteeing he could forge enough divine weapons to cover the staggering cost. The president narrowed his eyes, suspecting this mysterious kid was hiding an entire arsenal. Meanwhile, the auctioneer's voice echoed through the tense hall. 70 million, going once. Xian ruthlessly pinched her father's ear. She scolded the powerful patriarch for acting so stingy over spare change, swearing on her honor that if Ye fell short, she would personally cover every single penny. 70 million, going twice! The tension spiked as Xian frantically tugged at Ye's sleeve, urging him to strike before that old snake stole their heaven-defying prize. Deep down, Ye was utterly speechless at the sheer absurdity of the elite class. To these absolute monsters of wealth, 100 million was literally just pocket change. Yi slammed his hand down, bidding 100 million. But Shihao instantly countered from the VIP room with 200 million. His eyes burned with greed, knowing this artifact was the missing key to their grand scheme. 300 million! Ye fired back without missing a single beat. The two titans clashed with mountain-crushing wealth, escalating the battlefield until the bid hit a mind-numbing 500 million. Gasps erupted across the auction floor. The wealthy elites watched in absolute horror, convinced these two had completely lost their minds over a rusty piece of junk. Whispers swept through the crowd like wildfire. Was this forgotten relic hiding a heaven-defying secret? Or was this just a catastrophic clash of pure ego between two unstoppable forces? Bao gritted his teeth in sheer frustration, furious that this arrogant brat was deliberately stepping on their pride. But Shihao merely sneered, stating the kid was a bug who had not even earned the right to face him. Then, he dropped the ultimate bomb. 1 billion. A suffocating silence choked the entire arena, broken only by the trembling voice of the auctioneer confirming the godly bid. Xian clenched her fists, feeling the heavy killing intent behind that blatant provocation. But Ye's mind was razor-sharp, knowing a cunning fox like Shihao would never burn $1 billion on mere impulse. The Qin Patriarch lowered his voice, urging the young man to step back from the abyss. Could he truly manifest enough divine steel to back up such an astronomical debt? Xian fiercely stepped between them, declaring she would empty her own vaults to back him up. Her eyes blazed with defiance as she urged him to crush their enemy's bid immediately. 2 billion! Ye's voice shattered the silence like thunder. He tilted his head toward Shihao's balcony, flashing a dangerously arrogant smirk that practically begged for a fight. Bao was sweating bullets, demanding to know how a nameless brat possessed the wealth of a small nation. Shihao's aura exploded with murderous rage, dead certain the Qin Patriarch was funding this public humiliation. There was simply no other way a mere student could wield 2 billion in cash. The auctioneer's hammer raised high into the air. 2 billion, going for the third and absolute final time. Bang! The hammer struck down like lightning. The crowd erupted as Participant 9 was crowned the ultimate victor of the mysterious divine fragment. Xian bounced with overwhelming joy for her friend, Yi chuckled, asking why she was celebrating harder than he was. With a devilish grin, she admitted that watching arrogant villains get crushed was her absolute favorite hobby. Xiaoshang cleared his throat, his dominating presence bringing them back to reality. He coldly reminded Ye that the thrilling high of the auction was over. Now came the true test. Even factoring in his previous deposit, this kid still owed him more than 70 legendary blades to settle the colossal debt. He locked eyes with the young master, questioning if he could actually forge that many artifacts. Ye simply smiled with absolute confidence, replying that items are only priceless when they are scarce. But when you hold a monopoly on mass destruction, the rules of the market completely shatter. You simply cannot judge this power by mortal standards anymore. Snap! With a single echo, the very air tore open. Over 100 legendary swords materialized in a blinding display of overwhelming power, more than enough to crush his 2 billion debt. The Qin Patriarch's eyes widened in genuine awe. This kid's absolute fearlessness was intoxicating. For a fleeting second, he even envisioned this monstrous talent leading his own empire. Xian happily tugged at Ye's sleeve. She flashed a brilliant smile, demanding that he immediately summon her the next time he planned to cause such glorious chaos. But a dark cloud formed over Xiaoshang's face. This wild dragon of a boy was far too dangerous. If he was not careful, this untamed rogue might just steal his precious daughter's heart. He immediately ordered his daughter back to the estate before turning his piercing gaze to Ye. The stage is yours. Go claim your heaven-defying prize from the vault. Yi offered a respectful bow of gratitude. But right before stepping into the shadows, the mighty patriarch paused to deliver one final, chilling warning. He warned him that the NG group was a towering behemoth soaked in blood. Their fangs were venomous, and going against them alone was pure suicide. In this ruthless world, finding a powerful ally with shared ambitions is the only way to survive. He left his personal contact, extending an open invitation to join forces when the real war began. Meanwhile, in a dark alleyway, Bao gripped his communicator. He reported to his vicious master that the Qin Patriarch's protective umbrella was gone, leaving the arrogant brat completely defenseless to collect the artifact. A wicked sneer crept across Shihao's face. The execution order was given. The moment that little rat steps past the safe zone of Longmen 3rd Street, they would strike with lethal force. There would be absolutely zero margin for error this time. Bao's confidence skyrocketed to the heavens, backed by the terrifying aura of 3 elite C-rank assassins waiting in the shadows. He swore on his very life. This upcoming ambush was a flawless death trap from which the boy would never escape. Strolling down the eerily quiet streets, Ye communicated telepathically with his spiritual companion, Qing Tian. The Qin Patriarch's intense background checks were obvious, and that final warning was clearly a calculated move to recruit him. But the main character was no fool. As long as he avoided becoming a mere pawn, leveraging a Titan's power for mutual benefit was a flawlessly strategic move in this dangerous game. Qing Tian merely scoffed with ancient arrogance. A mere A-rank mortal was nothing to fear. He promised that if they devoured enough divine fragments, ascending to the legendary S-rank realm would be an absolute breeze. Yi cast a highly skeptical side glance at the boastful spirit. Reading the utter disbelief in his master's eyes, Qing Tian felt his ancient pride take a massive hit. Yi calmly stated his trust in the system. He was simply searching for the perfect battleground to begin his epic trial. But Qing Tian could read the lingering doubt in his eyes. The spirit threw a dramatic tantrum, shouting that S-rank awakeners weren't just cheap cabbages you could buy at a street market. With only 9 supreme S-ranks existing in the entire world, Qing Tian desperately wanted to dare this arrogant youth to try reaching that peak. However, he wisely swallowed those bitter words. Suddenly, a blazing inferno caught Ye's attention. His eyes narrowed as he watched his own apartment consumed by raging flames. Panicked neighbors fled the chaotic scene in terror. Right then, his phone buzzed violently. It was Sen, her voice trembling as she warned him that the Black Panther Syndicate had ordered a hit. With a chilling calmness, he replied that the hunt had already begun. She desperately pleaded with him to hide until her backup arrived, but he simply declared that this trash wasn't worth running from. Stepping out from the shadows, Ting barked his arrogant demands. He ordered the young man to crawl on his knees and beg for mercy, promising to spare his pathetic life if he groveled well enough. Yi let out a cold scoff, instantly realizing the sheer disrespect. The gang had drastically underestimated him by sending such a pathetic handful of street thugs. With eyes as cold as a blizzard, he promised them nothing but a swift death. But the foolish Ting just laughed, boasting that the Reaper was actually coming for Ye. The thug cruelly mocked him, eager to see how a trash E rank would survive against 3 authentic C rank fighters. Like a pack of hungry wolves, they tightly encircled their prey. A deadly smirk formed on Ye's face. He casually reminded them that even the terrifying blood leopard had completely failed to take his life. His overwhelming aura of confidence made the thugs hesitate, wondering if he was secretly a monster. But Ting quickly shattered their doubts, roaring that this kid was just a bluffing miner without a shred of real combat ability. Seizing the opening, a thug launched a cowardly ambush from his blind spot. But in the blink of an eye, the young man completely vanished into thin air. Like a phantom, he materialized right behind his attacker, delivering a bone-crushing strike to the neck. Dripping with sarcasm, he whispered that they were absolutely right about him being just a kid. The thugs froze in pure horror, unable to comprehend his godlike speed. Panic finally gripped Ting's heart, and he frantically ordered his remaining lackeys to attack. But with terrifying precision, Ye effortlessly reaped their lives in a beautiful dance of death. Before Ting could even blink, an iron grip seized him by the throat. Yi softly mocked the so-called tough gangster for trembling like a leaf before a mere teenager. A demonic grin spread across Ye's face as he whispered about their shared love for playing with fire. His fingers tightened like a vice, forcing a pathetic, breathless scream from the gangster's lungs. Since this trash loved watching things burn, he violently hurled Ting's body straight into the heart of the roaring inferno. Plunging into the flames, Ting shrieked his final curse, vowing that President Kui and Brother Bao would exact brutal vengeance. Watching him burn, Yi coldly promised to send his bosses down to hell to keep him company very soon. The moment the ashes settled, a luxury car screeched to a halt, revealing Sen and her massive bodyguard. Her eyes searched him frantically as she breathed out a desperate question about his safety. Brushing off his shoulders, he casually mentioned that he had only suffered a few pathetic scratches. Relief washed over her features before she nervously asked what his next move would be in this deadly game. With absolute conviction, he declared that since they had drawn first blood, he would absolutely annihilate them. Sen immediately swore to stand by his side on this warpath. Surprised by her loyalty, he questioned the motive behind her unwavering support. A flicker of dark annoyance crossed her beautiful eyes. She confessed that the Black Panther Syndicate had been a disgusting thorn in her side for far too long. But more importantly, those bastards had dared to cross one of the very few people she actually considered a true friend. A furious crimson blush painted her cheeks as the confession slipped out. That shy admission sparked a warm smile on his face, igniting a fiery new resolve to completely eradicate the gang. Opening the doors to her luxurious sanctuary, she warmly invited him into her world. She firmly insisted he make this his fortress, until the storm passed and he secured a new domain. Pointing down the massive empty hallway, she explained that the mansion was practically deserted. With a soft smile, she offered him his absolute pick of any master suite in the estate. He confidently reached for a door handle, only for panic to instantly shatter her calm facade. She threw herself forward to block his path, but it was too late. His eyes had already taken in the overwhelmingly pink, devastatingly cute sanctuary hidden within. Mountains of fluffy plushies and adorable stuffed animals conquered every inch of the room. Chuckling softly, he gently told her that this hidden soft side actually suited her perfectly. Her heart pounded with deep embarrassment, terrified he would mock the legendary heiress of the Qin Corporation for harboring such childish tastes. But his gaze remained warm and completely devoid of judgment, calling it perfectly natural for a girl to cherish these things. Completely flustered, she shoved him out into the hallway with all her might. Her face burned as hot as a furnace when he casually dropped a devastating compliment. He admitted this secret made her infinitely cuter than the icy, untouchable persona she wore in public. No one in her entire life had ever dared to call the powerful heiress cute. Right at that heart-fluttering moment, her stomach let out a loud, treacherous rumble. She wanted the earth to swallow her whole as his booming laughter filled the corridor. Pouting defensively, she blamed her starvation on the agonizing stress of rushing to save his life. With a flick of his wrist, he produced a mountain of delicious snacks from absolutely nowhere, placing them in her hands. These were his highly prized emergency rations, saved for critical survival moments. Her eyes widened in absolute bewilderment at the impossible sight. It sparked the exact same burning curiosity she felt at the underground auction when he had materialized deadly weapons out of thin air. Meeting her stunned gaze, he offered a mysterious smile and claimed it was just a little street magic. Completely mesmerized, she eagerly begged him to teach her this miraculous art. But suddenly, a terrifying pressure entered his sensory range. His playful demeanor vanished as he strictly ordered her to return to her main estate immediately. Confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere, she asked what unseen danger was approaching. Hidden in the courtyard bushes, her overprotective father was radiating, killing intent, and loudly muttering his murderous thoughts. Yi could feel the terrifying aura of a protective dad ready to skin him alive if his precious daughter stayed any longer. Stomping over to the bushes, she mercilessly scolded the hiding patriarch. Once the coast was finally clear and she had departed, Ye swiftly drew the heavy curtains shut, sealing the room in darkness. This safe house rested in the absolute core of Longmen 3rd Street, an untouchable fortress shielding him from unwanted eyes. In a flash of spiritual light, Qing Tian manifested. Hovering alongside the system spirit were the glowing fragments harvested from the lava minotaur, the blood leopard, and the mysterious auction treasure. A profound curiosity burned within his soul. He needed to uncover the hidden thread connecting these mysterious shards to the catastrophic dimensional portals tearing their reality apart. With a voice dripping in ancient wisdom, Qing Tian revealed a world-shattering truth. These 3 pulsing shards were merely microscopic dust from the legendary gate of the alternate dimension prison. The spirit continued to drop absolute bombshells. Every single catastrophic portal ravaging their Earth was born from the shattered fragments of this exact same divine prison gate. Without a second of hesitation, they plunged straight into the swirling abyss of the dimensional vortex. Realizing his companion possessed knowledge of the ancients, Yi demanded answers. He pressed the spirit to reveal the true, terrifying nature of this alternate reality. He had to know why this chaotic realm crawled with endless swarms of monstrous insectoids and bloodthirsty beastmen. Qing Tian's eyes darkened as he delivered the chilling reality. This wasn't just a separate world, it was an eternal, inescapable prison for the universe's worst sinners. What he initially mistook for a simple alternate dimension was actually a colossal interdimensional penitentiary. They manifested in a desolate wasteland. Howling winds whipped the sand into a frenzy, forcing our main character to shield his eyes from the biting storm. When Yi questioned the nature of the inmates held here, Qing Tian's response was cryptic. The ancient being declared that all answers lay hidden behind the completion of the trials. Looming before them was a colossal structure piercing the heavens, the legendary sky-reaching tower. Qing Tian boasted that this was his absolute masterpiece, the ultimate proving ground for Yi's journey. But in Yi's mind, the architecture was a complete eyesore. Honestly, considering Qing Tian's ancient and eccentric tastes, a twisted aesthetic was entirely expected. Yi stared at the bizarre anchoring tubes keeping the structure from toppling, his mind spinning with schemes. The rare materials used for the construction caught his eye, a capitalistic spark ignited in his brain. Would Xiaoang pay a premium for these scraps? If that merchant was interested, dismantling this ugly tower could make him an absolute fortune. Qing Tian could practically hear the gears of greed turning in Yi's head and seethed with annoyance. But he forced his temper down. If he exploded in rage now, his fragile soul would dissipate into nothingness, a pathetic end no one would even mourn. Stepping into the shadowy abyss of the tower, Yi demanded the details of his upcoming tribulation. The ancient master explained the brutal structure, a gauntlet of 6 punishing floors. Qing Tian sneered, claiming that with Yi's current pathetic power level, merely surviving the Shadow Wyvern on the 1st floor would be an absolute miracle. Yi blinked at the creature trembling before them. He searched for any trace of murderous intent, but felt absolutely zero pressure. He slowly peered down at this so-called terrifying beast. It was incredibly tiny. Barely reaching his kneecaps, the legendary wyvern looked more like a pathetic little gecko. Striking this fragile thing would be straight-up animal abuse. Qing Tian's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. He warned the boy that his arrogant laughter was about to end in tragedy. Yi casually reached down to pet the lizard, but suddenly, the creature erupted in a blinding light. Demonic fury blazed in its eyes as an overwhelming aura exploded outward, sending Yi flying through the air before the beast leaped off the ground. System alert. A massive data influx updated his shadow knowledge base. It revealed the terrifying truth of an alternate dimension operating entirely as an inescapable penitentiary. These isolated prisons contained the most dangerous criminals across countless races. And standing at the apex of these chaotic realms was the very sky-reaching tower forged by Qing Tian. Every single floor was guarded by Qing Tian's monstrous servants. Scanning the enemy revealed a C-rank Shadow Wyvern, boasting a terrifying innate skill known as Shadow Enhancement. Upon activation, the beast's mass, velocity, and raw destructive power skyrocketed by a staggering 600%. Fortunately, the system immediately illuminated its vital weak points. A 600% multiplier? That was 3 times the output of Yi's own shadow abilities. He suddenly felt like he was wielding a cheap, knockoff version of the real power. Qing Tian mocked him mercilessly, stating that a mere human's bodily foundation was utter garbage compared to his divine pet. Yi gritted his teeth, absolutely refusing to accept such a humiliating truth. He violently launched himself backward, narrowly dodging a lethal strike. Drawing his twin blades, Yi's tactical mind raced. A massive body meant massive blind spots. That was the golden rule of combat. He unleashed a flurry of razor-sharp strikes against the wyvern's spine, but the blades sparked uselessly against its scales without leaving a single scratch. Shock washed over him. The sheer density of the beast's defensive armor was completely off the charts. Noticing Yi's hesitation, Qing Tian taunted him relentlessly. He sneered that such pathetic, weak-willed strikes were nothing more than a gentle massage to a true monster. Provoked, Yi desperately ignited his own shadow enhancement. The ancient spirit laid down the absolute law. Fail to break this beast's will, and the first floor becomes his tomb. Yi vanished into a blur of motion, raining omnidirectional slashes upon the wyvern, yet the creature remained terrifyingly unscathed. Qing Tian analyzed Yi's impressive mastery over the shadow elements. Seeing the boy's surprisingly refined aura, the ghost decided to raise the stakes, forcefully amplifying the trial's brutal intensity. To make matters infinitely worse, his draconic servant was waking up with a ravenous, world-ending appetite. Qing Tian cruelly declared to the beast that the human before it was a nutritious snack. Predatory hunger ignited in the wyvern's glowing eyes, and it lunged forward with jaws wide open. Yi immediately bolted for his life. Rivers of terrifying drool flew from the monster's maw as it tore through the arena after him. Sprinting desperately, Yi screamed at Qing Tian, demanding to know if he had pumped his pet full of crazy pills. The ghostly master casually replied that the creature's energy was simply depleted. Right now, Yi was nothing more than a walking, talking energy potion in its eyes. Yi cursed the unfairness of the heavens. A martial arts duel was one thing, but this psycho lizard was literally trying to bite his head off in an eating contest. But desperation breeds genius. Since the beast was driven by starvation, he prepared his most unorthodox ultimate technique. He hurled a barrage of crispy, seasoned chicken legs into the air. The wyvern's terrifying charge instantly halted, completely mesmerized by the poultry. The monster snatched a drumstick mid-air. Using his most soothing, deceptive tone, Yi praised the heavenly flavor of the meat. As the beast dropped its guard to chew, Yi slammed it down with binding chains. His ridiculous tactical gamble had miraculously succeeded. Ding! System notification ringing loud and clear. Shadow Wyvern successfully tamed. Ultimate authority over the first floor has been fully unlocked. Qing Tian facepalmed in absolute disgrace. His legendary guardian had sold its dignity, and the tower's pride, for a literal piece of fried chicken. The heavenly system chimed again, granting Yi the ultimate binding and activation codes for the dimensional prison gates. Bewildered by the massive reward, he demanded to know the true value of this loot. Swallowing his pride, Qing Tian revealed the secret. Once infused with raw energy, every single spatial fragment transforms into a permanent gateway linked straight to this penitentiary realm. In layman's terms, by binding a dimensional shard to his soul, Yi just gained the godlike ability to rip open a spatial portal anywhere, anytime. Scoring such an overpowered ability on the very first level sent a thrill of greed through his veins. If the bottom floor handed out teleportation, the treasures lurking in the upper 5 levels must be absolutely legendary. Watching Yi's smug expression, Qing Tian scoffed internally. The human was getting far too arrogant just because he managed to outsmart a hungry lizard with cheap tricks. Eager to shatter that cocky attitude, the ancient master gestured toward the second floor, ready to watch the boy suffer. He mockingly encouraged Yi to step forward, claiming the next guardians were just low-level lackeys of the sky-reaching tower. The sinister undertone in the ghost's voice was impossible to ignore. Yi's danger instincts flared, certain that an army of monstrous, shape-shifting abominations awaited him in the shadows. Running the tactical calculations in his head, the reality was grim. If a terrifying C-rank disaster was just the gateway boss, the horrors lurking on the second floor would be straight out of a nightmare. The ghostly master flashed a wicked, challenging grin. He dared the young warrior to step into the abyss and witness the true despair of the tower for himself. Not dangerous, the old man had promised. But the moment Yi pushed open the second floor doors, his blood ran cold at the sight awaiting him. a thunder serpent king, a hydro turtle, and a lava minotaur. 3 C-rank catastrophic beasts stared him down. In what universe were these terrifying monsters considered mere servants? Without a single second of hesitation, the colossal beasts unleashed their devastating fury upon our main character. Yi instantly launched himself backward, narrowly dodging the explosive impact. He shot a desperate look over his shoulder. The exit was completely sealed off. A deafening hiss echoed through the chamber as the Thunder Serpent King commanded its minions to slaughter the intruder. Activating his shadow jump technique, Yi miraculously phased through their lethal strikes. Flooding his veins with shadow enhancement, he pushed his agility to the absolute limit, sprinting furiously toward the nearest door. He threw himself through the threshold and slammed the heavy iron doors shut. His heart pounded fiercely against his ribs as he let out a massive sigh of relief. Yi realized in an instant Qing Tian had intentionally set him up. The old man had blatantly lied about them being harmless attendants, but the eccentric master simply scoffed, swearing on his honor that those titans truly were just the household help. He claimed Ye's strength was just too pathetic to comprehend his lifestyle. Refusing to back down from the absurdity, Ye pointedly demanded to know exactly what kind of chore a flaming lava minotaur could possibly perform. With absolute deadpan delivery, Qing Tian stated it functions as a living radiator. Completely baffled by the logic, Ye then interrogated him about the lethal Thunder Serpent King. It's a free power generator, the master shrugged. Slowly losing his mind, Ye pressed on about the massive hydro turtle. The old man confidently declared that the majestic water beast was simply there to mop the floors. Yi wasn't letting this go without answers. He demanded the truth about the otherworldly beings lurking around. Qing Tian nonchalantly explained that they were merely manual laborers, hired for heavy lifting and mundane errands. The Grandmaster wore an infuriatingly smug grin, leaving Ye utterly speechless at the sheer ridiculousness. But suddenly, an urgent system alert flashed. An overwhelming A-rank presence was rapidly approaching. The grand doors swung open, revealing the imposing figure of President Xiaoxiang, accompanied closely by Xian. Ye narrowed his eyes, wondering what brought such massive heavyweights to his doorstep. The formidable president revealed that his daughter had thoroughly briefed him on Ye's violent clash with the Black Panther Syndicate. He knew exactly how a ruthless faction like them operated. They had already placed a massive bounty on Ye's head. But instead of waiting around in the shadows to be hunted like prey, our protagonist had embraced the path of a predator, taking the ultimate initiative to draw first blood. Xiaoxiang's piercing gaze sharpened. He revealed that those thugs had continuously crossed the line into Longman 3rd Street territory, yet he, as the absolute president, had never crushed them. He challenged Ye to deduce the reason behind his forced restraint. Ye's strategic mind raced. "You are terrified of shattering the balance of power," he stated boldly. A spark of approval flashed in the president's eyes. Haicheng City was currently locked in a razor-thin standoff between 3 absolute titans. At the very top sat City Lord Wu Tianxiao, the undisputed ruler of the political underworld. Countering him was Ning Donghao, whose massive NG conglomerate held the city's entire economy by the throat. And then there was the man standing before him, Xiaoxiang, a terrifying powerhouse wielding immense influence in both domains, standing as the ultimate tiebreaker between the two kings. Because of this highly precarious position, his hands were firmly tied. Even though his blood boiled with rage at the sight of the Black Panther Syndicate, extorting innocent merchants and forcefully seizing territories, unless they committed an unforgivable sin that shattered the fragile peace, the great president was chained by his own power, forced to watch from the sidelines. If he directly unleashed his forces upon those street rats, the ensuing chaos could backfire spectacularly. It might just force his 2 monstrous rivals to forge an unholy alliance to eliminate him entirely. Or even worse, a violent war would mutually cripple his and Ning Donghao's factions. That bloodbath would leave the throne wide open for the city lord to swallow Haicheng City whole. Cutting straight through the endless political jargon, Ye looked the older man dead in the eye. "So what you are really saying is, you cannot let the Qin family's official banners be seen anywhere near this coming war." A vicious, predatory grin spread across Xiaoxiang's face. Precisely. His master plan was for Ye and Xian to forge a brand new underground faction from the shadows to annihilate the Black Panthers. Ye's eyes widened slightly at the sheer audacity. The president wasn't just asking for a simple favor, he was plotting to ignite a full-blown proxy war in the criminal underworld. Praising the young man's sharp, tactical intellect, Xiaoxiang laid out the ultimate terms. He would secretly funnel limitless wealth and elite manpower into their ranks, while Ye and Xian served as the deadly spearhead of the operation. Operating entirely as a rogue ghost faction, the other 2 city lords wouldn't dare make a reckless move. And even if the entire operation collapsed into ruin, Xiaoxiang's official standing could step in from the light to guarantee their survival. A chill ran down Ye's spine. To think this terrifying patriarch had orchestrated such a flawless, checkmating strategy in a single night, it was pure, calculating genius. But the intimidating mastermind quickly shattered the awe, grumbling bitterly that he wouldn't have lifted a single finger if his precious daughter hadn't relentlessly begged to fight alongside Ye. Glaring absolute daggers at the protagonist, the overprotective father demanded to know what kind of dark magic he used to bewitch his little girl. He was pouring millions into a war, only for his own daughter to probably elope with the guy. From a strict businessman's perspective, this investment was an absolute scam. Dark thoughts swirled in his mind. Maybe he should just lock Xian away, toss this punk in a burlap sack, and dump him in the middle of nowhere. Yi visibly cringed with absolute disgust, completely unamused by the sudden murderous aura. He prayed to the heavens that the so-called distinguished president would stop broadcasting his unhinged fatherly complexes out loud. Utterly mortified by the situation, Xian aggressively shoved her rambling father out of the room and slammed the heavy door shut. Taking a deep breath to compose herself, she turned back to Ye, asking for his next strategic command. A fierce, ambitious light ignited in his eyes. It was time to raid the bounty boards. His grand scheme was nothing short of absolute monopolization. He would hijack every single quest linked to the public dimensional gateways. He needed to plunge into every single spatial rift Hai Cheng had to offer. Without missing a beat, Xian tapped into her unparalleled elite network, immediately setting the massive logistics in motion. A truly devilish smirk crept across Ye's face. Just imagining the overwhelming, divine power of gathering all those mythical fragments sent a rush of pure adrenaline straight to his core. The moment his true strength awakened fully, a reign of total despair would descend upon the Black Panther Syndicate. When dawn finally broke the following morning, Xian swung open the grand doors, revealing an elite strike force of hand-picked warriors. Standing at absolute, rigid attention, these hardened veterans were officially the founding swords of the Shadow Gang, all bound to Ye's supreme command. The intimidating mercenaries bowed in perfect synchronization, roaring out their undying loyalty to the Miss and their new boss. Yi had dragged his feet on officially naming the new faction, so the decisive heiress had simply christened them herself, naming the group in honor of his terrifying darkness manipulation abilities. She tilted her head confidently, challenging him to complain about the title. Yi merely chuckled softly, admitting it carried a seriously badass ring to it. Sweeping his gaze over the troops, his system analyzed their auras. Every single one was a C-rank powerhouse. An army of this caliber could crush a small nation, but there was one glaring, bizarre detail that stood out. He pointed sharply at the squad, questioning why every single member had their face entirely concealed behind a tactical mask. Xian explained with deadly professional seriousness that absolute anonymity was essential to prevent their enemies from hunting down their families. Then, a tiny smirk broke her icy facade as she whispered that it also made them look incredibly menacing. Yi immediately broke the fourth wall with a sigh, teasingly muttering that the studio artist was probably just too lazy to draw background characters' faces. Ignoring his bizarre joke, Xian demanded his first official order. His answer was brutally simple. It was time to steal some bounties. They were going to mercilessly hijack every single mercenary commission right out from under the Black Panther Syndicate's greedy paws. Looking at the massive mountain of targeted quests, even the confident Xian started to sweat, seriously doubting if their brand new squad could actually survive such an impossible, grueling workload. A confident smirk crossed his face as he reassured her. There was absolutely nothing to fear, since their targets were only after the glittering spoils. As for the rest of their enemies, he already had a masterstroke prepared. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit syndicate hall, a trembling subordinate faced the blazing fury of his boss. Vicious insults rained down upon him. How could a worthless piece of trash let an upstart faction like the Shadow Gang snatch their most lucrative bounties right from under their noses? Boss Bao roared like a wounded beast. He spat that he did not need anyone questioning his supreme authority. Those absolute fools were courting death, and his men should have already wiped them from the face of the earth. Stuttering in pure terror, the subordinate confessed the grim truth. They simply lacked the power to crush them. Consumed by blind rage, Bao violently hoisted the man by his collar, demanding an explanation. Gasping for air, the henchman revealed the terrifying reality. No matter how small the contract, the Shadow Gang flawlessly deployed 5 or 6 C-rank awakened. Their own syndicate simply did not possess that kind of elite firepower. The raging inferno in Bao's eyes suddenly shifted to dangerous curiosity. Just where in the world did this mysterious powerhouse faction suddenly spring from? Gritting his teeth, he barked out a desperate command. They were to drain their coffers to purchase exploration slots immediately. They had to throw their best hunters into the dimensional rifts to secure their ultimate prize. But the trembling subordinate delivered yet another crushing blow. Every single ticket for the imminent expedition had already been swallowed up by a syndicate of ghosts. Bao's sanity completely snapped under the weight of his fury. He did not care about the impossible odds. Whether they had to spill blood to steal them or burn mountains of gold, his forces had to infiltrate that dimension. His voice dropped to a lethal, venomous whisper. If this monumental chance to seize unimaginable wealth slipped through their fingers, he would personally ensure the man suffered a fate far worse than death. Whimpering his absolute obedience, the terrified lackey scrambled away. When dawn broke the following morning, the scene shifted to the luxurious comfort of Xian's estate, where she was wrapping up a highly classified encrypted call. A triumphant smile bloomed on her lips as her intelligence network confirmed the rumors perfectly. The notorious Black Panther Syndicate had just bled an astronomical fortune to buy out the very expedition tickets she controlled. Turning to Ye, her eyes sparkled with deep admiration. How on earth did he calculate their exact move with such terrifying precision? His expression remained an ocean of calm. He knew absolute greed would never allow them to abandon the season's grandest treasure trove. Yet, the deeper mechanics of his genius still eluded her. A knowing smirk graced his features as he pulled back the curtain on the underworld. It all boiled down to the blood-soaked, unwritten laws governing the crystal mining territories. Driven by bottomless avarice, the corrupt overseers of those dimensional pits deliberately conceal the most radiant, high-grade ores and impossibly rare magical artifacts. They use the chaos of the seasonal gear maintenance as the perfect smokescreen to smuggle this priceless contraband back to the human realm for a staggering black market profit. For years, the Black Panther Syndicate operated like vultures in the shadows. They would manipulate mercenary guild contracts to plant their own spies inside, flawlessly locking onto the wealthiest smuggling caravans. It was a flawless crime ring. Because the stolen treasures were stained with corruption to begin with, the victims could only swallow their bitter rage instead of crying out to the authorities. But now, Yi had utterly severed their traditional hunting routes. Cornered like desperate beasts, they had no choice but to burn their fortunes on gate tickets just to manually infiltrate the shifting domains. Xian's brows furrowed as she processed the sheer scale of the chessboard. Even selling those tickets at a king's ransom felt like gathering crumbs compared to the true wealth at stake. Ye's eyes gleamed with the chilling light of an absolute mastermind. The gold from the tickets was merely a trivial distraction. His true ambition ran far deeper. His relentless, bone-crushing expeditions into those chaotic realms over the past weeks had been laying the groundwork for something monumental. Raising his hand, a swirling vortex of arcane energy manifested at his fingertips. He revealed a world-shattering secret. He had already placed spatial markers on every single dimensional gate across Haicheng. Space itself bowed to his will, allowing him to rip open a shortcut whenever he desired. The trap was elegantly simple, yet inescapably deadly. By planting their shadows to track the desperate fools who purchased those premium tickets, they could effortlessly pinpoint the Black Panther's ultimate prey. Once the pieces were perfectly aligned on the board, they would strike like a localized hurricane, wiping the vile syndicate from existence in one devastating swoop. The brilliance of the strategy left her utterly breathless. However, maintaining the absolute secrecy of his spatial abilities was paramount. Thus, he tasked Xian to gather only her most fiercely loyal confidants to stand as his vanguard. Her heart raced with the thrill of impending battle. She passionately insisted on diving into the fray by his side, her soul burning with an unquenchable thirst for righteous justice. A rare, genuinely warm smile broke through his stoic facade as he nodded in agreement. When the storm finally descended, they would stand shoulder to shoulder as equals. Deep within the distorted skies of the alternate dimension, a heavy transport vehicle roared across the wasteland. The driver's eyes gleamed with greedy anticipation, dreaming of the absolute fortune resting heavily in the cargo hold. His partner in crime, a scowling man named Wang, guaranteed him a massive slice of the impending wealth. But destiny had laid a deadly trap. A jagged, innocent-looking stone directly in their path suddenly began to violently surge upward with unnatural speed. A chilling wave of confusion crashed over the two smugglers. Before they could even hit the brakes, a terrifying array of massive, razor-sharp earth spikes erupted from the ground like the fangs of a subterranean beast. The earth-shattering impact tossed the hidden guards inside the cargo bay like broken ragdolls. Metal screamed as the transport violently crashed into an impenetrable earthen wall. Staggering out of the smoking wreck, Wang desperately screamed to check if their priceless bounty survived. From the settling dust, a sinister figure draped in an earth-toned suit materialized like a phantom. A cruel, mocking voice drifted through the air, assuring them that their treasure was wonderfully intact. The air pressure plummeted as the terrifying assassin levitated the jagged boulders with a mere flick of his wrist. He whispered that their lives, however, were about to expire. Pure horror fueled the smugglers as they bolted, while devastating rock missiles rained down upon them like meteorites. But the sadistic earth manipulator had zero intention of showing mercy. His bloodlust was just barely waking up, and he intended to savor every agonizing second of their hunt. Suddenly, a chilling voice severed the tension. Yi emerged from the abyss, coldly offering himself as a far more entertaining plaything. Merging with the very darkness, he executed a flawless shadow jaunt, manifesting directly behind the assassin. The Earth user snarled in volcanic fury, outraged that a pathetic mutt dared to interrupt his glorious slaughter. Ye exploded forward like a bolt of black lightning. He calmly stated that stealing a few trinkets was one matter entirely. The assassin's eyes widened in absolute paralyzing terror as he realized his opponent's speed broke the laws of physics itself. Desperation clawed at the assassin's mind as he frantically tried to summon an earthen shield, but his magic was infinitely too slow. Ye's iron grip already crushed against his skull, whispering that slaughtering the weak like livestock was an unforgivable sin. With monstrous, overwhelming physical power, Ye brutally slammed the assassin's skull straight into the reinforced stone wall. The sickening crunch echoed as a massive spiderweb crater formed upon impact. Coughing up blood, the shattered villain desperately wheezed for Ye's identity. He barked a pathetic threat, demanding the shadow user step down, or his syndicate brothers lurking in the shadows would tear him limb from limb. But Ye merely ignored the dying threat, casting his gaze toward the elite squad of D-rank Awakened that Cien had strategically deployed. The battered assassin choked on his own terror, utterly paralyzed by the sudden appearance of reinforcements. Stepping elegantly over the rubble, Cien's voice was devoid of mercy. She coldly questioned the fate of the remaining syndicate scum, her eyes silently asking for the green light to execute them all. Yi raised a single hand, a terrifyingly dark aura bleeding from his silhouette. Death was far too merciful a punishment for the Black Panther Syndicate. He had cultivated a nightmare much, much worse. Trembling in the grip of utter despair, the broken assassin could only choke out a single question. What kind of hell awaited them? Ye issued a chilling command. He ordered the survivor to deliver a message to Boss Bao. Tell him the mastermind behind the hospital massacre was none other than Lei of the Shadow Gang. Inside the hospital ward, fury blazed in Bao's eyes as he surveyed his crippled subordinates. The devastating news hit him hard. How on earth did a mere teenager possess such monstrous strength? His secretary trembled while delivering the terrifying truth. The most bizarre part of the attack? Not a single drop of blood was spilled, and their skin was completely flawless. But beneath the surface, it was a waking nightmare. Every single bone in their bodies had been completely shattered into dust. Even utilizing the finest healers and elite medical resources, recovery would take at least 6 agonizing months. At 5 million per head, treating all 60 men would cost a staggering 300 million. Suddenly, the secretary's phone chimed with disastrous news. The other 2 raid teams had been completely wiped out. When Bao demanded a name, the answer sent shivers down his spine. It was Ye. The gang boss gritted his teeth in disbelief. That was utterly impossible. Those 3 alternate dimensions were separated by hundreds of kilometers. Even if that brat had wings, he couldn't possibly slaughter his way through multiple battlefields at the exact same time. Desperate to prove it, the secretary played a secretly recorded video from the bloodbath. On screen, Ye stood like a demon king, crushing a grunt's skull beneath his boot while an orchestra of agonized screams echoed in the background. Suddenly, the predator's gaze locked dead onto the lens. A sinister smirk crept across Ye's face as he playfully asked if they were recording his masterpiece. The cameraman's terrified gasps shook the footage. Staring straight through the screen, Yi delivered a direct message to Bao. He mockingly praised his absolute trash-tier underlings. The teenager dared the coward to step out of the shadows and face him like a man. After all, draining the gang's bank account for a year of medical bills must sting quite a bit. Rage boiled over as Bao crushed the tablet into 1,000,000 metallic pieces. His murderous aura exploded as he swore to rip the brat to shreds at the warehouse. Meanwhile, Cien questioned their current destination. Yi flashed a calculating grin. While tailing Shihao earlier, he had hit the ultimate jackpot. The Black Panther gang's hidden treasure trove was right next door. Those thugs had been a thorn in his side for the past few days. And knowing Bao's explosive temper, Ye predicted the boss would personally march onto the battlefield next. Cien's eyes lit up with realization. It was the perfect heist. They were going to raid the enemy's vault the moment the king left his castle. Right on cue, Ye's phone vibrated with a crucial intel drop. His scout reported the exact movement he was waiting for. Bao's elite strike force had just departed for alternate dimension number 3. With a commanding tone, Ye ordered the shadows to maintain strict surveillance on their every move. Turning back to the young miss, he confirmed that the big boss had taken the bait. It was her time to shine, and she needed to execute the raid flawlessly. His job was to play the ultimate decoy and drive Bao absolutely insane. Knowing the enemy was a devastating B-rank awakener, Cien nervously offered to send Duan Ao as backup. But Ye waved off the concern with supreme confidence. Backup was entirely unnecessary. He had zero intention of clashing swords with a powerhouse directly. Dragging someone else along would only ruin his phantom-like mobility. He promised her it would be a walk in the park. If things got too hot to handle, he could instantly warp back through the dimensional gate. Whispering a final warning to stay safe, Cien watched as Ye stepped into the swirling vortex, vanishing into the unknown. Deep inside the alternate dimension, Bao stood with his arms crossed, proudly watching his underlings hoard massive piles of glowing loot. A blonde lieutenant kissed up to his boss, praising Bao's overwhelming presence. He gloated that the mere mention of the boss's arrival had sent Ye and his cowardly crew running for the hills. Bao scoffed with absolute arrogance. A pathetic miner and a handful of C-rank trash were nothing but bugs waiting to be squashed, but suddenly, an icy chill crept down his spine. His combat instincts flared as he roared into the darkness. A terrifying gasp echoed through the cavern as Yi materialized from the shadows, holding a struggling thug by the throat. A wicked smile danced on the teenager's lips. He slowly clapped, praising the B-Rank's razor-sharp perception. His grip tightened on his squirming human shield. Tilting his head, Ye playfully mocked the trembling crowd. Why the intense killing intent? After all, he was just a harmless little kid. The hostage sobbed uncontrollably, begging his boss for mercy. Ye's voice dropped to a demonic whisper. One wrong move, and he couldn't guarantee this poor guy's head would stay attached to his neck. Instead of negotiating, a blazing fireball erupted from Bao's palm. With a psycho grin, the boss roared that they could both burn in hell. The hostage's eyes widened in absolute betrayal. Agonizing shrieks pierced the air as the flames swallowed the helpless underling alive. Suddenly, panic erupted in the ranks. The target had vanished. A split second later, the hairs on Bao's neck stood up. A ghostly whisper brushed against Bao's ear. Ye sarcastically applauded the man's unmatched leadership in roasting his own loyal dogs. Roaring with fury, Bao unleashed another inferno, but the flames revealed a horrifying truth. Through the scorching blaze, another innocent subordinate collapsed into ashes, screaming that the boss had hit the wrong target. Yi's laughter echoed from the darkness, teasing that working for the Black Panthers was a seriously hazardous career choice. The surviving grunts begged their leader to calm down, but bloodlust had completely consumed him. To erase this humiliating teenager from existence, sacrificing a few pawns was a price he was willing to pay. His mana erupted into a devastating fire tornado. The scorching vortex threatened to turn the entire dungeon to ash as Bao dared the rat to scurry away now. His men scattered like terrified ants to escape the searing heat. Yi watched the chaotic symphony of friendly fire with absolute amusement. As the hellish twister roared toward him, he swiftly dashed behind a massive boulder. Bao's infuriated roars shook the cavern walls. Taking a mental note of the B-Rank's sheer destructive output, Ye decided he had pushed the envelope enough. It was time to pull a disappearing act. He couldn't wait to see the boss's soul-crushed expression once he returned home. Cut to later that night, desperate screams echoed outside the Black Panther's base. The fortress had been completely gutted. A battered guard crawled forward with shaking words. It was an absolute massacre. The Shadow Gang, led by the eldest miss of the Qin family, had swept through like a hurricane. Facing two terrifying B-Rank awakeners and a swarm of elite C-Ranks, the defenders were slaughtered like sheep. Bao's jaw clenched so hard, his teeth nearly shattered. Weeping uncontrollably, the ruined guard begged for his life, but a flash of merciless fire instantly turned him into charcoal. The puzzle pieces finally slammed together in Bao's mind. No wonder that Lone Wolf had an army at his back. It was all because of that cursed Qin family heiress. The fire in his veins burned hotter than ever. If they were going to play dirty, he was ready to unleash pure hell on earth. But a cold voice interrupted the rage. Shihao ordered him to swallow his pride and step down. Bao's eyes shot wide with unbelievable grief. His entire life's fortune was locked inside that vault, a staggering loss worth hundreds of millions. Shihao's gaze turned chillingly sharp. He challenged the broken boss with a deadly question. Did he honestly expect him to waste his elite troops just to start a suicidal war against the legendary Qin family? Shihao's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. He made it crystal clear. They were at the most crucial phase of their grand experiment. It did not matter how much rage burned inside Bao's heart. He had to swallow his pride and endure the humiliation for the sake of the master plan. But Bao's blood was boiling. He snarled that he could not hold back for another second. What was the worst that could happen? He would just slaughter Sin and Ye, then vanish from Haichang forever. Suddenly, the air grew suffocatingly heavy. Bao's face twisted in pure terror as massive, nightmarish monsters loomed over him, their gaze locked onto their prey. Shihao's overwhelming aura crushed down on him. If Bao insisted on seeking death, Shihao would gladly be the one to end his miserable life. The sheer pressure forced Bao down onto one knee. With a voice cold as ice, Shihao delivered his final warning. Do not dare ruin their grand ambition over a pathetic sum of cash. Once the experiment reached its triumphant end, Shihao promised he would personally assist Bao in wiping the entire Qin bloodline from the face of the earth. Bao gritted his teeth and forced out a sound of obedience, but inside, a fiery venom consumed him. It was easy for Shihao to preach about patience when it was not his fortune that had been stolen. The absolute humiliation gnawed at his soul. Did Shihao really think he was so weak and incompetent that he could not crush a mere girl like Sin on his own? Meanwhile, inside a sleek red car, Sin chatted playfully with her bodyguard, Ao, praising Ye's incredible instincts. Ao chuckled and ordered the driver to speed up, teasing that the young miss was already desperately missing her hero. A furious blush painted her cheeks red. She frantically stammered, demanding to know when she ever said such a thing. Ao smirked, pointing out that since she opened her eyes that morning, Ye's name had crossed her lips exactly 24 times. She quickly defended herself, insisting they were just good friends. But before she could finish her sentence, a massive red truck came hurtling toward them like a beast out of hell. "Watch out!" Ao roared. Without a second thought, he threw himself over Sin, becoming a human shield. He braced his muscles for the catastrophic blow right as the monstrous truck slammed into them with devastating force. A colossal wave of water erupted from the crashed vehicle, raining down on the wreckage like a violent storm. The surviving guards scrambled desperately toward their precious young miss. Panic laced their voices as they checked if she was hurt. Sin coughed, assuring them she was untouched while their wrecked car blazed furiously in the background. But then, a sinister shadow materialized right behind them. Sin's instincts screamed. She spun around. It was Bao. Ao instantly barked orders, commanding the guards into a defensive wall. Sin glared fiercely, mocking Bao's supreme arrogance for daring to ambush them with just a handful of lackeys. But out of nowhere, a sickening wave of weakness washed over her. Her bones felt like lead. Confusion clouded her eyes as she stumbled, whispering, "What is happening to my body?" Ao's face contorted in sheer horror. It was not just an accident. The water from the truck. They were completely soaked in an unknown substance. Bao let out a wicked, echoing laugh. Did they really think he would strike without absolute certainty? He revealed the horrifying truth. That was not water. They were drenched in the paralyzing venom of a phantom spider. As if on cue, a subordinate stepped up, shielding Bao under a large umbrella. The rest of his goons were fully equipped in protective raincoats. This toxic brew was terrifying. Even an A-rank master would be rendered completely helpless for 10 excruciating hours. As he spoke, Sin's elite guards were already collapsing to the ground like lifeless dolls. The moment Bao lunged forward, Ao screamed with his last ounce of strength, begging his young miss to run, but Bao was too fast. His iron grip clamped around Ao's throat, mocking the bodyguard's pathetic display of loyalty. A cruel smirk twisted Bao's face as he ignited a blazing inferno right onto Ao's body. He coldly whispered that loyal guard dogs who bark for their masters only ever meet a tragic end. Sin could only watch in absolute horror as the flames consumed him. Meanwhile, miles away, Ye was fully in the zone. Activating his shadow jaunt, he blinked across the training grounds in a flawless zigzag pattern, his blade dancing through the air. In a flash of steel, the thick wooden poles were shredded into countless splinters. Watching from the sidelines, Qingtian's eyes widened in absolute awe at how terrifyingly sharp Ye's technique had become. Yi sheathed his weapon with a confident smirk. Of course he was getting stronger. He had already broken through to C rank. But right then, the jarring ring of his phone shattered the moment. A warm thought crossed his mind. It must be Sin calling. Qingtian burst into laughter, playfully teasing the newly promoted C rank for acting so high and mighty over a slight power boost. But as Ye's eyes locked onto the glowing screen, the playful atmosphere instantly died. A murderous aura erupted from his very soul, and his trusty dagger slipped from his trembling fingers, hitting the floor with a heavy clatter. A live video feed showed the unthinkable. Bao violently gripping Sin by her hair. For a split second, Ye could not process the nightmare. Then, a volcanic rage erupted from his heart. He roared into the phone, demanding to know what this dead man walking was doing. Bao's sickening voice oozed through the speaker. Whether the precious young miss lived or died entirely depended on how much she truly meant to him. The twisted villain laid down his ultimate ultimatum. Option 1, deliver a staggering ransom of 1 billion to buy back her life. Option 2, sit back and watch a live broadcast of her slow, agonizing torture. Even through her pain, Sin weakly tried to warn him. It was a deadly trap, but Ye's mind was made up in a heartbeat. He did not hesitate for a second. His voice was dangerously calm as he demanded the location for the exchange. Bao laid out the fatal rules. Bring the 1 billion to his abandoned warehouse. He had exactly 1 hour. And most importantly, he had to come completely alone. If even a whisper reached the Qin family, her life was instantly forfeit. Qingtian desperately grabbed Ye, pleading with him not to throw his life away in a suicidal rescue mission. But the fierce loyalty burning in Ye's eyes said it all. He would never abandon a comrade in the dark. Besides, a dangerous smirk played on Ye's lips. There was no certainty on who would actually be the one dying at the warehouse today. The heavy warehouse doors creaked open. Ye stepped into the lion's den. Sitting on his makeshift throne, Bao clapped his hands, mocking the boy for actually having the guts to show up. "Where's the cash?" the villain demanded. But Ye stood his ground like a mountain, demanding to see Sin first. Bao waved his hand, signaling his goons. The rusty gears of a heavy crane ground to life, and Ye's heart nearly stopped at the horrifying sight. Sin was suspended helplessly high in the air. Her mouth was taped shut, her eyes filled with desperate fear. Gritting his teeth, Ye accessed his spatial storage and a mountain of cash cascaded onto the dirty floor. The greedy lackeys swarmed the pile, their eyes gleaming as they confirmed the stacks were completely authentic. Ye's gaze sharpened into a deadly glare. He held up his end of the bargain. "Now, release her!" But Bao's sinister laughter echoed through the vast space. He revealed his true, sickening colors. The only reason Ye was not a corpse already was because the money had not been secured yet. But now that the 1 billion was safely in his grasp, there was absolutely zero chance he was letting Ye walk out alive. Did the kid seriously think he was that naive? Ye did not flinch. He had known from the very beginning that this rat would break his promise. Without a single word, Ye's thumb pressed firmly on a hidden detonator. A blinding, catastrophic light pierced through the bundles of cash. Instantly triggering his shadow jaunt, Ye vanished into the darkness right as the entire mountain of money violently exploded. A suffocating cloud of thick black smoke swallowed the entire warehouse. Bao coughed violently, wildly looking around and screaming for the boy's whereabouts. But from the pitch-black shadows directly behind him, the Reaper had arrived. Bao's combat instincts flared. He narrowly dodged the fatal dagger strike. Spinning around, he unleashed a roaring fireball straight at Ye's face. He spat that cheap sneak attack tricks would not be enough to take down a true master. Yi simply smirked, a deadly gleam in his eyes. "Did your parents never educate you?" he whispered coldly. "Never to play with fire in a dust-filled room?" A sudden gust of wind swept through the warehouse, igniting the suspended particles, and a massive, earth-shattering explosion engulfed them both. Sen's heart completely dropped. The rope snapped in an instant, sending her plunging into the terrifying abyss below. She shut her eyes tight, bracing for a fatal crash, but the impact never came. Fluttering her eyes open, she gasped. Yi had caught her securely in his arms, soaring through the air on the back of a majestic shadow wyvern. Down below, Bao's jaw practically hit the floor. He stared in sheer disbelief as the massive flying beast dived straight into a dimensional rift. A sinister grin crept onto his face. It seemed this brat was hiding some seriously legendary tricks up his sleeve. Greed flashed in Bao's eyes. Once he caught that kid, all those treasures would be his. But his fantasy was cut short. A trembling lackey reported that more than half their brothers had already been crippled in the clash. Fury erupted from the gang leader. He roared at everyone still breathing to charge forward. They were not letting this prey escape, and the entire Black Panther gang stormed right into the alternate dimension. Inside the magnificent sky-reaching tower, Sen trembled with panic. The Black Panther gang had breached the entrance. But Ye simply smirked. Everything was going exactly as planned. Why waste energy when he could use those thugs as free labor to clear his path? He gently instructed Sen to stay hidden in the shadows alongside the wyvern. Worry clouded her eyes, but his confident gaze melted her fears away. Within Ye's mind, Qing Tian suddenly connected the dots. The brat had deliberately left the portal wide open to use the gang as human shields for the treacherous second floor. Yi chuckled maliciously in his mind. He confirmed the theory, pointing out that no rule ever stated he had to conquer the second floor all by himself. Qing Tian could not help but praise the boy's terrifying talent for exploiting system loopholes. Ye's eyes gleamed with ambition. The loot waiting on this floor was simply too magnificent to pass up. A legendary armor capable of shrugging off an A-rank attack. But before he could daydream further, a blazing torrent of fire suddenly blasted toward him. The gang had surrounded him, inching forward with deadly caution. They sneered, claiming his path had finally reached a dead end. Little did they know, running was the absolute last thing on his mind. With Sen safely tucked away, the invisible shackles were off. It was the perfect moment to wipe these pests from the face of the earth. Bao burst into maniacal laughter. He looked at Ye like a complete lunatic. He barked at his men to stand their ground. After all, it was just one arrogant kid against a whole army. The boss laid out his vile plan. They would butcher the boy first, then hunt down Sen. To sweeten the deal, he promised his grunts a chance to defile the noble eldest miss of the Sen family. A frosty glint flashed in Ye's eyes. He casually admitted they had him beat in sheer numbers. But as for who would survive this encounter, the odds were about to shift drastically. With a snap of his fingers, Ye issued a chilling command. It was time for the true rulers of this floor to come out and greet their uninvited guests. The heavy doors rumbled open. Glowing, bloodthirsty eyes pierced the darkness. The Lava Minotaur, the Thunder Serpent King, the Hydro Turtle, and a horde of nightmare-inducing beasts marched forth. Yi gave a theatrical bow, graciously thanking the gang for volunteering as his raid party. Absolute terror gripped the Black Panther gang. Before they could even scream, the monstrous horde unleashed a devastating stampede straight into their ranks. Cornered and desperate, Bao ignited his fists with roaring flames. He hurled a colossal fireball right into the center of the stampede, engulfing several beasts in a fiery inferno. But the roaring blaze did not stop there. It surged directly toward Ye. Realizing the boss had unleashed his ultimate attack, Ye instantly activated his shadow morph, manifesting a massive pitch-black hammer. He needed to draw every ounce of aggro right onto the gang leader. Gripping the weapon, Yi smashed the blazing sphere mid-air, detonating it with a deafening boom. The shockwave sent Yi skidding backward. His arms went numb, a harsh reminder that B-rank destructive power was no joke. The explosive backlash scattered the flames like meteorites, raining liquid fire down upon the furious monster horde. Bao just smirked wickedly. Seeing the kid panting from the impact, the gang boss was absolutely certain Ye was out of tricks and out of gas to block another attack. Yi wiped the sweat from his brow and flashed a devilish grin. He only needed to block it once. If Bao did not believe him, he urged the thug to look around. Bao turned, only to find an entire army of enraged beasts completely boxing him in. The smugness instantly vanished from Bao's face. Ye gave a mocking wave, wishing the boss a fun time playing with his new pets before slipping into the shadows. Realization hit Bao like a truck. He had been completely played by the brat once again. With veins popping on his forehead, Bao swung his blazing fists like a cornered beast. A massive monster shrieked in agony as his fiery punch scorched its flesh. But the physical toll was nothing compared to his blinding rage toward Ye. Blood vessels pulsed angrily at his temples as he roared into the chaos, vowing to rip the kid limb from bloody limb. Meanwhile, deep within the serene core area of the second floor, Ye narrowed his eyes. He demanded Qing Tian swear on his soul that this was not another one of his grand scams. He seriously questioned if there was truly a mythical armor hidden here that could casually shrug off an A-rank obliteration. Qing Tian snorted defensively. He had absolutely no reason to deceive the boy now, and proudly confirmed the legendary loot was waiting. But before he could finish boasting, a mysterious silhouette materialized from the gloom. A grotesque figure dropped to its knees in absolute reverence. It was the tragic remains of Jiaming, the former steward of the second floor. A heavy sadness laced Qing Tian's voice as he asked Ye to grant his old servant a proper burial. Yi gave a solemn nod. Once the Black Panther trash was dealt with, he would honor the request. Qing Tian whispered a soft word of gratitude, his spiritual presence falling completely silent as he mourned his fallen subordinate. Pulling himself together, the ancient master guided Ye deeper into the vault. But abruptly, a chilling aura sent shivers down Ye's spine. Out of the creeping darkness, an ethereal entity manifested. There it floated, the legendary shadow armor that Qing Tian had hyped up all along. Yi raised an eyebrow, pleasantly surprised that it looked fairly impressive instead of a clunky mess. Meanwhile, Qing Tian sighed heavily. It was a tragic waste that this incredible vessel was being handed to a mere shadow enhancement Tier 2 brat. Truthfully, even a Tier 3 expert would break their teeth trying to tame a relic with A-rank defensive properties. Ye frowned, sensing a strange tremble in his master's spiritual waves. He questioned the sudden shift in mood, but Qing Tian quickly brushed it off, urging the boy to step forward and claim his prize. Yi could not shake the feeling that the old ghost was becoming far too sentimental lately. As he reached out, the armor suddenly twitched. Faster than lightning, a metal gauntlet shot forward and seized Yi tightly by the throat. A hollow, agonizing voice echoed from the empty helmet. It cried out in sheer disbelief, declaring that after countless centuries of waiting, the true master had finally returned. The relic was not just metal, it was a soul-bound heteromorph. Instantly, it activated a terrifying B-rank skill, Shadow Enhancement Tier 2, Soul Refinement. Gasping for air, Ye desperately demanded to know what madness was happening. Shock rippled through Qing Tian's consciousness. He realized the terrible truth. The twisted soul possessing the armor was none other than his loyal steward, Jiaming. The possessed armor trembled with overwhelming fury. It shrieked in absolute disgust. How could its supreme, heaven-defying master be reduced to a pathetic parasite, dwelling within the frail body of a mere C-rank weakling? Qing Tian roared with absolute authority, commanding the crazed spirit to release the boy at once. But the corrupted armor completely snapped, incredibly offended that this mortal vessel dared to speak with the master's voice. Through gritted teeth, the cursed armor spat its defiance. It demanded to know what right Qing Tian had to bark orders. After all, its soul had slumbered within the cold steel, waiting endlessly to extend its master's life. But in the end, the master had completely failed it. Since Qing Tian had returned as nothing more than a pathetic remnant soul, the armor sneered that it had absolutely no choice. It had to devour and refine its former master. Only by consuming him could it shatter the bottleneck, reaching Tier 3 of Shadow Enhancement. With that terrifying domain ability, the steel shell would become its true physical vessel. Qing Tian let out an agonizing roar as his spectral form began to violently scatter. Watching the crisis unfold, Ye firmly asked his ghostly companion one simple question. If I hand over the reins of my physical body, can you crush this metallic bastard? Even while fading away, Qing Tian couldn't help but chuckle. He asked the kid if he wasn't terrified that this temporary possession might turn into a permanent hostile takeover. Yi scoffed, amazed that the ancient soul was still cracking jokes while at death's door. He boldly shot back. If you actually had the power to steal my body, you never would have given it back the first time. Qing Tian let out a defiant smirk. In that split second, their minds linked, and the ultimate soul fusion was initiated. Ye's pupils transformed into abyssal voids. A cataclysmic wave of dark aura erupted from his core, violently blasting the traitorous armor backward. But the sentient steel just mocked them, laughing that a mere fractured soul could only muster an A-rank power level. It told them to abandon this totally pointless struggle. Jingtian, now speaking through Ye's mouth, coldly replied that even a fractured A-rank aura was more than enough to dismantle a disobedient pet. The host body plunged into a dark, parasitic state of entropy. However, there was a massive restriction. A-rank skills were completely locked while sharing the physical vessel. The treacherous armor immediately recognized the shifting atmosphere. It was the legendary Shadow Domain. Cloaked in suffocating tendrils of black mist, Jingtian marched forward using Ye's physical form. But the steel monstrosity quickly analyzed the aura. It burst into mocking laughter, realizing this so-called domain was nothing more than a pathetic Tier 2 bluff. The armor gritted its metallic teeth. It never expected that its former master would be so cunning, deliberately hiding his ultimate shadow techniques and refusing to pass down his complete legacy. Without hesitation, Jingtian unleashed a devastating combo, Shadow Morph into the infinite sword array. But the armor didn't flinch. It knew exactly why that supreme skill was hidden. Ye's fragile mortal body would instantly shatter under the sheer pressure of a Tier 3 technique. Blurring into the darkness, Jingtian executed a flawless shadow jaunt. In a fraction of a second, he materialized right in the enemy's blind spot and launched a lethal strike. Completely caught off guard by the unknown footwork, the armor barely reacted. Jingtian's explosive fist slammed forward, but the traitor desperately raised its heavy greatsword to absorb the brutal impact. The sentient steel remained absolutely arrogant. It knew for a fact that this parasitic power surge had a massive time limit. Feeling the physical toll, Jingtian mentally reached out. "Kid, is your body still holding together?" Sweating heavily, Ye fiercely replied that he wasn't backing down. The enemy armor let out a chilling smirk, boasting that such pitifully weak strikes couldn't even leave a scratch on its indestructible plating. Vaulting into the air like a phantom, Jingtian's true goal was to forcibly extract the rogue soul from its shell. He unleashed a devastating punch, but the heavy blade once again absorbed the shockwave. The two locked in a terrifying stalemate, aura grinding against aura. Suddenly, crack! The massive greatsword shattered into jagged pieces. Jingtian instantly followed up with another ruthless blow, forcing the armor to cross its steel forearms in desperation. He was inches away from absolute victory. The traitorous soul was violently vibrating, on the verge of being ripped from the armor. But in that crucial split second, a devastating spike of agony ripped through Ye's core. Ye stubbornly roared that he could take it. But Jingtian saw the grim truth. If he pushed this assault any further, the apocalyptic overload of shadow energy would completely incinerate the kid's flesh and soul. Sensing the hesitation, the cursed steel erupted into malicious laughter. It ruthlessly mocked its former master for throwing away the winning move, calling his sudden display of mercy absolutely pathetic. Jingtian clicked his tongue in profound frustration. Capitalizing on the opening, the armor drew back a massive, crushing steel fist. Bam! The shockwave violently ejected Jingtian's spirit right out of the host. Ye gasped in total shock. He had fallen perfectly into the enemy's trap, and dark chains immediately restrained his physical body. Hovering weakly in his spectral form, Jingtian bitterly sighed. He never could have imagined that a loyal hunting dog he had trained with his own hands would viciously tear out its master's throat. The sentient armor trembled with ecstatic frenzy. The glorious moment of its true resurrection had finally arrived. Down in the dirt, Ye was forced onto one knee, lungs burning for air. Yet, despite his complete exhaustion, his eyes darted nervously toward his ghostly mentor. As the towering steel monster closed in for the kill, Jingtian desperately screamed for the kid to run, but retreating wasn't in Ye's vocabulary. Defying all logic, the human launched himself at the metallic behemoth to save his spectral comrade. It was a truly heartbreaking display of reckless loyalty, a bond forged in blood and shadow. The supreme irony. The ancient master had crippled his own attack to protect a fragile human soul. And now, this pathetic human ant, hopelessly outmatched, was throwing away his life against an invincible iron god. Wham! A casual backhand from the armor sent Yi flying like a broken ragdoll. Hot blood sprayed from his lips as he crashed hard. The steel traitor coldly sneered, telling this insignificant C-rank trash to crawl away and stop being such a glaring eyesore. Spitting out a mouthful of crimson, Ye pushed himself up, his voice trembling with sheer defiance. From day one, Jingtian had bossed him around like a cheap slave, forcing him into bloody death matches with terrifying otherworldly monsters, pushing him to the brink just to level up. Every single step of this hellish journey, he had been forced to obey that stubborn ghost's orders. No questions asked. But right here, right now, Yi roared, his eyes blazing like supernovas. Running away is my choice to make. Pushing past his physical limits, he recklessly charged the towering monstrosity once more. Earlier, he had forcefully devoured the ambient shadow energy to brutally slaughter the blood leopard. Drawing on that insane suicidal method, Yi was absolutely certain he could rip this traitorous heap of scrap metal apart. The malicious armor openly mocked his final stand, eagerly questioning how many seconds his fragile mortal shell could survive the overload. Watching in horror, Jing Tian desperately screamed that the kid was an absolute idiot. The raging energy violently expanded, making it look like the human was begging for his own flesh to detonate. Yi just flashed a bloody grin and roared back, "Mind your own damn business." Consolidating every last drop of his chaotic aura, he launched himself like a human missile. But suddenly, crack! Horrifying fissures spread across his skin. Right before his eyes, his physical form began to literally crumble into ash. Bit by bit, his existence violently dissolved into the cold wind. Watching the tragedy, the armor let out a chilling, metallic laugh. It mocked Jingtian's choice of vessel, calling the kid's suicidal loyalty absolutely adorable. With his host seemingly erased, Jingtian's spectral body began to aggressively fade into nothingness. The traitorous steel told its former master to drop the pathetic resistance and finally embrace his destiny as the ultimate soul nourishment. In a twisted display of gluttony, the armor greedily inhaled the glowing remnant soul. It threw its head back in victorious, echoing laughter. But without warning, an impossibly dense, suffocating darkness swallowed the battlefield. The steel monstrosity instantly froze, its metallic gears grinding in utter confusion. The surrounding void felt terrifyingly familiar. It was the legendary phenomenon, eternal night, a supreme reality warp only triggered by the mythical eternal domain. Absolute panic surged through its circuits. It hadn't even finished digesting Jingtian's soul, meaning there was absolutely no way its former master had cast this apocalyptic skill. So who did? Out of the suffocating abyss, a voice colder than the grave whispered right by its metallic ear. It was Ye, completely intact and radiating godlike killing intent. Just as he had promised, the only trash being eliminated today was the armor. Driven by pure, panicked instinct, the steel behemoth violently swung its massive blade to decapitate him, but to its absolute horror, the apocalyptic slash passed right through empty space. Yi's status window flickered to life. He was a human at C rank, but his shadow enhancement had just broken through to Tier 3. His arsenal now boasted ultimate Shadow Eye, Shadow Morph, Shadow Jaunt, and the terrifying Shadow Domain. This Shadow Domain wasn't just a simple skill, it granted him absolute authority, allowing him to freely mold his own physical form and manipulate the boundless shadow energy within its borders. It acted as the ultimate amplifier, drastically supercharging every single shadow ability while slashing their mana consumption to almost nothing. But its most chilling feature? Every miserable soul slaughtered within this territory was instantly devoured and converted into pure shadow energy. The armored entity trembled in absolute dread, realizing Yi had unlocked the third tier. The pieces finally clicked in Yi's mind. The true fuel behind the Shadow Domain's overwhelming power was the very souls of his enemies. No wonder this hunk of metal was shaking in its boots. A wicked grin crossed Yi's face. He could not help but wonder how pathetic that little soul would look without its protective shell. Gathering overwhelming energy, he unleashed a condensed sphere of absolute destruction. It crashed down from the heavens like a dark comet, forcing the armored foe to leap desperately out of the blast zone. But Yi was already 10 steps ahead. He materialized instantly at the enemy's blind spot, aiming to forcefully eject the soul from its vessel. With a bone-shattering strike to the spine, he sent the armor plummeting into the earth with a deafening crater-forming impact. Yet, the stubborn armor tried to act tough. It spat that hitting Tier 3 meant nothing when Yi was merely a C-rank ant. After all, this enchanted metal could shrug off even A-rank catastrophic strikes. Yi's sinister grin only widened. If brute force from the outside was not going to shatter this shell, he just needed to rewrite the rules of the game. He exploded forward like a dark bullet. Mocking his apparent recklessness, the armored foe threw a devastating counterpunch. But to his absolute horror, the colossal fist completely phased through Yi's physical body. Thanks to Shadow Morph, Yi's form had become as intangible as the night breeze, making blunt physical attacks completely useless against him. Closing the distance in a heartbeat, Yi plunged his shadow tendrils straight through the impenetrable metal. The parasitic soul trapped inside shrieked in agonizing torment as Yi mercilessly tried to rip it out from its host. With a sickening, tearing sound, the miserable soul was violently ejected into the air. Its perfect defense was finally breached, and Yi effortlessly claimed the empty armor for himself. The mystery was finally solved. This cowardly soul was hiding inside the suit because the armor constantly absorbed shadow energy to act as a lifeline against fatal damage. The steward, now exposed and vulnerable as a naked soul, knew that being dragged into the open was a death sentence. But he still had one ace up his sleeve, tightly gripping Qing Tian in his spectral hands. He shot towards the sky in a desperate bid for survival. But Yi was not about to let his prey escape so easily. Dozens of pitch-black chains erupted from the shadows, securely binding the fleeing steward in midair. The steward let out a malicious cackle. threatening Yi that Qingtian was bound to his very soul. If Yi dared to land a fatal blow, his precious weapon would be destroyed in the crossfire. But Yi simply scoffed. He coldly reminded the fool that souls were nothing but pure shadow energy, and without that armor, he was completely defenseless. With a ruthless flex of his power, Yi tore the steward's spectral body to shreds, safely freeing Qingtian from his grasp. Qingtian hovered silently in the air, watching in absolute awe as Yi began to mercilessly devour the shattered soul to fuel his own demonic growth. Qingtian whispered to the fading remnants of the steward, mocking him for fatally underestimating the boundless, terrifying hunger a human possessed for absolute power. But with his dying breath, the steward cursed them both. He warned Qingtian not to get too comfortable, because once this monstrous human tasted the addictive rush of rapid ascension, no living being could resist the overwhelming corruption of absolute desire. The moment Yi fully absorbed the soul, an earth-shattering roar tore from his throat. Boundless, devastating power surged through his every vein, causing the very ground beneath his feet to crater and collapse under the sheer pressure. Qingtian was completely blown away by the shockwave. Yi had forcefully broken his limits, successfully ascending to the legendary B rank. Turning his glowing eyes toward Qingtian, Yi announced that it was finally his partner's turn to evolve. Qingtian called out Yi's name in anticipation. A warm, confident smile graced Yi's face as he established a profound, soul-deep connection with his comrade. As he retrieved the hollowed-out armor, Yi revealed that he finally understood the steward's twisted method of eternal life. Without hesitation, he began fusing the impenetrable armor directly into Qingtian's spectral body. He realized the steward had used his own domain mastery to permanently seal his soul within that metal shell. And now, that indestructible hunk of steel was going to serve as Qingtian's magnificent new vessel. In a blinding flash of evolution, Qingtian forcefully ascended to the terrifying A rank. His stat window exploded with new abilities, granting him Shadow Enhancement, Ultimate Shadow Eye, Shadow Morph, Shadow Jaunt, Shadow Domain, and even Shadow Clone. Qingtian inspected his new form in utter disbelief. With a dramatic sigh, he complained about looking so dark and grimy, joking that digesting that filthy steward's soul might actually give him a severe stomachache. To make matters worse, he whined about the massive armor being way too bulky and painfully ugly, completely ruining his terrifying aesthetic vibe. But despite his endless complaining, he accepted the massive power-up, ready to return the favor to his master. Meanwhile, chaos erupted on the second floor. A colossal, terrifying serpent had tightly coiled its massive body around Bao's helpless subordinate. The subordinate cried out in agonizing despair, begging his boss for salvation. Bao stared at him with cold, dead eyes, telling him to hang tight because he was about to end his suffering permanently. Without a single shred of mercy, Bao unleashed a roaring inferno, incinerating both the monstrous snake and his own loyal man into ashes. Spitting on the scorched earth, he coldly declared that a useless piece of trash was never worth saving. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed from the shadows. Bao flinched in slight surprise as Yi casually walked into the clearing, mocking him for struggling against mere B-rank fodder. Those low-level beasts were never enough to drain Bao's stamina. But just the arrogant look on Yi's face made Bao's blood boil with raging fury. Exploding with killing intent, he launched himself forward with a devastating, blazing fist. But before he could even reach Yi, Qingtian stepped in with a death glare. The sheer, overwhelming pressure of his aura acted like a solid wall, violently blasting Bao away. The villain's eyes widened in absolute terror as he realized the truth. He was facing an A-rank powerhouse. Panic began to set in. Bao knew he was backed into a deadly corner. Dealing with the slippery Yi was already a massive headache, but now an unstoppable A-rank monster had joined the battlefield. Yi casually cracked his knuckles, admitting that bringing Qingtian into the fight made this feel like absolute bullying. Stretching his limbs with a predatory smirk, Yi declared that a pathetic villain of Bao's level was nothing more than a perfect warm-up exercise. Bao's pride was deeply shattered, absolutely furious that he was being treated like a mere stepping stone. The villain gritted his teeth, calculating that if he could just bypass the summon and get his hands on Yi, he might actually turn the tables. But the moment he moved, the world around them plunged into absolute darkness. Yi had unleashed the terrifying Shadow Domain. Bao desperately tried to mask his fear with arrogance, scoffing that all these flashy magic tricks and pointless illusions could not change the fact that Yi was just a weak D-rank ant. But Yi's voice echoed from every direction, chillingly asking whoever said he was still a D-rank. Bao froze, completely caught off guard. Before his brain could even process the incoming threat, a fist packed with devastating kinetic force buried itself deep into his gut. Like a phantom, Yi instantly materialized right behind him. Bao roared in absolute fury, enraged that this supposed weakling dared to look down on him. As Bao swung a desperate flaming haymaker, Yi's eyes locked onto the attack, casually meeting the blazing fist with his own bare hand. Boom! A massive shockwave erupted from the point of impact. Bao's pupils shrank to pinpricks as the terrifying truth dawned on him, the overwhelming aura pushing back against his flames. Yi had already ascended to B rank. How in the world did this monster level up so insanely fast? Through the dissipating smoke, Yi shot him a demonic grin. He coldly thanked the villain, admitting that Bao's constant pushing was the very reason he grew this strong. But pushed beyond the brink of sanity, Bao screamed that he did not care if Yi was a B rank, he was going to slaughter him anyway. Blinded by utter arrogance, the brute charged forward. He threw a devastating elbow strike, but Yi effortlessly blocked the impact with his forearms. From within his mind, Qing Tian revealed a crucial secret. Inside the absolute territory of the shadow domain, he did not need to drain his own life force. Instead, he could seize the ambient energy around him and weaponize his enemy's power against them. This was the terrifying true essence of the shadows. The realization sparked in Yi's eyes. With a smirk, he muttered that he wasn't quite used to his master playing the strict mentor. Bao watched in absolute horror. The kid was evolving mid-battle like an absolute prodigy. Roaring for him to die, the enemy unleashed a scorching barrage of blazing fireballs. Reaching into the void, Yi seized the surrounding aura and bent it to his will. In an instant, a dark barrier materialized, swallowing the roaring flames completely. Bao froze in sheer disbelief. A dark smile crossed Yi's face as he confessed how intoxicating this newfound power felt. He then fired a heavily condensed blast of shadow directly at his opponent. By a hair's breadth, Bao dodged the lethal strike. As Yi unleashed another volley of attacks, the arrogant brute charged through the blast zone, violently mocking the young warrior's terrible aim. But Yi's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. He calmly stated that he hadn't missed at all. The frantic dodging was nothing but a trap, perfectly aligning the fool's face with his incoming fist. The bone-crushing impact sent Bao reeling. He groaned in agonizing pain, his shattered mind struggling to comprehend how a mere boy could outplay him. It defied all logic. The kid was spamming high-tier skills, yet his aura wasn't depleting. Instead, it was surging to terrifying new heights. Looking down at his pathetic enemy, Yi asked if that was the extent of his strength. Dripping with disappointment, he declared that it was time to end this boring little game. Driven by desperate madness, Bao prepared a suicidal counterattack. But Yi simply merged with the shadows. In a single, phantom-like step, he instantly crossed the battlefield and swung his blade. Blood sprayed like a geyser as Bao's arm was cleanly severed. His eyes bulged with pure terror, watching his own limb hit the blood-soaked ground. He collapsed to his knees, grinding his teeth in helpless, seething rage. Without a hint of mercy, Yi rested the cold edge of his blade against the back of the loser's skull. Spitting blood, Bao dared the young master to finish the job. But Yi's voice was like ice. He whispered that granting him a quick death would be far too merciful. In this ruthless chess game, a living pawn held infinitely more value than a dead one. Sensing the shift in intent, Qing Tian questioned why his disciple stayed his hand. The goal was simple: extract every dark secret regarding Shihai. But the stubborn captive spat on the ground, swearing he would embrace the grave before leaking a single word. Yi fully expected that defiance. Fortunately, the terrifying Xiaoshang possessed certain persuasive talents. Just hearing that dreadful name made Bao's blood run cold, and he instantly begged for mercy. When the pathetic man tried to bark out empty threats, Yi forcefully clamped a hand over his mouth to silence the garbage. He then delivered a chilling promise: even if Shihai hid in the deepest shadows, Yi would hunt him down himself. From the spiritual void, Qing Tian offered a deadly proposition. To repay his disciple's efforts, he volunteered to assassinate the A-rank powerhouse from the Ning faction. But the young hunter was methodical. He needed absolute proof that Ning Donghao was pulling the strings from the shadows before unleashing absolute carnage. Furthermore, this was a blood debt he intended to collect with his own two hands. Meanwhile, beneath a torrential downpour, heavily armed military forces were rapidly loading up tactical transport trucks. Tensions were at an absolute boiling point. Orders echoed through the storm to hold their positions, as the legendary General Hong would be arriving on the front lines at any moment. A subordinate nervously approached the imposing, bald city lord. He desperately asked for any classified intel, panicked by the massive scale of troops mobilizing across every sector. The city lord's expression was grim as he admitted his ignorance. Yet, judging by the overwhelming show of force, a catastrophic event was undoubtedly brewing on the horizon. He then turned to Xiao Shang, pressing for answers, but the interrogator's attention was locked on a secure call, receiving the horrifying report that Qin had been abducted by the infamous Black Panther. Although she was rescued without a scratch, and the kidnapper was permanently neutralized, a volcanic fury erupted within Xiao Shang's soul. Masking his murderous intent with a cold facade, he finally answered the city lord, dryly stating he had zero interest in military politics. Instead, he locked his predatory gaze on Dong Hao. He marched over and hissed a lethal warning. If the man couldn't keep his rabid dogs on a leash, Xiao Shang would happily butcher them himself. Dong Hao narrowed his eyes, demanding to know the meaning of this insolence. The interrogator's voice dropped to a demonic whisper. He warned Dong Hao to pray he wasn't pulling the strings, or else he would happily send both master and hound to the afterlife together. Boom! Explosive auras erupted from both men, clashing in a suffocating display of dominance. Unfazed, Dong Hao coldly sneered that Xiao Shang was vastly overestimating his own worth. A bloodthirsty grin twisted Xiao Shang's face as he dared the arrogant fool to test that theory with his life. Suddenly, an overwhelming pressure crashed into the room. A booming voice commended their fighting spirit, but ordered them to save their bloodlust for the true enemy, especially since Haicheng City was standing on the precipice of absolute annihilation. The man stepping from the shadows bore a mane of fiery crimson hair. It was Hong Hai, the supreme military commander of the 3rd Defense Zone, representing the absolute authority of the United Government. The lethal tension instantly vanished as the heavyweights took their seats. With an impossibly grim expression, Commander Hong signaled his white-haired adjutant to unveil the nightmare they were facing. The adjutant addressed the room with utmost respect. He noted that every man sitting at this table had forged their A-rank status in blood, surviving the apocalyptic invasion from the Level 2 dimensional channel a decade ago. Therefore, none of these seasoned veterans needed a reminder. They intimately knew the world-ending devastation brought forth by the monstrous A-rank and S-rank calamities born from that abyss. Even now, the world's greatest minds remained completely baffled. No one knew why the apocalyptic Level 2 channel had suddenly torn open the fabric of reality, only to vanish without a trace. But the military had never dropped their guard. For 10 agonizing years, they had been meticulously tracking the dormant spatial radiation signatures left behind. Then came the terrifying revelation. Exactly 5 years ago, the dead cosmic fluctuations had suddenly flared back to life. The spatial tremors were violently escalating in both frequency and power. And in just the last 3 months, 5 catastrophic energy spikes had been detected, nearly matching the apocalyptic levels from 10 years ago. A bone-chilling silence consumed the room. The 3 elites felt dread wash over them. The City Lord's face paled as the horrifying purpose of this emergency summit became crystal clear. General Hong delivered the grim verdict. The data pointed to one apocalyptic conclusion. Haicheng City was about to become ground zero for the catastrophic rebirth of a Level 2 dimensional channel. And at that exact moment, in the darkest depths of the void, an endless army of terrifying bipedal shadow monstrosities began their silent march toward an awakening portal. Hong's voice carried the weight of absolute command. He ordered everyone to fall back and fortify their defenses. Because if a Level 2 channel actually breached their world, Haicheng City would be swallowed in an apocalyptic catastrophe. The military faction was already moving, mobilizing their elite forces for the impending slaughter. His commanding gaze swept across the room, demanding that when the blood starts flowing, these 3 titans must bury their grudges and unite against the true nightmare. Xiao Shang let out a cold scoff. He declared he was perfectly fine with playing nice, just as long as certain venomous snakes stopped plotting in the shadows. His piercing glare immediately snapped toward Dong Hao. Hong's aura flared as he too locked eyes with Dong Hao. He issued a chilling warning. In these life-or-death moments, if anyone dared to sabotage humanity for their own greedy ambitions, he would personally execute them without a second thought. With the tension thick enough to cut with a blade, Hong gestured for Xiao Shang to join his convoy, eager to discuss the escalating crisis away from prying ears. Only Dong Hao and the enigmatic City Lord remained behind, standing in the suffocating silence. The City Lord chuckled darkly. He noted that Hong had completely dropped his mask, openly declaring to the entire world that Xiao Shang was the military's prized weapon. And considering the pure, unfiltered killing intent Xiao Shang directed at Dong Hao, the reason was crystal clear. The Black Panther gang had crossed a fatal line. The City Lord advised him to vanish into the shadows for a while and keep his head down, but Dong Hao played the fool, completely denying any connection to the underworld filth. The City Lord merely offered a sinister smile, whispering that for his sake, it had better be a lie. He cryptically told Dong Hao to check the latest broadcasts before turning his back. Back in the safety of his lavish office, the screen flared to life. A furious call immediately connected to Shi Hao. Dong Hao's voice dripped with venom. He barked that usually he was perfectly willing to turn a blind eye to the filthy underworld deals Shi Hao ran with those thugs. But the breaking news was flashing a catastrophic blunder. The notorious Black Panther gang had actually dared to target the heavens, attempting to abduct the sole heir of the almighty Qin group. While the Golden Child had been pulled from the jaws of death, the gang's boss and his elite enforcers had vanished into the city's underbelly, hunted like rabid dogs. Through clenched teeth, Dong Hao prayed to the heavens that Shi Hao's hands were clean of this suicidal operation. Playing the loyal subordinate, Shi Hao smoothly lied through his teeth, swearing he would never ignite such a war without absolute permission. The command was absolute. Dong Hao ordered him to crawl on his hands and knees to the Qin family, begging for mercy even if he had to shatter his own pride. He demanded that every single tie to that cursed gang be severed immediately, or he would personally throw Shi Hao to the wolves. Shi Hao gave a submissive yes. But the moment the line went dead, his facade shattered. Uncontrollable rage twisted his face as he cursed that useless, brainless animal. Bow. Later that afternoon, the sterile scent of the hospital greeted Qin and Ye. Anxiety clouded Qin's beautiful features, but Ye remained a mountain of calm, gently promising her that the medical elite were fighting relentlessly to save their friend. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as Shi Hao stepped into the ward. He immediately put on an award-winning performance, sighing in dramatic relief at seeing the young miss completely unharmed. He feigned absolute shock, claiming he could not believe that Garbage Bao would dare to touch a hair on her head. He sneered that the thug had clearly grown tired of breathing. Ye's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing through the corporate snake's lies. With a tone colder than absolute zero, he questioned if Shi Hao was truly claiming total innocence in this bloodbath. Without missing a beat, Shi Hao wore a mask of supreme confidence. He shamelessly insisted their connection was nothing more than temporary corporate transactions. He even swore on his honor that the NG group was completely cutting off the rot. He generously offered their vast resources to hunt down every last rat from the gang and drag them into the light. But Ye saw right through the illusion. A mocking smirk tugged at his lips as he asked the million-dollar question. Were they truly seeking redemption, or simply chopping off a diseased limb to protect the rotting heart of their empire? The mask slipped. Shi Hao's voice dropped to a dangerous, venomous whisper, demanding the arrogant punk to shut his mouth. He coldly reminded Ye that the fortune he plundered from the Panthers was enough to live like a king for 10 lifetimes. Did this insignificant bug really want to wage an unwinnable war against a titan? Ye's aura erupted, suffocating the room. He whispered that those stolen treasures were merely the starting interest. The ultimate debt he came to collect was Shi Hao's miserable life. Cornered, Shi Hao turned his threatening gaze to Qin, questioning if her mighty family shared this suicidal vendetta. A breathtaking yet terrifying smile bloomed on her face as she sweetly challenged him to take a wild guess. Realizing diplomacy was dead, Shi Hao declared this conversation over. He flexed his invincible corporate shield, mocking them that without concrete evidence, tearing down a core pillar of the NG group was nothing but a pipe dream. Ye's final words struck like a death sentence. He warned the executive to pray to whatever gods he believed in that Bao's crew stayed buried, because the moment they surfaced, his glittering empire would crumble into ash. Pushed to the brink of madness, Shi Hao dialed a heavily encrypted number. His command to the hidden laboratory was utterly demonic. Inject every surviving rat from the Black Panther gang with the forbidden serum known as God's blood. Deep within an underground nightmare facility, the battered thugs were violently strapped to reinforced steel tables, completely at the mercy of sadistic scientists in hazmat suits. Following the dark order, the head researcher raised a terrifying syringe glowing with an unnatural light. Panic shattered the captive's mind, and he screamed desperately about his high rank in the underworld, begging for mercy. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The needle plunged deep into his flesh, forcing the forbidden liquid into his bloodstream. In a split second, his pupils vanished, replaced by pure crimson madness as his veins mutated like thick black serpents. Agonizing, soul-tearing shrieks echoed through the chamber. The sheer explosive force of his mutating muscles violently snapped the heavy steel restraints right off the table. A chorus of monstrous roars shook the very foundations of the lab. The gang members had completely lost their humanity, twisting into bloodthirsty abominations straight out of a survival horror game. Back in his luxury car, a sinister confirmation pinged on Shi Hao's phone. A twisted, psychotic grin stretched across his face as he imagined the blood-soaked headlines waiting for tomorrow's dawn. He could already see the breaking news. Foolish, arrogant youth brutally slaughtered in an apocalyptic act of underworld vengeance. Or perhaps something even darker. Mutated syndicate monsters tear the city apart in a drug-fueled frenzy. The stage is set for an epic massacre. Thank you all so much for tuning into this legendary recap. Do not forget to click on the next video to witness some absolute apex predator moments, and I will catch you in the next epic chapter. Level up your status and support our journey by joining the Elite Summon Club membership. You can also fuel our unstoppable momentum simply by smashing that like button and staying absolutely legendary.